Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I have decided to create a collection of fanfiction novels in audiobook format. If you would like to access the collection, you can purchase it through one of the following platforms. Patreon or Ko-Fi. You will find both links in the description. After completing your payment, you will automatically receive a link to a private Telegram channel that has a great collection of fanfiction audiobooks in audio format. This is a one-time payment that grants lifetime access to the existing collection. Please note that the collection is continuously expanding. I regularly add new audiobooks over time, so the library keeps growing. If you would like to update a novel or add a new one, you must subscribe to my Patreon. Depending on the tier you select, you will be able to request a specific number of chapters weekly, which I will then produce in audiobook format.
1. Chapter 1. Ethan Corvin. The grand hall of the Corvin estate had a way of making people feel small. Maybe it was the high, echoing ceilings or the chandeliers that glittered like frozen lightning. Maybe it was the old family portraits lining the walls, each one painted with the kind of calm, predatory stare only vampires could pull off. The scent of the place was just as distinct: polished wood, cold marble, and that faint metallic note every vampire household carried, as if the walls themselves remembered blood. Two figures sat opposite each other on antique sofas. On one side lounged Ethan Corvin, 18, ash-brown hair falling in careless strands over the crimson eyes that marked his lineage. Handsome in an infuriating, effortless way and fully aware of it, wore an expensive coat tailored. The illusion of aristocratic refinement would have been perfect, if not for the can of Coke in his hand. On the other sofa sat Principal Larissa Weems' impeccable posture, immaculate suit. Ethan took a long sip of his drink. Principal Weems, you do know I'm rich as hell, right? I don't exactly need to attend school. Weems folded her hands neatly in her lap. Of course, as a pureblood vampire from one of the oldest lineages, your status is unquestioned. Good. Ethan lifted the Coke like toast. However, Weems continued, voice smooth as polished glass, you are also the last living descendant of the Corvin family. No parents, no siblings, no extended relatives, completely alone. She paused, then added delicately, attending Nevermore would provide you with certain opportunities. Ethan paused mid-sip. She continued, unfazed. Opportunities to extend your family line. Ethan inhaled sharply. Wrong pipe, wrong moment. He choked, violently, twice, then descended into a coughing fit that echoed off the marble like he was being exorcised. Slamming the can onto the table, he glared at her. Excuse me, what opportunities? Finding a suitable match, she said, as serenely as if discussing weather. Continuing the Corvin bloodline, perhaps even discovering a lovely girlfriend. You are, after all, still in the spring of youth. Ethan stared at her blankly. Are you sure that's something a principal should say? Ordinarily, no, Weems replied without the faintest hint of shame. But the Corvin family has been a major financial supporter of Nevermore Academy for generations. Losing that sponsorship would be inconvenient. Ethan blinked. So your plan is to send me to school and hope I fall in love? That's your strategy. Weems' smile was elegant, diplomatic and deeply terrifying. My strategy, Mr. Corvin, is to give you options. And yes, that is one of them. Ethan dragged a hand down his face. Unbelievable. I'm being sent to school for romance. You're being encouraged to broaden your horizons, she corrected gently. And if romance happens to fall within those horizons, destiny has its own way of guiding such things. He didn't need telepathy to understand the unspoken terms. Attend Nevermore, and the Corvin sponsorship remains untouched. Refuse, and she fully expected him to withdraw it. The implication hung between them like a silent contract. Ethan exhaled. Fine, I'll attend. A ghost of satisfaction flickered in Weems' eyes. Excellent. I'll arrange the admission paperwork and have your uniform delivered to the estate. About the uniform, Nevermore's colors are purple, right? Yes, Weems said, tilting her head slightly. Why? I prefer black, he replied. If possible, I want the uniform completely black. She considered the request for all of 2 seconds. Given your family's history with the academy, that can be arranged. Ethan nodded in acknowledgement. With nothing more to add, Weems offered him a polite smile and headed toward the exit of the hall. As Principal Weems left the hall, Ethan exhaled slowly and slumped back onto the sofa. The chandelier above him cast a soft glow across the room, but he barely noticed it. His mind was already racing ahead. Nevermore, here I come, he murmured. A small smile tugged at his lips. Despite the absurdity of everything that had led him here, the idea of stepping into Nevermore Academy still filled him with a sharp, boyish excitement. He would meet Wednesday, Enid, the entire cast of characters he had watched on a screen his whole life. Except now he wasn't a viewer anymore. He was part of their world. The thought felt unreal even now. After all, only a month ago he was an ordinary boy on Earth, worrying about grades, deadlines, and whether he could scrape together enough money for new headphones. Then, without warning, he woke up in a coffin-sized bed inside a lavish mansion, surrounded by velvet walls and the overwhelming scent of old stone. It didn't take him long to realize the truth. He had transmigrated, just like every cliché novel he'd ever read, and not into just any world, but into the universe of the Netflix Wednesday series, a world he knew like the back of his hand. Except the person he became wasn't familiar at all. His race had changed first. His body wasn't human anymore, far from it. He had become a vampire, but not one of the watered-down, TV-friendly ones from the show. He was something far beyond that, a pure-blood vampire. Stronger, faster, sharper. He could lift tons without effort and heal from wounds in seconds. Sunlight didn't so much as warm him differently. And with the new body came a new identity, a perfectly constructed one. He was now the last living descendant of the Corvin family, one of the richest and most influential vampire lineages in existence. Their estate, their legacy, their expectations, all of it had landed squarely on his shoulders. And like every other poor soul who got ice-kite in novels, he had a system. Except his system was strange. All it ever gave him was its name, Dimensional Vampire System, nothing more. There were no quests, no tutorials, no explanations, and absolutely no guidance. Even so, he was convinced it was responsible for everything that had happened to him, the transmigration, the new race, and even the identity he was supposed to take on in this world. From the very first day, the system displayed a single message: go to Nevermore. It never changed, never clarified, and never spoke again. He often wished it would tell him why, what would happen once he got there, or what it expected from him. But if Nevermore was where everything started, then he had no choice. He'd go and he'd find out. A/N. If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to add it to your library and follow for more chapters. 2. Chapter 2, Wednesday and Enid. So this is the famous Nevermore Academy, Ethan murmured, stopping just outside the wrought iron gates. The academy loomed before him like a gothic mansion dragged straight out of a ghost story, sharp spires, dark stone, and windows that seemed to watch him back. He let out a low whistle. Yeah, this place definitely has a creepy vibe. Master Ethan, should I help you with your luggage? Mike asked, lowering the trunk and lifting two of the heavier bags with practiced care. Ethan took them with one hand, barely feeling the weight. No need, Uncle Mike. I've got it. Mike hesitated, still gripping the last duffel bag. At least let me. Really, Ethan said with a small smile. I can handle the rest. Reluctantly, Mike surrendered the final bag. He lingered a moment, looking like he had more to say, so Ethan made it easier for him. And don't forget, Ethan added quietly, bring my bike tomorrow morning. That did it. Mike blinked. Your bike? Master Ethan, I'm not sure the school will allow something like that. His tone wasn't defiant, just worried. The Corvin estate paid him far better than any job he'd ever imagined, and Ethan treated him like family. If Ethan asked for something, Mike made it happen even when it meant bending rules until they cracked. Ethan shrugged, utterly unbothered. Who said we're asking for permission? Mike stared at him. Just drop it off somewhere near the school grounds and text me the location, Ethan continued casually. I'll take care of the rest. A long, defeated sigh escaped the driver. As you wish, Master Ethan. He bowed, slipped back into the car, and pulled away from the gates, leaving Ethan alone with his luggage and the towering silhouette of Nevermore Academy rising like a castle behind him. Ethan grabbed his bags, dragged the trolley behind him, and stepped into the courtyard, and froze. Someone unexpected stood just inside the archway. A girl with braided black hair, pale as moonlight, wrapped in her iconic monochrome wardrobe, as if even color bowed out of her presence, holding a box against her chest. No way. Wednesday Addams. Up close, she looked exactly like she did in the show, razor sharp eyes colder than January, posture stiff with disdain, aura radiating approach me and die. She looked like a black and white drawing dropped into a world of color, refusing to blend in. As if sensing the thought, or more likely the starry hair eyes shifted toward him with slow, surgical precision. Their gazes met. Wednesday spoke in the same flat, emotionless tone he remembered. I dissect things that stare at me without permission. She didn't wait for a reaction. She simply adjusted the box, stepped past him, and walked away like she hadn't just casually threatened his life. Ethan blinked. Yeah. Definitely Wednesday. No one else could say something that insane with a perfectly straight face. Not exactly the first meeting he'd expected on day one. If Wednesday Addams had already appeared, then the plot had officially started. Shaking off the moment, Ethan continued deeper into the academy. Stone corridors stretched endlessly around him, arched ceilings, twisting staircases, and not a single sign pointing to the principal's office. Great, he muttered. I have no idea where I'm supposed to go. Students filled the hall, chatting in lively clusters. After a moment, he spotted 3 girls gathered near a bulletin board. Good enough. He walked over and tapped one gently on the shoulder. Instant silence. The 2 girls facing her froze mid-sentence. Their eyes widened. Hands flew to cover their mouths as if they'd just seen a divine being descend from the heavens. Excuse me, Ethan tried. Do you know where the principal's office is? The girl he tapped turned around, and Ethan blinked. Enid, of all people. Bright-eyed, energetic, radiating color like she was allergic to anything gloomy. Her jaw dropped in surprise. And maybe something else. Her gaze traveled across his face, widening by the second. Yep. The vampiric charm is definitely working. Hi, he said again. Principal's office. I'll show him. Enid burst out instantly. No, I will. One of the girls snapped. Why should you? I saw him first. I saw him first. Within seconds, the 2 were arguing, inching closer like an actual brawl was seconds away. Ethan stared. Well, this is unexpected. I guess girls going through puberty aren't exactly resistant to a handsome face. Girls, behave, Enid said sharply, stepping between them before claws came out. Both fell silent. Then she turned back to Ethan with a sunny, slightly flustered smile. I'll take you to the principal's office. Without waiting for him to answer, she began walking, leaving the other 2 girls frozen in what looked like heartbreak, as if they'd just lost the jackpot prize. Ethan sighed inwardly and dragged his suitcase along. First Wednesday, now Enid. This world wasn't wasting any time, huh? A/N. If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to add it to your library and follow for more chapters. 3. Chapter 3, Attraction. Enid walked ahead with her usual light, bouncy stride, almost a hop, really glancing over her shoulder every few steps as if to confirm Ethan hadn't vanished into the floorboards. At Nevermore, that was always a possibility. "So, you're new?" she asked, smile wide and warm. "Like you arrived today new?" "Yeah," Ethan said. "Just got here." "Nice. Welcome to Nevermore." She threw her arms out theatrically. "It looks terrifying at first, but once you get used to it it's only mildly terrifying." They passed beneath a row of stained glass windows depicting Nevermore ravens in flight. Sunlight filtered through in sharp blues and reds, painting shifting patterns across the hallway like moving sigils. Ethan adjusted the strap of his bag. "I wasn't expecting the place to look this accurate." "Accurate to what?" Enid asked, eyebrows lifting curiously. Just pictures I saw online," he said smoothly. "Oh," Enid nodded. "Yeah, online photos make the school look super creepy, but honestly, it's not that bad. Unless you run into someone brooding in a dark corner. We have a few professional brooders around here." They turned into another corridor, this one dominated by portraits whose eyes followed them with lifelike focus. One painting of Edgar Allan Poe seemed particularly judgmental today. Nevermore was nothing if not dramatic. Enid bounded up a short staircase, taking the last 2 steps in a single energetic hop. Ethan followed at a much more human pace. "So what are you?" she asked abruptly, then immediately cringed. "I mean your classification? Species? If that's okay. Most people get asked eventually, so I figured I'd save you the awkward moment." "Vampire," Ethan said. Enid blinked. "Oh, cool. Neat. But, why aren't you wearing sunglasses?" It was a reasonable question. In Nevermore Academy, vampires were easy to spot, all black clothing, the occasional fong flash, and sunglasses, always sunglasses. The halls were full of them, like a convention of fashion models who refused eye contact. Even indoors, even during Dracula-themed school events, the shades stayed on. Unlike Hollywood's dramatic combustions, real vampires didn't burst into flames under the sun, but their eyes were so sensitive that exposed irises usually meant they'd be blind for a week. So seeing a vampire walking casually through daylight with bare eyes, almost unheard of. "Nah, I don't need those. I'm fine as is," Ethan said. Honestly, sunglasses indoors were for pretentious people or patients with eye problems. He was neither. So no glasses. Enid opened her mouth as if to question that, but decided to trust the confident vampire instead. They walked only a few more steps before she suddenly gasped, clutching her chest dramatically. "Oh my gosh, I totally forgot to ask your name. That's, like, day one basic manners. Sorry." "Ethan," he said. "Enid," she replied with a bright smile, offering a little wave even though she was already walking beside him. "Nice to officially meet you." Before he could answer, she'd already launched into rapid-fire mode, the speed of someone who drank iced coffee instead of water. "So, do you have Snapchat, TikTok, Insta? Because if you don't, I can help set it up. We can swap usernames, and I can introduce you to people here." And she looked seconds away from physically grabbing his hand and forcing him to install 5 apps on the spot. "But, Enid." Principal Weem's voice sliced cleanly through the corridor like a perfectly sharpened knife. Both of them turned. Weem stood a few steps away, posture perfect, expression composed as always. "I'll take it from here. You may return to class, it's almost time." Enid deflated instantly. Seriously? She'd clearly been seconds away from securing his entire social media profile. In a school filled with brooding werewolves, eccentric psychics, sirens with superiority complexes, and general chaos gremlins, finding a handsome normalish guy was basically a cosmic blessing, and she had almost lost her chance. Ethan offered her a polite nod. "Thanks for guiding me." Enid managed a small, reluctant smile. "Yeah, any time." Then she turned and jogged back down the hall, glancing over her shoulder twice, maybe 3 times before disappearing around the corner. Weems motioned for Ethan to follow and pushed open her office door. "Please, have a seat," she said, moving behind her desk. Ethan sat on the chair opposite her, placing his bag quietly at his feet. Weems folded her hands, expression composed. "Now then, Mr. Corvin, your enrollment may be unique, but your responsibilities as a student remain the same." Here it comes, Ethan thought. She began listing the standard school rules: attendance expectations, curfew, uniform requirements, safety guidelines regarding outcast abilities, and the ever-popular no dueling in school corridors. He listened quietly, already knowing he'd break at least 3 of those rules within the first week. "We also expect respectful conduct toward staff and fellow students," she continued. "Nevermore is a place for growth, not conflict." Ethan nodded. "I understand." "Good." She opened a drawer and pulled out a file. "Now, regarding your accommodations." She handed him a slip of paper with a room number neatly written on it. "You've been assigned to Caliban Hall. It's one of the more stable dormitories, quiet, well-maintained." He pocketed the slip. "Any roommates?" "No. Given your status and your particular circumstances, you'll have a room to yourself." "Perfect. If you need assistance settling in, the resident advisor for Caliban Hall can help." Ethan stood as Weems rose from her chair. "Thank you, Principal." She nodded approvingly. "Welcome to Nevermore, Mr. Corvin. I trust you'll make your mark here, hopefully for the right reasons." He gave a faint smirk. "No promises." For the first time, she actually looked amused. "You may go. Classes begin tomorrow. I suggest you use today to get familiar with the campus." Ethan stepped out of the office, the door clicking shut behind him. Chapter 4, System. Ethan reached Caliban Hall and found his room without much trouble. The door creaked softly as he pushed it open, revealing a space larger than he'd expected. Beds, 2 wardrobes, and tall windows that spilled warm afternoon light across polished wooden floors. Not nearly as lavish as the bedroom in his mansion, but neat, functional, and surprisingly comfortable. He dropped his bags with a soft thud and let himself fall backward onto one of the beds. First day and I've already met 2 main characters, he muttered to the ceiling. My luck's not bad. For a moment, he simply lay there, letting the adrenaline of the morning drain out. Now that the noise had quieted, a familiar itch tugged at the back of his mind. Curiosity. Right. He was here now. At Nevermore Academic, exact place the system had hinted about. So would it finally do something? Ethan exhaled and willed the menu open. Text flickered to life before his eyes, crisp, clean, and finally different. Arrived at the dimensional point. System functions unlocked. Status screen unlocked. System shop unlocked. Recycle unlocked. Dimensional travel unlocks in 3 months. Ethan sat up a little. Whoa, that's a lot at once. He tapped the first option. Status. Name Ethan Corvin. Age 18. Race pureblood vampire. Evolution possible. Physical parameters. Punch force 50 tons. Speed 300 kilometers per hour. Durability, skin can withstand small caliber bullets. Stamina unmatched. Regeneration. Minor injuries heal instantly. Major injuries take time. Partial immortality, cannot die as long as body remains intact. Weaknesses none. Blood points none. Obtained by recycling unique items. Ethan stared at the data for a long moment. Yeah, okay, that's insanely broken. Strong, fast, no sunlight weakness, no natural drawbacks, and apparently capable of evolving even further. Ethan let out a soft laugh, running a hand through his hair. Well, I can actually beat Captain America now, he muttered. I could say I can do this all day and actually mean it. The thought alone made him grin. His eyes drifted to the last unlocked function. Dimensional travel. Is that what I think it is? Dimensional travel. The words hit him like a jolt. If he was right, then once that timer ended, he could travel to other worlds, other universes, other fictional realities, games, anime, movies, anything might be fair game. But for now, the text remained gray and locked. 3 months, he murmured. Guess I'll revisit that later. Next, he opened the system shop, and rows of items materialized, some weak, some absurdly powerful. Artifacts, weapons, bloodlines, abilities, skills, many of them unmistakably pulled from other worlds. He scrolled further, curiosity growing. And then he froze. One item stood out, glowing faintly with crimson light. Vampire progenitor blood. Description. Telekinesis. Mind reading. Blood energy manipulation. High-tier charming ability. Significant overall physical enhancement. Ethan's eyes widened. Okay, that's insane. A single vial of blood that could turn him into something even stronger than a pure blood vampire. It felt like a cheat code on top of a cheat code, but below the description was the cost. Price, 50,000 blood points. His smile died instantly. Wow, okay, never mind. I guess I'm broke. He flicked open the recycling tab. Right, blood points were earned by recycling unique items. Rare things, special things, meaning it wouldn't be easy. He closed the screen with a sigh and fell back onto the bed, staring at the ceiling. Dimensional travel in 3 months, Ethan said quietly. Progenitor blood in probably 3 lifetimes. He took a slow breath and reopened the interface, scanning each newly unlocked function carefully. Status screen, shop, recycle. All active, all stable. But something wasn't right. One feature he expected to see was missing entirely. Where's the inventory? He muttered. He tried the command again, focusing on the empty space where the tab should have appeared. Nothing changed. No response. No locked tab. No grayed out icon. It simply wasn't there. Ethan's brows drew together. Will it unlock later? He wondered. Or is it something I'm supposed to earn? With how unusual his system behaved, skipping features or presenting them out of order didn't seem impossible. He closed the menu, thoughtful. So the system isn't following the standard structure after all, he murmured. I'll just have to adapt. For now, it seemed he would be working without one of the most basic conveniences. Inconvenient, yes, but manageable. He could work around it. Chapter 5, Suspicion. The next day, Ethan did not attend a single class. Why would he? In his first life, he'd already survived university and was a heartbeat away from graduation. Going back to high school felt like being asked to repeat kindergarten. Besides, he was rich. Painfully rich. The kind of rich that made attendance feel more like a suggestion than a requirement. So instead of sitting through lectures he already understood, he decided to slack off. Now he sat in the Quathe heart of Nevermore Academy. Just like in the Wednesday series, it was a wide stone courtyard ringed by Gothic walkways and shadowed walls. In the center, the fountain bubbled around a large, bleached tree that had long since surrendered to death. At the edge stood the statue of Edgar Allan Poe, eternally watching over the chaos of teenage outcasts. Ethan lounged on a bench, unbothered by the passing students. Eating a sandwich like this was his natural habitat. Unlike the rest of the students wrapped in Nevermore's usual black and purple uniforms, Ethan wore an all-black version of purple, just clean lines and expensive fabric. It stood out immediately. So did he. Crimson eyes, sharp features, that effortless kind of handsome students tried, and failed, not to stare as he sat in the quad eating his sandwich like someone who belonged there and nowhere at the same time. A bright hand suddenly clapped down on his shoulder. Howdy, Ethan. He glanced up to see Enid practically radiating sunshine, her smile bright enough to be its own weather pattern. Right behind her was Wednesday Addams monochrome, silent, and carrying an aura so cold it could cancel Enid out on contact. You know, Ethan said casually, watching you two together feels like watching two generations black and white in color. Enid gasped, delighted. Oh my god, that is so accurate. We're like a living aesthetic palette. She twirled a strand of her hair. Do I give pastel rainbow energy? Because I totally feel like pastel rainbow energy. Wednesday's gaze flicked from Ethan to Enid. If this is a palette, I am the void, she said, voice flat. And he's implying you're bright enough to blind the weak-willed. Enid only smiled wider compliments, even accidental ones, were still compliments to her. Ethan tilted his head. Enid, who might this be? Enid perked up. Oh, right, this is my roommate, Wednesday. She gestured like she was presenting a very pretty but very dangerous knife. Oh, your name is Wednesday, Ethan said, offering his hand politely. Pleased to meet you. Wednesday looked at the extended hand the same way one might examine a suspiciously ticking package. I don't shake hands with strangers, Wednesday said, her voice cool and precise. Especially not with handsome ones. They're usually the ones hiding the most disturbing secrets. Ethan blinked. Oh, thanks for that, I guess. That wasn't a compliment, Wednesday replied without missing a beat. Don't flatter yourself. Before Ethan could respond, Enid practically bounced. Anyway, Ethan, can you, share your socials? TikTok, Insta, Facebook, literally anything works. Ethan gave a small apologetic shrug. Sorry, I don't really do social media. I'm more of a free bird, but you can have my number. Message me anytime. Enid's eyes sparkled. Jackpot. She grabbed his phone with practiced speed, typed her number in, then gave a quick missed call to her own. Wednesday watched the exchange like someone observing a lab experimentoni destined to fail. To her, social media was an open grave people willingly leapt into, shouting their meaningless thoughts into the void as if anyone cared. A cemetery of the intellectually deceased. Then her eyes narrowed slightly. Are your eyes natural, or is it some desperate attempt at attention-seeking? Contacts? A delusion? A medical condition? They're natural, Ethan said. Pure-blood vampire. Wednesday studied him for another second, as if cross-referencing him with every suspicious profile she'd ever filed away. Before she could say more, Ethan's phone buzzed a message from Uncle Mike. Bike hidden. Sending location. Ethan stood up. All right, girls. I need to go. See you around. He walked off, leaving the two behind. Enid watched him go, chewing her lip thoughtfully. Still Ethan's kinda mysterious. Wednesday turned slightly. Amuse me. How so? I tried looking him up on Insta, Facebook, Twitter, nothing. Enid said, tugging her sleeves. Even a total social outcast like you had something online before, nevermore. But him? Zero. It's like he didn't exist before this week. Wednesday's expression didn't change, but something sharpened in her eyes. And people are saying Principal Weems personally invited him, Enid added. Don't you think that's, suspicious? Wednesday's gaze drifted to where Ethan disappeared. Her mind was already categorizing him features, behavior, inconsistencies. Her internal verdict shifted. From pretty face to active investigation. Yes indeed, said Wednesday. Chapter 6, Sheriff. Ethan followed the pin on his map until the trees thickened and the sounds of the academy faded into quiet. A narrow stretch of dirt opened up into a small clearing and there it was. A BMW R1250 GS Adventure. Black. Heavy. Built like it could ram through a small building and keep going. Good job, Uncle Mark, Ethan muttered with a grin. He walked around the bike once, appreciating the shape, the weight distribution, the way it looked perfectly out of place among moss and twisted roots. Adventure class. All-terrain. The kind of machine that begged for bad decisions and worse roads. He swung a leg over the seat, settling in. His hand slid beneath the handlebar until his fingers brushed against cold metal key. He pulled it free, fitted it into the ignition, and twisted. The engine growled to life, deep and smooth, vibrating through the frame. Perfect. He grabbed the matte black helmet hanging from the handlebar, slipping it on with practiced ease. The visor clicked shut. Ethan revved the accelerator once sharp, controlled. The bike responded immediately. With a soft grin, he kicked the stand up. Then, with a clean roll of his wrist, the BMW lunged forward, the back tire kicking up dust as he shot between the trees fast, silent, and already disappearing into the woods. The narrow forest road opened up into asphalt, and Ethan let the BMW stretch its legs. The engine purred under him as the needle crept past 80, 90, 100. Technically, the speed limit here was 60. Seriously, don't try this in the real world. Follow traffic rules unless you're a vampire with super healing, and even then, maybe don't. Not that it mattered to him. The wind whipped past his helmet as trees and road signs blurred into streaks of color. Jericho was still a few minutes away, quiet little town, normal by day, strange by association. He leaned forward slightly, preparing to push the bike a bit more. Whoop whoop. A sharp siren cut through the wind. Ethan glanced at the mirror. A police cruiser was behind him, lights flashing, the engine clearly struggling to keep up with the BMW. Well, that didn't take long. Ethan sighed and eased off the throttle. The bike slowed smoothly until he rolled to a stop on the gravel shoulder. The forest around him fell silent except for the fading echo of the siren. The cruiser pulled in behind him, lights still painting the trees red and blue. The driver's door opened, and out stepped the sheriff. Sheriff Donovan Galpin himself. Ethan watched him approach, removing his helmet slowly. Galpin stopped a few feet away, hand resting on his belt, gaze firm. "Son," he said, voice steady but clearly annoyed, "do you have any idea how fast you were going on this road?" Ethan gave him a polite, harmless smile. "Fast enough to get your attention, I guess." Galpin didn't smile. "All right, let's start simple," he said. "How old are you, son?" 18. A small muscle twitched in the sheriff's jaw. "Do you have a driver's license?" "Nope." No guilt, no hesitation, not even the courtesy of looking embarrassed. Just a flat, almost cheerful nope. Galpin slowly exhaled through his nose. "Let me get this straight," he said, voice tightening. "You're going over 100 on a mountain road in a bike you clearly shouldn't even be operating on. You don't have a license." Ethan shrugged lightly. "I mean technically, yes." Galpin closed his eyes for a moment, visibly wrestling down the urge to lecture him for an hour straight. When he opened them again, his expression had hardened into something colder. "You a student from Nevermore?" he asked, eyes flicking to Ethan's crimson irises and his uniform. "Yep." Galpin didn't hesitate. "Then you're under arrest." He said it with the tone of a man who'd made up his mind before the conversation even started. Ethan blinked. You can't." "Oh, I absolutely can," Galpin snapped. "Reckless driving, no license." "Sheriff," Ethan interrupted calmly, "if you do that, your mayor is going to be very upset with you." Galpin froze mid-sentence. Ethan leaned slightly on the handlebar, voice casual. "Just call him. Tell him you've detained a Corvin. He'll explain everything." The mayor knew him very well. He was one of Jericho's main sponsors. Arresting him would be the same as cutting off the town's development funds, and a small place like Jericho didn't get many to begin with. A flicker of uncertainty crossed the sheriff's face. Still, he stepped back and pulled out his phone. Ethan waited, helmet resting beside him. It didn't take long. Galpin's expression collapsed from irritation to confusion to resignation and then to a very tired kind of anger. He hung up. "You're lucky," he muttered. "Very lucky. But don't let me catch you again." "We'll see," Ethan said, slipping his helmet back on and starting the engine. "Oh, and by the way," he revved the bike once, "say hi to your son for me." Then he shot forward, the bike roaring down the road, vanishing. Galpin stood there, stunned. How the hell does he know about Tyler? He muttered. A cold breeze swept through the road, and for the first time, the sheriff felt a prickling sense of unease about the new student in town. Chapter 7, Little Experiments. He finally reached Jericho and pulled up in front of a small medical shop. The bike's engine rumbled to a stop, the sound fading into the quiet street. This was why he'd come. He needed syringes, preferably a lot of them. He pushed open the glass door, a small bell chiming overhead. Inside, the shop smelled faintly of antiseptic and old wood. Behind the counter, a bespectacled man glanced up from a newspaper. "Morning," the man said. "You look a little young to be shopping for medicine." "Don't worry," Ethan replied casually. "I'm not here for anything illegal. Just need some syringes." The man blinked. "Syringes? Yeah, for personal research," Ethan added before the man could start imagining anything dramatic. "Right." The man studied him, then sighed and stepped away from the counter. "What size?" 5 milliliter. Disposable. A box. The man returned with the box, still eyeing him like he expected Ethan to suddenly confess to being a runaway doctor. "That'll be $22. Ethan slid the cash across the counter. "Kid," the man said as he bagged the purchase, "if you're doing drugs." "I'm not," Ethan cut in, deadpan. "Trust me, my blood's already weird enough." The man decided not to question that. Ethan left the shop, bag in hand, and walked back to his bike. As he rested the bag in the compartment, his mind churned. His system had a simple instruction: recycle unique things to earn blood points. Naturally, the first idea that came to him was the most accessible one: at his own blood. Vampire blood was rare, potent. If the system recognized it as unique, he could farm blood points without risking anything too dangerous. If that worked, then he could experiment with other sources. Hide blood, fresh and chaotic. Siren blood. Werewolf blood. The outcast world was practically a buffet of biological oddities. And he was a vampire. Collecting blood wasn't strange for him, it was practically practical. Ethan leaned on his bike, opening the box to check the syringes. "All right," he muttered. "Let's see if the system likes gourmet vampire grade." Before he could mount the bike, a voice called out, "Hey, you there." Ethan turned. An older woman, carrying grocery bags, narrowed her eyes at him. "Those red eyes of yours and that uniform, are you Nevermore student?" "Yep," Ethan said, slipping the box deeper into the compartment. "No point raising questions. Humph, just don't cause trouble in town. We've already got enough chaos with those kids running around." "I'll try to be disappointingly boring," he replied. The woman snorted and marched off with her groceries. Ethan watched her go, then muttered under his breath, "Can't believe even in this world they have Karens." He swung a leg over his bike, shaking his head. Multiverse confirmed, Karens are a constant. Ethan paused mid-motion, helmet halfway lifted. Across the street, carrying a box of supplies, was Tyler Galpin, a perfectly ordinary small-town boy to anyone else. To Ethan, a walking reservoir of Hyde blood packaged in a friendly smile and unresolved mommy issues. A slow grin spread across Ethan's face. "Tyler Galpin," he murmured. "Time for some voluntary blood donation." His eyes glowed faintly red, not enough to attract attention, but enough to show what mood he was in. The timing couldn't have been better. He'd been just about to test whether recycled vampire blood gave him points, and here fate rolled up with a Hyde, tied with a bow. Ethan wasn't sure if there was a god in this world, but if there was, the guy clearly took requests. "God send opportunities," he said softly, "should never be wasted." He slid off the bike, the syringe held casually between his fingers like it was nothing more than a pen. Tyler hadn't noticed him yet, too focused on hauling boxes inside. Normal. Harmless. Sweet even. If only people knew what snarled under that skin. Before the thought had even fully settled, Ethan moved. To any normal human eye, it was nothing more than a blurred shadow cutting across the street. A gust of displaced air. A flicker in peripheral vision. But to him, it was just walking at 300 kilometers per hour. 1 second he was standing 20 steps away from Tyler. The next, he was behind him. 2 fingers struck the precise spot at the base of Tyler's neck, a pressure point that momentarily starved the brain of blood. Humans knew it as a martial arts trick. Vampires knew it as something older, faster, and infinitely more effective. Tyler's breath hitched. His knees buckled. He collapsed without even getting a sound out. Ethan caught him effortlessly, one arm slipping around his chest before the body could even tilt forward. "Nighty-night, little hide," he murmured, amused. Without hesitation, he vanished into the nearest alleyway, just a whisper of movement. Chapter 8, Blood Points. Ethan rolled up Tyler's sleeve and tapped the underside of his arm. The veins rose instantly. Vampire eyesight made them glow like thin blue cords under the skin. Easy. He slid the needle in with surprising precision for someone who had never done this before. Dark, volatile hide blood filled the syringe in seconds. He pulled it free, capped it, and tucked it into his jacket. "Honestly, not bad for my first time," he muttered. "I'd make a decent nurse. A terrifying one, but still." He glanced down at Tyler's unconscious face. The boy who would go on to kill people. The boy who would terrorize half the woods. The boy who nearly murdered Wednesday Addams. And by season 2, he'd become something far worse. If anyone deserved to die early, it was him. Ethan crouched, studying Tyler like someone evaluating a broken machine. "Should I kill you?" he mused aloud. The thought didn't disturb him. He'd adapted fast. This world was anything but peaceful. Monsters didn't receive redemption arcs, they got hunted, used, or wiped out. He'd just have to accept that rhythm. Killing Tyler would prevent a dozen future headaches. Maybe 100. But another thought surfaced. Joseph Crackstone, a resurrected lunatic with glowing magical weaponry and enough hatred for outcasts to sterilize a continent. That thing would be worth a fortune in blood points if recycled properly. "If I start killing now," Ethan murmured, "I should at least start with someone profitable." He slid the syringe into his inner pocket and glanced down at Tyler's limp form. Dangerous, unstable, and now inconveniently alive. "Lucky you," Ethan said dryly. "I still need you." If he killed Tyler now, Crackstone would never be resurrected and he would lose a mountain of potential profit. As much as Tyler deserved an early death, keeping him alive was simply better business. He turned to leave, boots scraping softly against the alley's concrete. "But," he added over his shoulder, "now that you've caught my eye, living won't be easy for you from now on." A faint smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. Tyler didn't hear it, but if he had, he would have known a new predator had officially entered his life. Ethan stepped out of the alley, brushing dust from his jacket like he'd merely finished a casual errand. Tyler's unconscious form remained hidden in the shadows behind him. Jericho's problem, not his. He returned to his bike. He pulled the syringe from his pocket and held it up, watching the dark hide blood swirl inside like a living storm. How do I recycle this thing?" he muttered. "Do I just feed it to the system? Tap it? Throw it at the ground?" He sighed. Why can't systems come with manuals? He pulled up the system panel instead. The translucent interface shimmered in the air like digital smoke. "Recycle." The tab blinked, waiting. He tapped it, and immediately a long list appeared. Everything he owned, everything he touched, even his clothes, his helmet, his bike. "Yeah, let's not accidentally recycle my entire wardrobe," Ethan murmured, scrolling past. Finally, the item he wanted. Hide blood, unique variant. "Would you like to recycle?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "Yes." The syringe dissolved into particles of light, gone, as if it never existed. A soft chime followed. 1,000 blood points earned. Ethan blinked. 1,000. A slow grin spread across his face. "As expected of a top predator in the outcast world," he said, pocketing his hands. "Hide blood is basically premium currency." The number glowed in the corner of the system screen. 1,000 BP. More than he expected. A lot more. If hide blood gave him this much, what would Crackstone give? A resurrected, magical, genocidal war criminal would have to be worth a small fortune. The idea lit a spark of excitement behind his crimson eyes. "Oh, this is going to be fun." He swung onto his bike, settling into the seat. The growl of the engine came alive beneath him, a deep, hungry sound that matched his mood perfectly. He twisted the throttle. The bike roared like a beast unleashed. With a single kick of speed, Ethan shot forward, tearing down Jericho's road with vampiric ease, wind whipping past him. Behind him, Jericho continued its quiet, unsuspecting evening. Ahead, Nevermore Academy waited, storm clouds gathering above its Gothic towers. Chapter 9, How to Make a Class Hate You. The next day. Fencing class. Ethan didn't skip this one. Not because he cared about physical education, he could bench press the entire school if he felt like it, but because fencing was actually interesting, elegant, precise, and, in this particular academy, far more theatrical than in traditional schools. The students were all lined up in the room, dressed in crisp white fencing gear, masks tucked under their arms, silver PES gleaming. Ethan, on the other hand, stood off to the side in his usual all-black uniform, completely unbothered. He watched as two students clashed blades in front of him, metal striking metal, footwork sloppy, form worse. Humans or outcasts, either way, not impressive. The clatter of footsteps behind him made him glance over. Enid and Wednesday walked across the room side by side, perfectly mismatched as always. Enid was in full fencing gear, bouncing with excitement, practically glowing through the mesh of her mask. Wednesday wore her fencing uniform like she planned to duel death itself, poised, composed, and already judging everyone present. Enid spotted Ethan immediately and jogged over. "Oh my god, Ethan, you actually came to fencing class. I thought you were gonna ditch again like yesterday." He shrugged, casual as ever. "This class isn't boring, there's potential for violence. My kind of extracurricular." Wednesday's gaze swept over him like a clinical examination. "Then why aren't you wearing your fencing uniform?" she asked. Her tone was so flat it could have been delivered by a corpse, possibly one she'd made herself. It didn't sound like curiosity, more like interrogation. Ethan smirked. "I have a very good answer for that. Tell me, would you still use training wheels on a bicycle if you already know how to ride?" Enid blinked, tilted her head. Golden Retriever confusion activated. "Okay, but what does that have to do with you not wearing the uniform? Likey at all?" Wednesday didn't blink, but the faintest shift in her expression suggested she actually understood the implication. "You believe yourself above regulation," she said. "How predictable." "No," Ethan replied casually, "I believe I don't need a uniform for kids play like this." His eyes flicked toward the dueling students moving in what felt like slow motion to him. Nothing they did required equipment to block. Enid gasped, tailwag energy collapsing into alarm. "Ethan, that was kinda cocky." Wednesday's face didn't move, but her tone sharpened like a blade being honed. "Overconfidence is a precursor to avoidable injuries." He turned to her, grinning. "Is that concern?" "It's statistical analysis," Wednesday corrected instantly. "If you insist on ignoring safety protocol, I'd prefer to witness the moment your arrogance meets gravity." Enid whisper yelled, "She means she doesn't want you to get hurt." "I absolutely do," Wednesday said. As their conversation continued, it became impossible for anyone in the hall to ignore it. Ethan wasn't exactly whispering, and Enid's frantic attempts to quiet him only made her voice carry farther. Little by little, the background noise of clashing foils and shuffling footwork faded as the rest of the class turned their attention toward the trio. Students stopped mid-step, mid-strike, and mid-argument. Masks were lifted just enough for eyes to peek through the mesh. Several students exchanged uncertain glances, unsure whether they were witnessing unbelievable arrogance or a brewing disaster. Among everyone staring at Ethan, the fencing instructor looked the angriest by far. His expression had tightened into something between disbelief and insult, the kind of look a teacher gives when years of training and discipline are casually dismissed as pointless. And honestly, who wouldn't be irritated? A student walks into your class, ignores the uniform, openly mocks the skill level of everyone present, and intentionally or not implies your teaching is worthless. Anyone in his position would feel their patience evaporate. "So," the instructor asked, staring directly at Ethan, "you think you're better than everyone in this room?" Enid gasped quietly, her hands fluttering like she wanted to physically grab the words out of the air before they caused damage. She opened her mouth to protest to insist Ethan didn't mean it that way, but she didn't get the chance. Because Ethan chose that exact moment to pour gasoline onto the already blazing fire. "No," he corrected, voice calm and maddeningly unbothered. "I don't think I'm better. I am better. No arrogance, just the plain truth." Enid stared at him with wide eyes, silently screaming, "Why would you say that out loud?" Even Wednesday, who rarely reacted to anything short of mortal peril, looked faintly impressed, mostly because she had never seen someone dig their own grave with such efficiency. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. A few students muttered under their breath, while others exchanged looks that promised violence. The instructor's eyes sharpened with the kind of interest teachers get right before they decide to let a cocky student learn the hard way. "Oh," he said, a dangerous edge slipping into his tone. "Then you wouldn't mind proving it by facing our best fencer?" He turned and raised his hand with a smooth, practiced gesture. "Bianca Barkley." Bianca stepped forward, removing her helmet with the controlled confidence of someone used to being the center of attention. Enid leaned toward Ethan and whisper yelled, "Maybe don't do this? Likey, at least try not to make death your first school memory." But Ethan didn't look frightened, not even irritated. He looked conflicted, almost disappointed, like he was being asked to perform a chore. Unfortunately, the room interpreted that hesitation in the worst possible way. "He's scared already. Told you he was all talk. Knew he wouldn't back it up." Smirks spread across masked faces. Students folded their arms, ready to enjoy the show. Bianca twirled her foil with a lazy flourish and raised an eyebrow. "What's wrong?" "Nervous." Ethan exhaled, slow and bored. "No, I'm thinking." The instructor's patience thinned. "Thinking about what?" "About how pointless this is," Ethan replied. His gaze shifted toward Bianca, steady and dismissive. "She's too weak." The reaction was instant. Gasps echoed through the hall. A few students swore under their breath. Even Wednesday blinked switch for her amounted to shouting. Ethan continued, perfectly calm. "She wouldn't last a second against me. If you want someone who could at least touch me, you'd need." He tapped his chin lightly, as if calculating maybe 10 people. Bianca's jaw tightened as she stepped forward, eyes sparking with challenge. "You've got a big mouth. And you've got a short reach," Ethan replied without missing a beat. The instructor pointed toward the centerpiece, expression hardening into something that looked halfway between irritation and anticipation. "If you're so confident, prove it." 10, Chapter 10, Jerk. Enid leaned toward Wednesday, her voice a frantic whisper as she watched Ethan and Bianca face off on the piece. "Wednesday, should we go get Principal Weems? This is getting out of hand. Like really out of hand." Wednesday didn't even glance at her. Her eyes stayed fixed on Ethan, studying him like a scientist observing an unstable specimen. "No," she said. Actions have consequences. He chose his. A small, almost imperceptible curl of satisfaction touched the corner of her mouth. And I'd like to observe the fallout. Enid blinked at her. Fallout? Wednesday AI, he could get seriously hurt. Excellent. Pain builds character. Or eliminates the weak. Either outcome is acceptable. Enid pressed both palms to her cheeks. Do you have even a shred of kindness in your soul? A crumb. A microscopic speck. Kindness is a weakness, Wednesday said, eyes still forward. Her tone was flat, absolute, as if stating a universal scientific law. And I don't indulge in weaknesses. Enid muttered under her breath, remind me never to ask you for emotional support ever again. I would never offer it, Wednesday assured her. On Ethan's side, Bianca stepped onto the piste with practiced ease, rolling her shoulders, confidence radiating off her like perfume. Ethan, meanwhile, stood on the opposite end with his hands in his pockets, not even bothering with a stance. No gear, no mask, no weapon, just him. Bianca narrowed her eyes. She didn't understand where this guy's confidence comes from, but whatever she liked defeating people who thought they were above others. She lived for that sharp sting of humiliation in her opponent's eyes, and this boy was practically begging for it. The other students whispered behind their helmets. He's dead. Bianca's gonna humiliate him. He doesn't even have a sword, what is he doing? Ethan didn't react. He just stuck a finger in his ear, casually picking at it like every word being thrown around was pure garbage to him. The instructor raised his hand. Begin. Bianca lunged fast, precise, textbook perfect. But to her shock, Ethan wasn't there. The air where he stood rippled faintly, then emptied. A collective gasp shot across the training hall. Before Bianca could even register what happened, she felt something. A cold, sharp prickle against the side of her neck. Her weapon was gone. Her hand was empty. And Ethan was behind her, casually holding her own rapier like he'd plucked it from her grip mid-movement. See? Too weak. He tapped the blade lightly against her neck. She lost in 1 second. The hall erupted shocked murmurs, protests, disbelief. The instructor's face drained of color, then flushed crimson with anger he couldn't voice. Ethan stepped back, returning the rapier to her by placing it in her stunned hand. You said she was your best, he said flatly. Maybe raise the standards. The instructor was too stunned to speak. He hadn't even seen Ethan move not a step, not a shift, nothing. One moment Ethan was standing still, the next second Bianca lost. It didn't make sense. What kind of outcast was this guy? Wow, he is too cool. Did you see how he defeated Bianca? Said Enid, practically buzzing with excitement. Tiny pastel flowers burst from her hair like someone had shaken a glitter bomb. Most students looked at her like she'd gone insane for cheering after Ethan publicly dismantled their top duelist. Wednesday didn't even spare Enid a full glance. He didn't defeat her, Wednesday said, tone flat and surgical. He dismantled her, like peeling the wings off a fly. Enid blinked. That sounds horrible. Yes, Wednesday replied. That's why it's accurate. She watched Ethan walk back toward them as Bianca still stood frozen on the piste, mentally rebooting. He ended it too quickly, Wednesday added, voice faintly disappointed. Efficiency is admirable, but theatrics are an art. He denied me the pleasure of watching Bianca struggle. Enid stared at her. Wednesday, you can't just say stuff like that. I just did. See? Ethan said calmly, lowering his foil with infuriating ease. This is why I don't need training wheels. He shot a glance at Enid. She was visibly impressed finally seeing someone knock Bianca off her pedestal for once. A tiny, satisfied grin tugged at her lips. But the rest of the class, they weren't nearly as charmed. A slow ripple of realization spread through the room as they watched Ethan bask in his own ego. Oh, so that's what he was. A colossal, walking, self-satisfied jerk. Even Bianca, still catching her breath, looked more offended than defeated. But among all the shifting gazes in the room, one stood out. One wasn't aimed at Ethan at all. It was aimed unkindly at Wednesday. Rowan. He stood rigid near the equipment rack, fingers twitching nervously at his side the way they did whenever something set him on edge. His eyes weren't following the aftermath of the duel, no, they were locked entirely on Wednesday. And the look he gave her wasn't confusion or curiosity. It was a warning, a quiet, simmering hostility. 11, Chapter 11, Interest. Lunch break settled over the quad, students scattered around the fountain and dead tree in clusters of chatter and gossip. Naturally, most glances kept drifting toward the trio sitting together at one of the stone tables, Ethan, Enid, and Wednesday. Ethan bit into a slice of pizza like he hadn't just humiliated a top duelist an hour ago. Enid, who'd been vibrating with questions since fencing class, finally burst. Okay, seriously, Ethan, how did you do that? She asked, leaning forward until her elbows nearly slid off the table. You were in front of Bianca and then you were behind her in, like, a second. Not even a second, like half a blink. Ethan shrugged mid-chew. I just move faster than the others. Nothing else. Enid blinked. Nothing else? Ethan, you've practically teleported. Wednesday lowered her fork with deliberate precision. He didn't teleport, she said flatly. Teleportation would require bending spacetime. He simply moved with speed disproportionate to the human condition, which is suspicious. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Suspicious. Wednesday didn't blink. She rarely did. Yes, even among outcasts, that kind of speed isn't something you see everywhere. Enid, mid-sip of her strawberry milkshake, froze. Wednesday. And there's another detail, she said. Your eyes. Every vampire I've ever encountered shows some degree of sensitivity to sunlight. They wear sunglasses, visors, enchanted lenses. You walk around at noon as if the sun signed a peace treaty with you personally. Her stare didn't waver. Cold, analytical, interested. That makes me wonder, Wednesday said. Is your claim of being a vampire a lie? Enid squirmed. Wednesday, are you hiding something? Wednesday pressed, leaning forward slightly, like a predator scenting a new riddle. Ethan met her gaze head-on and smiled faintly. What if I am? It wasn't loud, and it wasn't smug, just deliberately tempting, the kind of subtle provocation designed to catch exactly the pair of eyes he wanted. Ethan knew what he was doing. Wednesday Addams lived for mysteries, thrived on enigmas wrapped in shadows and sharp edges, and he intended to become the one puzzle she couldn't easily pry apart, the anomaly she couldn't dissect or predict, something impossible enough that she'd be unable to look away. And when she glanced at him, he saw it, that tiny, unmistakable flicker in her gaze. Interest, calculation, hunger. Wednesday Addams had officially categorized him as a puzzle, and she loved puzzles. She devoured mysteries the way others binged popcorn, methodically, obsessively, with quiet, unblinking intensity. If you are hiding something, I will uncover it. Secrets rot if left buried. Ethan leaned back, completely relaxed. Then I guess you'll have to keep an eye on me. Wednesday's expression didn't change, but something in the air around her sharpened, faint, electric shift of a hunter finding a worthy trail. Very well, she said calmly. I accept the challenge. Ethan smirked. Before that, you should focus on your own ongoing quests. You know, escaping Nevermore, tormenting your therapist, emotionally traumatizing your roommate. Enid choked on her juice. Hey! Wednesday didn't answer immediately. She just stared at Ethan with that flat, unblinking expression, half annoyance, half intrigue, and entirely unreadable. She had come to Nevermore expecting tedium, triviality, and the intellectual starvation that came from being surrounded by hormonal adolescents. But now, her eyes narrowed ever so slightly, the only sign she was intrigued. It seems, she murmured, this school may not be as dull as I feared. Hey, I'm still here. You two left me out of the entire conversation, Enid protested, waving her hands dramatically. Ethan glanced at her. Are you sure you want to join this kind of conversation? Enid paused, thought about it, and shook her head rapidly. No, absolutely not. Which is why I'm changing the topic. New subject. Ethan, what things do you like? She leaned forward eagerly, clearly hoping to pry out more info. Enid Sinclair loved gossip the way Wednesday loved murder mysteries. Before Ethan could speak, Wednesday cut in. I enjoy solitude, she said evenly. Silence. The scent of freshly spilled ink. That brief moment before someone realizes they're in mortal danger. Violins. The color black. And anything that can be considered a crime in 3 or more states. Ethan blinked. Wow. He had to admit only Wednesday Addams could list her interests like crime scenes without changing expression. He leaned back slightly. Well, I like slacking off. Doing things other people won't do. And he looked at Enid, deliberately casual, spending time with cheerful and beautiful girls like you, Enid. Enid froze. Her eyes widened, her smile stretched almost painfully bright. Wednesday's gaze slid to Ethan, slow and flat, like a knife being unsheathed. You resort to flattery, she said. Not impressed. Not offended. Just stating a fact. It's a predictable tactic. Manipulative. Overused. Enid punched Wednesday lightly on the arm. Wednesday, he's being nice. I'm stating observations, Wednesday replied, tone clinical. Any moderately attractive boy can provoke that reaction in you with 3 vaguely complimentary words. Enid gaped. Why are you like this? I've been asking myself the same question, Wednesday said. Hey everyone, if you've been enjoying the story and want to read ahead, I've opened early access chapters for supporters. You can read 57 chapters in advance while helping me keep this series going strong. No worries, the web novel release schedule stays the same. You'll still get 5 chapters a week, as usual. Early access is just a little bonus for readers who want to jump ahead or support the story behind the scenes. If you're curious, you can find it on my creator page, patreon.com/jamesa211. Thank you for reading, supporting, and enjoying this story. It genuinely means a lot. 12, Chapter 12, Accident. The trio finished their lunch, and the conversation drifted off as they walked toward the academy's front entrance. Autumn wind swept through the courtyard, scattering leaves across the stone path. Ethan stretched out lazily. I'm heading to Jericho. Need some fresh air. Enid stopped mid-step. Jericho? Now, Ethan, there's no bus, and we're literally not allowed off campus during class hours. Her confusion didn't come from nowhere. Principal Weems ran Nevermore with strict, zero-leniency rules when it came to leaving school grounds. Students weren't permitted to wander off during daytime classes, no exceptions, not even for prefects. And Jericho wasn't exactly next door. Nevermore sat deep in the woods, isolated on purpose, surrounded by miles of forest. The academy's location made casual travel hard. Anyone trying to walk to Jericho would be walking for hours. The only transport between the academy and the town was the weekend shuttle bus. I have options, Ethan said casually. Enid opened her mouth to ask what that meant, but a low, grinding creak from above cut her off. Wednesday's head tilted upward. One of the old stone gargoyles perched on the archway above them shifted. Weather had eaten away part of its base, leaving deep cracks that now widened with a sharp snap. The gargoyle wobbled once. Then it tore free. Enid screamed, Wednesday. The massive stone figure dropped straight toward Wednesday's skull. Before the gargoyle could even gain full momentum, Ethan stepped half a pace forward, arm sweeping up with a sharp, effortless motion. His hand slammed into the underside of the falling ornament. Bam! The courtyard rang with the impact. Ethan stood between Wednesday and the shattered ground, holding the entire gargoyle above her head with one hand. Dust and fragments crumbled down around them like gray snow. His expression didn't match the moment at all. He looked bored, mildly annoyed, maybe. As if catching a multi-hundred-pound stone statue was no more inconvenient than grabbing a falling book. Wednesday slowly turned her head, braids shifting like pendulums of judgment. She examined the gargoyle hovering above her, then Ethan's hand, then Ethan himself. He lowered the gargoyle to the ground, dust settling around his boots. "Do you want to say something, Wednesday?" he asked, half expecting an insult, half expecting something. "Yes," she said. "You've interfered." Ethan blinked. "Interfered? I had already calculated the angle of descent," she replied calmly. "At worst, it would have grazed my shoulder. Painful, but educational. You robbed me of data." Ethan stared. "Data? You wanted data from a falling gargoyle. And for the record," she continued, "if this was meant to impress me, it failed. Dramatic heroics are a tedious mating display common among insecure male mammals. And before you ask, no, I'm not thankful. If the day comes when I require saving, I will be sure to die of shame before admitting it." Before Wednesday could deliver another cutting remark, Enid lunged forward and wrapped her in a tight, trembling hug. "Rumi, you almost died." Enid wailed, squeezing her like she was hugging a stuffed animal instead of a human being. Wednesday froze on impact. Her arms locked stiff at her sides. Her face twisted into something between disgust, irritation, and the silent plea of someone being slowly suffocated by glitter. "Enid," she said flatly, "release me. Immediately. Your hair is brushing my cheek, and the scent alone is nauseating." Enid only hugged tighter. "I was so scared. What if that gargoyle had smashed you? What if you got hurt? What if? Your emotional volume is assaulting my senses," Wednesday cut in, voice monotone but edged with suffering. She attempted to peel Enid off with 2 fingers. It was not effective. "Let me go before I reconsider the value of living." Ethan watched the struggling pair, one eyebrow raised. Only Enid Sinclair Rainbow Werewolf, Sunshine Incarnate could reduce Wednesday Addams to looking like she was being held hostage by affection. He let out a low exhale, the kind that said, "Yep, exactly like the series. No inconsistencies detected." Watching the Technicolor werewolf cling to the deadpan goth girl while the goth girl endured it like a medieval torture device felt strangely nostalgic. With a small shake of his head, Ethan slipped his hands into his pockets and began walking away, leaving Enid still wrapped around Wednesday like a pastel boa constrictor. His thoughts drifted to Rowan. Rowan wasn't anywhere nearby, nowhere in sight, not part of the scene at all. But Ethan didn't need to see him to know what was coming. He knew the plot, after all. Rowan's path was already laid out, the grief, the obsession with the prophecy, the desperate need to be useful, and the gradual mental unraveling that pushed him toward a murder attempt he genuinely believed was justified. Rowan wasn't a villain, not truly. He was a frightened kid crushed beneath expectations he couldn't carry and visions he never asked for. A pawn trapped in a story he hadn't chosen. Ethan remembered exactly how it ended: Rowan cornering Wednesday in the woods, panicking, attacking, and then being killed by the creature before he understood what was happening. The thought settled heavily in his mind. Maybe I should mess with the plot a little. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated up to chapter 18, so if you want to read early chapters ahead of the public schedule, you can join my Patreon. 13, Chapter 13, Therapy. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated up to chapter 18, so if you want to read early chapters ahead of the public schedule, you can join my Patreon. Present-day Jericho. Ethan sat astride his bike on the shoulder of the empty road, helmet dangling loosely from one hand. His eyes were fixed on the small, one-story house across the street. Nothing remarkable at all, except for the girl inside it. Wednesday Addams. Right now, she was seated on some creaky therapy couch, listening to a well-meaning adult drone on about healthy coping mechanisms and emotional vulnerability, 2 concepts she treated with the same enthusiasm as dental surgery. Ethan knew the script, knew the beats, knew exactly how this afternoon was supposed to go. Because this was the moment the canon story tried to force itself back into place. The infamous therapy session escape. The one where Wednesday slipped out, wandered Jericho, and inevitably crossed paths with Tyler. Their awkward, accidental meeting. His attempt at charm. Her accidental curiosity. The slow, messy, absolutely doomed love-hate thread that followed. A thread Ethan refused completely, absolutely, wholeheartedly refused to let happen. He drummed his fingers once against the handlebar, eyes narrowing at the house. He might be calm. He might be patient. But there were limits. If he let the plot run its original course, if he just sat by and watched Wednesday stumble into that coffee-brewing little hide, then he'd be standing here wearing a bright, shiny green hat, and he had zero intention of playing the fool in someone else's story. He didn't mind putting a hat on others. In fact, it was fun. But wearing one himself? Not happening. Not in this lifetime. Not in any timeline. So yes, he was here for one reason only. To make sure Wednesday Addams did not develop so much as a flicker of affection for that little hide. And he'd stop the entire plotline himself if he had to. Ethan's gaze sharpened as he watched the house. He didn't have to wait long. The bathroom window on the side creaked open, just like he expected. A pale hand slipped out first, then Wednesday swung herself through the narrow frame with cold, efficient precision. No hesitation, no wasted movement. She used the drainpipe, slid down with practiced ease, and dropped lightly onto the ground, silent, controlled, completely unfazed. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Dangling from the strap of her bag was a severed hand, pale and stitched, its fingers drumming impatiently like it had somewhere urgent to be. Thing. One of the Addams family's more unusual members, and Wednesday's unofficial right hand, in every sense. Well, finally, I was really tired of waiting, said Ethan. And while walking, Wednesday bumped into a man carrying a crate of apples. The impact sent them rolling everywhere. Then the world snapped into a sudden, violent vision. The man in a truck, a distracted turn, a massive tractor trailer, an eruption of shattering glass and twisting metal. His death. Just as quickly as it came, the vision shattered, gone, leaving only the faint echo of impending tragedy behind her eyes. The man, utterly unaware, shot her an irritated glare. Watch it, weirdo, he muttered before storming off, kicking an unfortunate apple out of his way. Wednesday didn't react. She never did. But then, hey, Wednesday, over here. A voice she recognized. A voice she absolutely did not expect to hear in Jericho, of all places. She turned, slowly, and there he was, Ethan. Standing across the road, one hand raised in a lazy wave, as if bumping into her in the middle of town during her escaped therapy session, no less was the most normal thing in the world. Her eyes narrowed by a single, almost imperceptible degree. Of all the annoyances she'd anticipated today, he was not supposed to be one of them. She crossed the road with her usual unhurried, predatory grace, stopping in front of Ethan with the exact expression she always have. What, Wednesday said flatly, are you doing here? I'm just slacking off like usual, Ethan replied, shrugging. And I saw some interesting sights like you escaping therapy while Principal Weems is sitting in her car, waiting for the session to work its magic. Wednesday's eyes narrowed a fraction. Therapy, she repeated, voice dripping clinical disdain, is a futile ritual designed to make emotionally fragile people feel less fragile. I do not require assistance managing my feelings. I have none that need managing. Her gaze drifted briefly toward the house she'd slipped out of. My issues are not psychological. They are environmental. And the environment is other people. She turned back to Ethan, expression unchanged. Escaping was the most logical course of action. Remaining would have been an act of cruelty toward myself and the therapist. 14, Chapter 14, Doubts. A/N. The Patreon version is already updated to Chapter 20, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. By joining, you directly support the faster growth of this story and help me keep releasing chapters more frequently. Thank you for your support. So I assume the thing you're sitting on is yours? Wednesday asked, eyeing the motorcycle as if evaluating whether it violated any laws of physics or taste. Yes. Do I look like a thief? Ethan replied. He did look put together, annoyingly handsome, certainly not the type to snatch wallets or hotwire cars. Wednesday didn't blink. Yes. Ethan stared. Yes. The average thief does not kindly tattoo the word criminal across his forehead, Wednesday explained matter-of-factly. They come in all shapes, all faces. Beauty does not exempt one from moral decay. A beat. In fact, Wednesday continued, history suggests attractive men are more likely to be trouble. I agree, Ethan said, flashing a self-satisfied smirk. Sometimes my handsomeness causes me problems. Wednesday didn't hesitate. Spare me your narcissistic drivel. I require transportation. Any kind. To the nearest station. Ethan blinked. So you're running away from danger. Wednesday very slowly, she turned her head toward Heim, expression flat, eyes cold enough to freeze breath. I will give you 1 second, she said, voice low and deadly calm, to rephrase that sentence. I do not, Wednesday said sharply, run from danger. I march toward it with enthusiasm. But your current actions don't match your words, Ethan countered, tilting his head. You're trying to run away from Nevermore, aren't you? He couldn't let her leave, so he nudged where he knew she'd react. It has nothing to do with danger, Wednesday replied, tone clipped. I am leaving because that school is a stagnant swamp of mediocrity, a prison for idiots, and I refuse to walk the path my parents laid out for me like a pre-written obituary. Is that so? Ethan's smile sharpened. Funny, I thought you were leaving because of the monster in the woods. Wednesday's eyes narrowed a fraction, just enough to show interest breaking through her mask. What monster? She asked. You don't know. Ethan shrugged casually, but his gaze remained locked on her. It's been the talk of Jericho for the past 2 weeks. 4 mysterious deaths. 4. Wednesday echoed, her voice sinking into a low, intrigued murmur. Serial killer cases were always her favorite. Murderers strutted around believing they were the predators right up until the moment she showed them otherwise. Watching that flicker of terror when they realized they were the prey? That was the part she savored most. How mysterious. Oh, very. Ethan made it sound like gossip, but every word was bait. All the victims were found torn apart, deep gashes, missing organs, bodies rearranged like someone was trying to assemble a jigsaw puzzle from human parts. Wednesday's eyes glimmered dark, focused, hungry for answers. That would indicate intent, Wednesday murmured. A pattern, methodology, possibly even a signature. Ethan nodded slowly. And if something left the bodies like that, then whatever did it wasn't human, or wasn't trying to look human. Wednesday's eyes narrowed, fascination sharpening into something almost predatory. Before Ethan could continue, she asked, what does local law enforcement think? Oh, the sheriff already has a theory, Ethan said, shrugging one shoulder. He thinks it was one of the outcasts from Nevermore. How delightfully predictable. When they cannot explain the monster, they blame the ones who already live outside the definition of normal. Still, Ethan continued, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret, that means a whole mystery is brewing in Jericho and Nevermore. Murders, suspicion, a creature no one understands. This town, she said softly, almost reverently, might finally be worth my suffering. But I'm more interested in something else, Wednesday said, her gaze narrowing. Why are you telling me any of this? Your intent is transparent. You're trying to keep me at the academy. She wasn't Enid. She noticed his intention from the moment he opened his mouth. Ethan was trying to keep her in the academy, and she could sense it as clearly as if he had said it out loud. "Were you sent by my parents?" she asked dryly. "Did they recruit you as some sort of emotional handler?" Ethan blinked. "No, definitely not. As for my motives, well, what motives could a teenage boy possibly have toward a girl his age?" he said, voice deliberately ambiguous. Wednesday didn't flinch. "If you are attempting to lure me into some form of unhealthy romantic relationship, abandon the delusion immediately." Her tone was flat, final, a guillotine in sentence form. "I have no intention of falling into anything, especially love. Love is for foolish people who lack self-control, clingy hands, emotional dependence, irrational behavior, repulsive." She looked away as if the very concept offended her. "I have no desire to become domesticated like my mother, chained to a romantic fantasy, or worse, reduced to a housewife. Such a fate doesn't suit me." Ethan raised an eyebrow. He had expected resistance. He hadn't expected it wrapped in barbed wire. "Well, that doesn't stop me," Ethan said, unfazed. 15, Chapter 15, Shadows of the Addams Legacy. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to Chapter 20, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. By joining, you directly support the faster growth of this story and help me keep releasing chapters more frequently. Thank you for your support. "What are you two freaks doing in our town?" Ethan and Wednesday stopped talking as three boys in outdated pilgrim costumes surrounded them, forming a loose circle around them. Exactly the kind of Jericho locals Wednesday expected: historically ignorant, theatrically hostile, and convinced they were intimidating. One of the boys puffed out his chest. "This is pilgrim turf. Outcasts aren't welcome here." Wednesday glanced at their outfits, completely unimpressed. "Why are you dressed like religious fanatics?" "We're pilgrims," the tall one shot back. "Potato, potato," Wednesday said dryly, as if both words belonged to the same category of pointless. "We work at Pilgrim World," the chubby boy added, proud of it for some reason. Wednesday didn't miss a beat. "It takes a special kind of stupid to devote an entire theme park to zealots responsible for mass genocide. Who are you calling idiot? My father owns Pilgrim World." Lucas Walker stepped forward, jaw tight, voice cracking with the kind of outrage only a spoiled heir could produce. Ethan recognized him instantly. Lucas Walker, the mayor's son. Loud, arrogant, and destined to be a footnote in Ethan's memory. As for the other two boys crowding behind him, just extras. Background noise. Faces that wouldn't take up even a bite of space in his mind. Sparks snapped quietly between the four of them, Lucas and his two faceless cronies puffing themselves up, Wednesday staring them down with predatory calm, Ethan ready to step in if things got entertaining. For a moment, it looked like fists or worse might start flying, but before the first move could be made, a firm voice cut in. "What are you boys doing?" Sheriff Galpin's voice cut through the street like a blade. Lucas and his two sidekicks froze, shoulders tensing as the sheriff stepped up onto the sidewalk. Even Lucas, mayor's son, used to walking around like Jericho royalty, instinctively took a step back. Having a powerful father didn't give him immunity in front of Galpin. "Nothing, Sheriff," Ethan said before any of them could open their mouths. "They were just asking us to buy some fudge from Pilgrim World." The three boys recoiled as if he'd insulted their ancestors. Buy fudge? From them? What were they, Girl Scouts selling cookies? But none of them dared correct him. Admitting they came over to start a fight would get them in real trouble. Galpin stared at Ethan like he was DJVU wrapped in a headache. "You again? Do you cause trouble everywhere you go?" Ethan shrugged. "No, trouble finds me. Important difference." The sheriff let out a long, weary exhale, the kind he reserved specifically for Nevermore students. "Every year," he muttered, "you kids make my job harder." He jabbed a finger between the two groups. "Names. Now. And you three," and she flicked his hand toward Lucas and his friends. "Beat it. Before I call your fathers." Lucas' bravado evaporated. He swallowed hard, nodded stiffly, and motioned for his friends to move. They backed away fast, sending Wednesday one last dirty look she didn't bother acknowledging. "I'm Ethan Corvin," Ethan said calmly, slipping his hands into his pockets as if the tension in the air were none of his concern. "And this is Wednesday Addams." The sheriff's gaze shifted. Wednesday stood perfectly still, braids hanging like execution ropes, posture carved from cold stone. Her expression carried all the warmth of an unmarked grave. The sheriff's jaw tightened the way it did when paperwork tripled or trouble found him before breakfast. "Is Gomez Addams your father?" Sheriff Galpin asked, his tone clipped. "Yes," Wednesday replied, her voice flat enough to sandwood. The sheriff snorted. "Guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. You're just like him." Wednesday's eyes narrowed, not out of offense, but calculation, as if imagining the most efficient way to dissect the statement or the sheriff. "You seem to harbor something against my father," she said, a faint edge sharpening her words. "Oh, I do," Sheriff Galpin snapped. "Because he's a murderer. He killed an innocent man and destroyed a family. That blood is on his hands." Sheriff Galpin's hatred for Gomez Addams ran deeper than simple annoyance. It was old-rooted in a case that Jericho still whispered about. Years ago, Gomez had been accused of murder, dragged into the center of a scandal that should have ended with handcuffs and a trial. Instead, he walked away untouched. To Galpin, that wasn't justice. It was corruption winning. "The only thing my father is capable of killing," she said dryly, "is the soap opera songs he insists on singing in the shower. If he murdered anything, it was musical integrity." She didn't believe for a second that her father had killed anyone. His father was many things: eccentric, overly dramatic, catastrophically affectionate, but a murderer was not one of them. If he ever did take a life, he wouldn't have been caught. Ethan glanced at her, unsure whether to laugh or step back. The sheriff didn't find it funny. Whatever, Sheriff Galpin muttered. I'll be keeping an eye on you, Adams. Don't give me a reason to notice you again. His gaze slid to Ethan. And you'dn't assume the mayor will always cover your back. He shot them both a final warning look before turning away. Chapter 16, Late Night Conversations. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to Chapter 21, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. By joining, you directly support the faster growth of this story and help me keep releasing chapters more frequently. Thank you for your support. Principal Weems, who had been searching for Wednesday ever since she learned the girl had escaped from therapy, finally spotted her standing on the roadside perfectly composed, as if the entire ordeal were nothing more than a mild inconvenience. Wednesday, Weems called out, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement as she strode toward her. What are you doing here? And I heard you escaped from therapy. Only then did her eyes land on the boy beside her. Her expression has softened several degrees. And Mr. Corvin, why, exactly, are you with her? Wednesday didn't flinch. She rarely bothered with such mortal displays. Evaluating the effectiveness of court-mandated psychiatry, she answered. I found it lacking. You climbed out of a bathroom window. Wednesday didn't waver. That only strengthens my conclusion. Whatever your conclusion is, it's irrelevant. Weems snapped, though even her frustration remained meticulously elegant. You cannot run from your mandated therapy. Now come back to the academy immediately. Beneath her controlled tone was the quiet resignation of a woman who knew that supervising Wednesday Adams was a full-time occupation and a losing battle the moment she blinked. Wednesday tilted her head, gaze sharpening. Principal Weems, before you drag me anywhere, why is he here? Her attention shifted pointedly to Ethan. And why are you ignoring the fact that he is off campus during class hours, violating rules you enforce with religious fervor? That is none of your concern, Wednesday. It becomes my concern when you enforce rules selectively. Weems gave her a thin, brittle smile, kind that suggested she'd reached the end of her diplomatic reserves. One of my responsibilities is determining which students require flexibility, she said, and which require constant supervision. Her gaze slid back to Wednesday, heavy with implication. Accurate implication. Deeply irritating implication. Before Wednesday could deliver a rebuttal sharp enough to draw blood, Weems clasped her by the arm, firm, unyielding, practiced. That's enough. You're coming with me. With all the grace of a long-suffering warden, Principal Weems turned and began escorting, dragging, Wednesday toward the car. Poa finally prevented the green hat scenario, Ethan sighed, letting the tension bleed out of his shoulders as he watched them. Then, a cold prickling slid down his spine. Someone was watching him. Ethan turned around. Across the street, just outside the weather vane, Tyler Galpin stood with a to-go cup in hand. His stare was hostile, sharp, laser-focused on Ethan. The kind of glare that didn't need words to say, why are you with her? Ethan lifted an eyebrow. So the little hide was already irritated. How adorable. Tyler didn't look away. His jaw clenched, the tiniest flare of instinctive aggression tightening his eyes. He was sizing Ethan up, threat or nuisance. Oh, you don't like me already, he murmured. Perfect. Saves us both the trouble. He swung onto his bike in one smooth motion, letting the engine thrum to life beneath him. Before pulling away, he turned his head just enough for Tyler to see the slow, deliberate middle finger he raised in his direction. The reaction was instant. Tyler froze for half a second, a mix of confusion, irritation, and something darker rippling across his face. The hide in him stirred, restless. Ethan smirked. He didn't take the hide seriously. If Tyler ever tried anything, Ethan knew he could end it before Tyler even shifted. With that calm, lethal certainty, Ethan twisted the throttle and shot down the road, leaving Tyler stewing in his own frustrated silence. Night settled over Nevermore like a velvet shroud. From the balcony of Ophelia Hall, a lone cello melody drifted into the moonlit air, somber, elegant, every note spiraling upward to brush against the full moon hanging like a pale, unblinking eye. On the music stand in front of her, Thing tapped his fingers in a thoughtful rhythm, asking a silent question. Wednesday paused her playing. No, I don't feel better. There's something wrong with this place. Not just because it's an institution designed to torture adolescents, but because of everything orbiting it. And that guy who was predicting my every move like an open book. Her eyes narrowed. I do not appreciate being read like an open book. I'm accustomed to being the one doing the reading. The balcony's big window creaked open. Enid poked her head in. How did you even get that oversized violin out the window? Wednesday lowered her cello with icy precision. I had an extra hand. Enid glanced at the rogue hand propped on the music stand. She blinked. Whoa, where's the rest of him? That, Wednesday replied, remains one of the great Addams family mysteries. From the woods below, a chorus of howls tore through the night eye, wild, unmistakably Lupin. Wednesday turned her gaze to her roommate. Why aren't you wolfing out? Enid wilted. Because I can't. She stepped beside Wednesday and held up her hands, her claws barely extending an inch. My mom says some wolves are late bloomers, but I've been to the best lycanologists, and this is all I've got. I had to fly all the way to Milwaukee, would you believe it? The specialist said there's a chance I may never, Her voice shrank. Ever. Wednesday tilted her head. And what happens then? I'd become a lone wolf. Enid's shoulders slumped. Do you know what that means? Sounds ideal. Enid groaned miserably. Are you kidding? My life would be over. No pack, no mate, no future, just nothing. I still fail to see the tragedy. I could die alone. We all die alone, Enid. Enid stared at her. You are terrible at cheering people up. Her voice cracked and the tears finally spilled. Wednesday froze mid-breath. Why are you crying? Because I'm upset. Haven't you ever cried? Or is that beneath you too? Wednesday's expression didn't soften, but something old and cold stirred behind her eyes. It was the week after Halloween. I was 6. I took my pet scorpion, Nero, for his afternoon stroll. Enid sniffled, listening. We were ambushed. They laughed at my choice in companions. Her tone stayed steady, but sharp. 2 held me down. The rest ran Nero over until a slight tremor slipped through the words. I buried what remained of him in the snow. I cried my little black heart out that day. She lowered her gaze. But tears do not resurrect the dead, so I vowed never to cry again. Outside, the wolves howled again, closer this time, as if reminding Enid of everything she feared becoming. Enid wiped her face. Your secret's safe with me. Still think you're weird as shit, though. The feeling is profoundly mutual. Ayo, it's nice to see you two are bonding. The voice drifted casually from above. Both girls snapped their heads upward. Ethan lounged on the Ophelia Hall rooftop, moonlight painting him in soft silver. The shadows around him seemed to gather instead of vanish. His eyes glowed faintly red, predatory, amused. Wednesday's gaze hardened. Have you no shame in peeping? Ethan shrugged, unbothered. If you didn't want witnesses, you shouldn't have chosen this spot as your emotional counseling chamber. He gestured lazily at the courtyard. Echoes travel. Wednesday's stare sharpened to a razor edge. If you enjoy eavesdropping on private conversations, I suggest you find a hobby, preferably one that doesn't involve breathing. Ethan chuckled. Sadly, that won't work. I don't have a beating heart, so stopping breathing is off the table. He tilted his head. But for what it's worth, he played beautifully. He hopped down from the roof, landing with a soft thud. 17, Chapter 17, all pieces in place. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to Chapter 23, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. By joining, you directly support the faster growth of this story and help me keep releasing chapters more frequently. Thank you for your support. Enid sniffled as she looked at Ethan. So Ethan, she said uneasily, you heard all of that, didn't you? Ethan didn't even pretend. Yep, every word. He gave a small, reassuring shrug. But don't worry, you not wolfing out doesn't make you any less. I won't treat you differently. Enid blinked, stunned. Everyone's special as they are, he added, tone gentle in a way that felt strangely out of place on the balcony of Ophelia Hall. For a heartbeat, Enid just stared at him, eyes shining, brain short-circuiting. How is a guy like this real? Handsome, mysterious, calm, unexpectedly compassionate. No wonder her heart felt like it was doing backflips. As for Ajax, teenage love is like water. It flows. It leaks. It evaporates the moment something shinier catches the light. No teenager had ever managed to keep their heart in a single place. Consistency simply wasn't part of the adolescent's emotional vocabulary. Wednesday watched all this unfold with the expression of someone observing a slow-moving contagion. So, she said flatly, what are you doing here, Ethan? I assume you didn't climb onto the roof for casual small talk. If you did, feel free to jump off. Ethan grinned. Tempting. But no. He folded his arms. I actually came to invite you two to the Harvest Festival. Wednesday immediately pointed at Enid. Take her. She's genetically programmed to enjoy that level of glitter and social chaos. I have no interest in such events. I figured you'd say that, Ethan replied. But here's the thing, if you don't come tomorrow, you're going to miss something important. Something connected to your family and your future. Wednesday's expression didn't shift, but her eyes did, narrowing just a fraction. If you think this cheap attempt can manipulate my interest, she said, voice cold as polished steel, you've failed miserably. Ethan raised a hand in mock surrender. Not manipulating, just stating facts. His smile sharpened. It's definitely related to your family. If you want to know more, come to the Harvest Festival. Or don't. Your choice. Thing flipped him off from the music stand. Charming as always, Ethan chuckled. Before either girl could blink, he stepped backward onto the balcony rail, then dropped. Ethan. Enid yelped, rushing to the edge. Why would he jump 3 floors? Wednesday didn't move. Good. Perhaps gravity has finally done something useful. Enid leaned over the roof, panickingly to freeze when she saw him. Ethan stood below in the courtyard, perfectly fine, boots planted on the cobblestone as though he'd simply stepped off a curb. He looked up, smirked, and gave them a lazy wave. Nope, Enid said breathlessly. He's totally fine. Not even limping. Infuriating. Even his recklessness refuses to cooperate. Enid looked at her. So are you going tomorrow? Wednesday picked up her cello, fingers sliding into place with eerie calm. I dislike riddles, she said, and I despise it when strangers claim knowledge about my family. So yes, I'll be there. Ethan watched the girls disappear back inside Ophelia Hall, a quiet smile curving across his lips. The next step was crucial. Tomorrow, he needed Wednesday and Rowan to collide at the Harvest Festival exactly as they were meant to. That moment would put the prophetic drawing in her hands, the same drawing tied to a book written 3 decades ago. The book that started everything. That was when the real plot began. I should probably get the hide to show up too, Ethan muttered to himself. Wednesday needed to see the creature with her own eyes, needed the monster to haunt the edges of her reality before she realized what she was truly up against. And Tyler, whether he wanted to or not, would follow her. Puppets always chased their strings. Ethan's smirk darkened. There was also her red-haired psychopath masquerading as a teacher. Laurel Gates, descendant of Crackstone, the woman orchestrating everything from the shadows, hungry for revenge and obsessed with Wednesday's blood for her final ritual. Laurel would keep Wednesday in check for now. As Ethan walked through the corridor, replaying his plan step by step in his mind, he turned a corner a little too sharply and collided with someone coming the opposite way. The impact wasn't hard, but it was enough to knock a single sheet of paper out of the other person's hand. The page drifted through the air. Ethan caught it before it hit the ground and froze for half a heartbeat. It was the drawing. Wednesday Addams, standing in the Nevermore quad, a sword in her hand, storm clouds boiling behind her. The same prophetic image tied to the old book. "Hey Zori, give that back. It's mine," a tense voice said. Ethan looked up and found Rowan Laszlo standing there, hunched and pale, as if even being seen with the drawing made him anxious. He kept glancing around the corridor, checking if anyone else was watching. Ethan handed the page back, smooth and unbothered. "Here you go." Rowan snatched it instant light of quickly folding it and tucking it under his arm like a secret he wished he could shove deeper. He muttered a rushed thanks, then hurried away, his steps uneven, shoulders drawn tight. Ethan watched him disappear into the next hallway, a slow smile pulling at his lips. Perfect. 18, Chapter 18, Harvest Festival. A/N. The Patreon version is already updated to Chapter 25, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. By joining, you directly support the faster growth of this story and help me keep releasing chapters more frequently. Thank you for your support. The next night, the Harvest Festival began. Banners hung across the festival area, stalls were set up along every corner, and the annual Harvest Festival was in full swing, bright, cheerful, and utterly false. Every student of Nevermore Academy was expected to attend. Principal Weems insisted it was an important tradition, though most outcasts knew it for what it truly was, a carefully crafted performance meant to reassure the townspeople that Nevermore and Jericho existed in harmony. In reality, it was one more pageant designed to soothe Jericho's fragile ego. Because every smiling lantern, every reenacted tale, every cheerful little plaque served one purpose: to glorify Joseph Crackstone, the righteous founder, the holy man who purified the land, the visionary who shaped Jericho with faith and discipline. At least, that's what the town believed. The truth buried, sanitized, and rewritten was far uglier. Crackstone wasn't a hero. He was a zealot who believed outcasts were an infection, a butcher who burned and slaughtered innocents in the name of purity, a monster who tried to erase an entire people. But history is always kind to those who write it, so the town celebrated him with festivals, parades, and carefully curated myths. An outreach day, another tradition forced onto Nevermore students, existed for the same lit public service dressed up as goodwill, masking the same old prejudice beneath a polite smile. If Jericho ever discovered the truth behind their beloved founder, if they ever realized they'd spent generations honoring a sadistic psychopath, there would be no reenactments, no statues, no lantern-lit festivals under the night sky. But ignorance was a powerful lantern that kept the darkness comfortably out of sight. Tonight, the light glittered brighter than ever. And in that glittering lie the real story was finally about to begin. Wednesday wandered through the Harvest Festival beside Enid, her expression flat and unamused as a flickering lantern. The air smelled of caramel, fried dough, and small-town delusion, none of which improved her mood. Crowds moved between the stalls in bright, noisy clusters, laughing and chattering about things Wednesday considered profoundly trivial. In contrast, Enid radiated sunshine so aggressively it was almost blinding. "Oh my gosh, look, they're selling glow-in-the-dark wolf ear headbands," Enid squealed, bouncing on her toes. "And they have a booth where you can bob for apples. And Wednesday, they're doing butter sculpture contests. Who even sculpts butter? This is amazing." Wednesday blinked slowly. Your bar for amazement is subterranean. But Enid barely heard her. She was already dragging Wednesday toward the main path, tail-wagging energy in every step. Wednesday's eyes, however, weren't on the attractions. They were sharp, scanning every face, every shadow between the stalls. She wasn't here for the carnival atmosphere. She was here because Ethan, annoyingly smug, frustratingly cryptic Ethan, had invited her, and then failed to show up. Unacceptable. She paused, her gaze narrowing as she surveyed the crowd from the center of the festival square. Still no dark hoodie, no red eyes, no irritatingly confident smirk. "Looking for someone?" Enid asked, chewing a rainbow-colored candy stick. "I'm looking for the person responsible for wasting my time," Wednesday replied dryly. Enid raised a brow. "Is that your way of saying Ethan?" Enid asked, nudging Wednesday gently. Before Wednesday could respond, someone stepped into their path. "Wednesday, are you searching for someone?" Xavier asked, appearing with that hopeful half-smile he always wore around her, like fate had finally handed him a second chance. Wednesday turned to him with an expression as cold as a morgue drawer. "Who are you?" she asked flatly. The smile died instantly. While Xavier Tredan failed to recover what little dignity he had left, Wednesday's attention had already shifted back to the crowd. But Ethan's was nowhere near the festival stalls. He was busy doing something far more important: distracting Principal Weems. Because if Weems kept her hawk-like attention glued to Wednesday tonight, the Rowan encounter's first flick of the domino that would set the real story in motion would never happen. And Ethan wasn't about to let canon derail itself. Principal Weems stood nearby Wednesday, arms crossed, posture stiff and watchful as a mother hawk guarding her nest. Her eyes scanned the crowd constantly, searching for signs of Wednesday's inevitable chaos, which meant she could not under any circumstances be allowed to intervene. "Principal Weems," Ethan greeted smoothly, appearing beside her with the kind of quiet, sudden arrival that would have startled anyone else. "Mr. Corvin," she said, "shouldn't you be enjoying the festival?" Ethan gave her a polite, harmless smile. I was curious, he replied. You push this festival harder than a school safety lecture. What makes it so special? It's a vital tradition, one of the few events where Jericho and Nevermore publicly come together. Our participation keeps that relationship intact. Ethan nodded, the picture of polite interest even though his mind was elsewhere. From the corner of his eye, he saw Rowan hovering near a booth, pale and nervous, clutching something against his chest. Not long after, he stepped directly into Wednesday's path. Ethan's gaze sharpened as Rowan accidentally collided with her shoulder. Wednesday froze. Her pupils dilated. The festival soundslaughter, music, crackling lanterns seemed to drop away around her, swallowed by a sudden psychic stillness. And then her vision hit. The quad burning, fire roaring through the night. Rowan screaming. Rowan being dragged by a monster until a sudden fist slammed into the creature's face. 19, Chapter 19, Prophecy. A/N. The Patreon version is already updated to Chapter 25, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. By joining, you directly support the faster growth of this story and help me keep releasing chapters more frequently. Thank you for your support. Who is that guy that bumped into me? Wednesday asked, eyes fixed on Rowan's fading silhouette. Rowan, Enid replied, baffled. Rowan Laszlo. Why? Without a word, Wednesday stepped away from Enid and cut through the crowd after Rowan. He had already slipped beyond the edge of the festival, moving toward the tree line with the same nervous urgency she'd just seen in her vision. Wednesday didn't hesitate. Her pace quickened as she followed him into the shadows cast by the woods. In her mind, the image replayed the monster attacking him. She didn't believe in coincidences. If the vision was right, Rowan wasn't wondering, he was heading straight into danger. And Wednesday meant to understand why before it reached him. The farther she followed, the quicker the festival faded behind her. The music, the chatter, the light smothered by the woods. Now there was only the cold chorus of crickets and the steady crunch of Rowan's footsteps ahead. Wednesday quickened her pace. Rowan, she called, voice slicing clean through the darkness, you're in danger. He stopped. For a moment, he stood with his back to her, breathing hard, shoulders tight. Then he turned, his expression strangely calm for someone supposedly being hunted. I'm not the one in danger, Rowan said quietly. You are. Before Wednesday could react, he lifted his right hand. A sharp force slammed into her chest. She was yanked backward and pinned hard against a tree, bark digging into her spine. Her arms locked in place, held by an invisible grip that tightened like steel bands. Telekinesis. Rowan stepped closer, eyes glinting with something cold and determined, nothing like the timid boy she'd seen around campus. What are you doing? Wednesday demanded, struggling against the invisible force holding her to the tree. For the first time, confusion flickered across her face. She couldn't make sense of Rowan's sudden hostility. Saving everyone from you, Rowan said, voice shaky, breath uneven. He looked terrified and determined all at once, like someone being pushed by a prophecy he didn't fully understand. That's why I have to kill you. Wednesday's eyes narrowed. So the gargoyle, that was you? Rowan hesitated just a second, then nodded. Yeah. Wednesday exhaled sharply. It's always the quiet ones. A gust of wind whipped through the trees. A folded page tore loose from Rowan's jacket pocket and drifted through the air before unfolding mid-flight. It plastered itself against a tree near Wednesday, its charcoal lines unmistakable. Her face, the quad burning behind her. Rowan's voice trembled, almost reverent. Girl in the picture. That's you. Wednesday looked at him like he'd grown two heads. You want to kill me because of a drawing? My mother drew it 25 years ago, Rowan said, stepping closer as the telekinetic pressure tightened around Wednesday's throat. She was a seer. A strong one. She told me about the vision before she died. His eyes had the hollow blaze of someone clinging to a destiny he didn't fully want. My mother said it was my responsibility to stop this girl if she ever came to Nevermore. Because you'll destroy the school and everyone in it. The invisible grip around Wednesday's neck constricted, cutting off her air. Rowan, she rasped, voice strained, put me down. Wednesday's nails dug into the bark behind her as she struggled against Rowan's telekinetic grip until something shifted in the corner of her vision. A shape, large, moving between the trees with heavy, deliberate steps. Her eyes widened, not in fear, but in recognition. The silhouette was the same one she'd seen in her vision, broad shoulders, hunched posture, claws catching the moonlight as it pushed through the underbrush. The monster. It stepped into the open just behind Rowan, its eyes glowing with feral intelligence. A low, wet growl vibrated through the trees. Rowan stiffened. His breath hitched, spine locking as the noise crawled up behind him. Slowly, like his body didn't want to obey, he turned. The monster was already there. Its yellow eyes fixed on Rowan, wide, unblinking, starving. Rowan barely managed a strangled wait before the creature unleashed a deafening ray. The swing landed with brutal force. Thud crack. Rowan's scream tore out of him, as he was flung backward, slamming into the ground. The telekinetic choke on Wednesday snapped. She collapsed to the dirt, coughing hard, vision swimming. The monster stepped toward Rowan, its claws rising long, hooked, wet with its own saliva. A low, guttural groan rattled from its throat as it crouched over him. Rowan's voice broke into a panicked, raw cry. Help! Somebody! The claws came down. Clang! A hand shot out of the darkness, fingers locking around the creature's wrist. Nope, a calm voice said, tightening its grip until the creature snarled. Not happening. The monster hissed, Rowan whimpered, and Wednesday's eyes widened at the all-too-familiar voice slicing through the chaos. 20, Chapter 20, Pathetic Loss. Surprise, Ethan said, stepping out with an almost bored smile. Wednesday, Rowan, and even the monster froze. 3 pairs of eyes locked on him as if he had just stepped out of thin air. The monster didn't freeze. It hissed, muscles bunching under its mottled skin. The moment it recognized Ethan, its face twisted in fury. It slashed with its left hand, claws slicing toward Ethan's neck with a vicious shrrkk. Ethan's body blurred gone. And in the same instant, Rowan vanished from the ground and reappeared beside Wednesday, wobbling but upright, Ethan's grip steadying him. "Do you honestly think you can touch me?" Ethan asked, tone light, almost amused. "You're slower than a dying snail." The hide's roar exploded through the woods. Grey-ah! The sound rattled branches and sent crows shrieking into the night sky. Ethan didn't flinch. "Funny thing," he continued calmly, "people say barking dogs don't bite. Guess roaring monsters can't do much either." Rowan stared at him like Ethan had just insulted a loaded gun at point-blank range. Even in the outcast world, this type of monsters were nightmares. And this idiot, this absolute madman, was provoking one on purpose. The hide snapped. It lunged, claws tearing up soil, jaws wide with a gurgling rack. Ethan disappeared one blink, and reappeared directly in front of the monster. His fist rose. Then, boom! The uppercut connected with a sickening, wet crack, a shockwave bursting through the clearing. Blood misted the air. The hide's head snapped upward, body lifting clean off the ground before it was launched back like a rag doll. It smashed into a tree with enough force to split the trunk, bark flying in splinters. A smear of dark, thick blood streaked down the wood. Ethan shook out his hand casually. He hadn't used his full 50-ton punch. If he had, the hide's head would have burst like a grotesque piñata. 20% was all he'd needed. The monster groaned an ugly, bubbling sound, then dragged itself upright. It cast Ethan a look full of primal hatred and fear. Then it turned and bolted, crashing through the trees in a panic retreat. What is that thing?" Rowan asked, voice trembling. Ethan glanced at him, brows lifting. "Wow, you're still conscious? Impressive." "What do you?" Rowan stopped as Ethan pointed to his abdomen. Only then did Rowan look down. Blood was soaking through his shirt, dripping in steady, warm rivulets between his fingers. The sight hit him a second too late. His brain went white, the adrenaline crash slamming into him like a truck. His knees buckled. He hit the ground with a dull thud. "Yeah," Ethan muttered, crouching beside him. Adrenaline kept him on his feet. "That's gone now." Wednesday barely spared Rowan a glance. Her eyes were fixed on the direction the monster had vanished, the wood swallowing its shape entirely. Her fingers tightened around the old sketch Rowan had thrust at her drawing from 25 years ago. "So that's the creature in the woods," Wednesday said, voice low but steady, piecing the puzzle together. "The same one from my vision." She looked down at the drawing again, aged paper, fading ink, her own face staring back at her from years before she was even born. A monster stalking the forest. A prophecy of mass destruction. And now Ethan, this strange, irritating, smug vampire with supernatural strength that absolutely did not match what any vampire should have. Standing there like this was a mild inconvenience. Wednesday's lips curved the slightest fraction. "This case," she murmured, "just became far more interesting. Told you the festival would be worth attending." Ethan bent down and hooked an arm under Rowan's limp body, lifting him with effortless ease. Blood smeared across his sleeve, warm and sticky. Rowan didn't have much time. Even an outcast would bleed out at this rate. "Where are you going?" Wednesday asked, eyes narrowing. "Hospital," Ethan replied without looking back. "Can't you see I have a patient?" He started walking, Rowan hanging unconscious against his shoulder like a rag doll. Wednesday's boots crunched on the leaves as she followed a few steps. "You're avoiding the question." "What question?" "How you knew this would happen." Her tone was flat, but the implication was razor-sharp. Ethan paused mid-stride, turning his head just enough for the moonlight to catch his smirk. "Didn't you know, Wednesday?" he said. "A man with secrets is attractive." Wednesday stared, unimpressed. Ethan chuckled. "And besides, wouldn't you rather uncover it on your own?" Wednesday didn't bother following Ethan. Rowan bleeding out in his arms was a problem, just not her problem. She had far more pressing matters than babysitting an unconscious telekinetic and an overconfident vampire. She slipped the drawing deeper into her coat and turned toward the distant glow of the festival lights. There was only one logical next step: notify the police. And she would make sure Ethan Corvin landed directly on their investigation list. She was certain he was linked to that creature somehow because there was no logical explanation for how he predicted its appearance so precisely. 21, Chapter 21, Witnesses and Liars. The aftermath of the Harvest Festival unraveled slowly, like fog refusing to lift. Wednesday gave her statement to the sheriff clear, concise, and utterly ignored. She described the creature, the attack, and Rowan's collapse. But disbelief hung in the air like a foul odor. Part of it wasn't surprising. Rowan, the only one who could confirm her story, had already been rushed out of Jericho. Too much blood loss, too weak to stabilize, and now in a coma several towns away. One witness gone. The second witness was Ethan. And Ethan's statement contradicted hers entirely. Sheriff Galpin read from his notes, brow furrowed. "He says it was dark, hard to see, looked like a large bear." Wednesday's jaw tightened. "He is lying. Or he's telling the truth," the sheriff countered. "You said yourself it was chaotic. Lights, noise." "Sheriff," she said, voice flat, "I can distinguish between a bear and a monster." Before he could answer, Principal Weems arrived, composed and determined to shut the entire incident down. "Sheriff, I assure you," she said, "there was no monster on school grounds or in the woods." Student Ethan's statement aligns with that. A simple wildlife encounter, unfortunate, but not unusual. Children have active imaginations, especially Wednesday. Jericho couldn't afford panic. Nevermore couldn't afford bad press. And Weemsever, the pristine image-obsessed headmistress, would rather rewrite reality itself than allow the words monster attack drift anywhere near a newspaper. A single headline was all it would take to shatter the fragile, barely functioning truce between normies and outcasts. That relationship was already hanging by a thread. Weems wasn't about to let Wednesday snap it. So, of course, she shut everything down. Denied Wednesday's report. Supported Ethan's. It was probably a bare statement. So, the sheriff said, closing his notebook, no creature, no proof, and the main victim can't speak. Until we get more, this stays classified as an animal incident. Wednesday didn't argue. She simply stood, silent and unblinking. They could ignore her, dismiss her, call her delusional. But the drawing hidden in her coat, the blood on the leaves, and the memory of Monster told her otherwise. Someone was lying, and Wednesday Addams had no intention of letting either remain hidden. Just like that, Wednesday became famous at Nevermore for all the wrong reasons. Word traveled fast. The new girl had claimed she saw a monster in the woods, a story no one could verify and the adults dismissed outright. By breakfast the next morning, half the school had already decided she was an attention seeker. The other half simply thought she was weird even by Nevermore standards. Whispers followed her down hallways. Stares lingered a little too long. And every time she passed a cluster of students, someone inevitably muttered, "That's the girl who made up the monster." Wednesday sat at her desk in the dorm, the old sketch spread out beneath the lamplight. Her eyes traced every jagged line, every shadowed figure, hunting for anything that might tie it to an actual source. An author. A book. Behind her, Enid fidgeted behind Wednesday, the silence stretching like a rubber band about to snap. "If you're trying to annoy me with your staring," Wednesday said flatly, still not looking up, "you've succeeded. Now say what you want to say." Enid hesitated for half a second before blurting, "I'm just curious. Did you really see a monster?" Wednesday didn't sigh, but it felt like she did. "Yes. And I'm not desperate enough to invent stories for the sake of impressing a crowd of hormonally imbalanced teenagers." Then was Ethan lying? Wednesday finally lifted her gazen out at Enid, but past her, as if seeing through walls, through lies, through people. "He wasn't lying," she said. "He was hiding something." Enid blinked. "You think he's involved?" "I don't think," Wednesday corrected. "He predicted the monster's appearance. He fought it off. And somehow, he walked away without a single scratch." "So you're investigating him too?" "Of course." Wednesday folded the drawing with precise fingers. "Anyone connected to the creature willingly or not goes on my list." "So how did he fight it?" Enid asked, suddenly brightening. Her eyes practically sparkled. "Was it, like super badass? Did he do a flip? Or punches? Please tell me there were punches." Wednesday didn't even bother looking up from the sketch. "I don't have time to explain," she said flatly. "And if you don't get out of my way, I can't get to the library." Enid's excitement deflated instantly. Her shoulders dropped, ears practically folding like a scolded puppy. "Oh okay," she murmured, clearly disappointed. 22 Chapter 22 The System Hates Warning Labels. A/N The Patreon version is already updated to Chapter 31, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. By joining, you directly support the faster growth of this story and help me keep releasing chapters more frequently. Thank you for your support. And the person responsible for most of Wednesday's current chaos was, at that very moment, doing absolutely nothing responsible at all. Ethan lounged on the thick branch of an old pine deep in the woods, one leg dangling lazily, the other braced against the trunk. In his hand, he swirled a small glass vial filled with dark red liquid. Rowan's blood. Don't ask how he got it. Was better for everyone's sanity not to know. Ethan considered it compensation. After all, he saved Rowan's life. A little fee wasn't unreasonable. Since he is a Da Vinci, Ethan muttered to himself, this should net me at least 600 points. He tapped the vial. A soft ding echoed not from the glass, but from somewhere far less physical. He smirked and flicked his finger. Recycle. The vial dissolved into motes of blue light, scattering like digital fireflies. Then the system chimed again. Da Vinci blood detected. Recycling. Recycle halted. Suitable trait found in blood. Ethan froze mid-lounge. "Ha, that's new." His brow furrowed. Hyde blood hadn't triggered anything like this. Nothing had. This was the first time a suitable trait popped up in the readout. He waited. The system as usual offered him no explanation. It simply continued its silent, mechanical process. Extracting the trait telekinesis. Extraction complete. Initiation merging with host. Merge wa. A red sphere blinked into existence right in front of Ethan's face. VSSSH. It shot straight into his forehead. Everything went white. Gah! The pain hit like a sledgehammer through his skull. His vision blurred, his ears rang, and the branch under him suddenly felt a mile away because he wasn't on it anymore. Thump! He hit the ground back first, the shock forcing the air out of his lungs. KH. He curled up, palms digging into the dirt as the pain kept climbing. It wasn't just a headache, it felt like something was twisting nerves, forcing new pathways into his brain with a hot drill. His pulse hammered in his ears. Dum 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 dum. His eyes flashed red. His fangs shot out. His fingers clawed at the grass like he was trying to ground himself. STOP's top fuck. But it didn't. A wave of anger punched through him out of nowhere, sharp and feral, like something else was pulling on his instincts. He staggered to his feet, half-blind, grabbing the nearest tree for balance. And instead he crushed the bark under his fingers with a crack. He didn't even mean to. The surge in his body was that overwhelming. RRGH. He pulled it and the whole young tree tore out of the ground in a shower of dirt and snapping roots. Before he could think, he swung it. Wham! The uprooted trunk smashed into a thicker tree. Bark exploded off it. The impact echoed through the forest with a deep thwoom. Ethan stumbled back. His hands were shaking hard now, not with anger, but with the aftershocks ripping through his skull. His head throbbed in pulses. Throb throb throb. He fell to one knee. A sheet. Shit. It felt like someone was peeling open the inside of his brain and rewiring it, piece by piece. He pressed both hands to his temples. His fingernails dug into his scalp. Finally, after what felt like minute-test pain began to ebb, leaving behind a ringing numbness. That was not awesome, he panted, collapsing onto the ground. Holy telekinesis really screws with your head. No wonder Rowan acts like he's 2 steps from a breakdown. The system window flickered quietly beside him. Ethan glared at it with bloodshot eyes. Annual warning. Just one. Is that too much to ask? I'm not a damn puzzle box you can shove random powers into. The system didn't respond. It just floated, unbothered. Like almost turning him feral was a normal Tuesday function. Ethan groaned and lay back against the splintered remains of a stump, rubbing his temples as the last vibrations faded. Good thing I'm in the forest, Ethan said under his breath. His head still throbbed in dull pulses, like someone tapping metal against bone. If that happened at school, I'd definitely have broken something or someone. He looked at the mess he'd made. A whole tree lay on its side, roots sticking out of the dirt like snapped wires. He didn't even remember grabbing it, just a blur of pain and irritation before everything went sideways. As he stepped around the fallen trunk, he noticed movement, small, careful, way too intentional to be an animal. A hand-shaped silhouette clung to the side of the bark. Ethan stared at it for a moment. Thing. The hand froze, as if hoping he hadn't actually seen it. Then it slowly curled its fingers inward, like someone caught eavesdropping. Of course. Wednesday must have sent him. Ethan let out a quiet sigh. Not annoyed, just tired. So she's already spying on me, he said plainly. Figures. Thing gave a tiny shrug, more apologetic than defensive, as if to say it wasn't my idea. 23, Chapter 23, The Nightshade's Clue. So, Thing, Ethan said, still rubbing the side of his head, do you have anything to say? Something along the lines of it's not good to spy on people. Thing froze for a beat. Then slowly, deliberately, he curled his fingers into a very pointed "Are you serious right now?" gesture. Ethan squinted. What's that supposed to mean? Thing snapped his fingers twice, wagged them accusingly, and mimed looking around corners, peeking through bushes, and doing an exaggerated tiptoe. Ethan blinked. Are you accusing me of spying? Thing nodded so hard his whole palm bounced. When? Ethan demanded. Thing tapped 2 fingers together. 2 days ago. Oh, come on. Ethan waved a dismissive hand. That wasn't spying, that was situational awareness. Thing tilted his hand flat, wobbling it in a not even close motion. Ethan frowned. You're really committed to this slander, huh? Thing planted himself on the fallen tree and crossed his fingers like arms, unimpressed. Ethan exhaled through his nose. If you're here to report back to Wednesday, just go ahead. I'm not exactly plotting world domination. Thing hesitated, pointed at Ethan, then at the crater where the uprooted tree had been, and mimed a tiny explosion. Ethan blinked. What, you want to say I'm not single-handedly causing deforestation? He said, deadpan. Thing slapped his palm against the Barkai's version of a world-weary sigh, then pointed at Ethan again, then at Ethan's temple, then gave a slow, wobbly wiggle. You're asking if I'm fine? Ethan guessed. A firm, quick nod. Ethan snorted. Physically? Yeah. Mentally? Debatable. But I'm walking, talking, not frothing at the mouth, so we'll call it fine. Thing didn't buy it, then made a wavy gesture that all but spelled out that wasn't normal. Thanks for worrying, Ethan said, stretching his arms overhead. But I'm fine. Really? Thing wiggled his fingers in a doubtful "Are you sure?" And hey, Ethan added, far too casually, if you're ever free, we could hang out. I know a great beauty parlor. Manicures, treatments, works. Thing paused. Actually paused. He glanced at his own fingers, flexed them, inspected the nails with the tiniest hint of vanity. Ethan caught it instantly. Oh, tempting, isn't it? Thing jolted like someone snapped him back to reality, shook himself, and wagged his fingers in a stern no. What? You don't think you'd look great with a little polish? Ethan pressed. Nice shine, some cuticle work. Thing tapped the bark twice, pointed at himself, then made a gesture like locking a vault. He wanted to, but he refused. So you are tempted, Ethan concluded. Thing slapped down a hand in a sharp absolutely not. Not happening. But his fingers still twitched barely, but enough. Ethan raised a brow. You sure? I'm just saying you'd pull off a glossy finish. Thing curled his fingers protectively, then signed, firm and indignant. I can't be bought. Ethan smirked. Didn't say I was buying you, but you looked interested. He stretched, dusted off his hands, and added with a shrug, anyway, go say all that to Wednesday. Wednesday combed through the library's history section, fingers gliding across cracked spines and dusty covers. She wasn't browsing, she was hunting. The drawing's watermark had to come from somewhere, and books never lied the way people did. Looking for something special. Marilyn Thornhill's cheerful voice floated over from behind a shelf. Wednesday did not bother hiding her irritation. Privacy. Marilyn stepped closer anyway, peering curiously at the folded page in Wednesday's hand. Oh, that symbol. She tapped the faint watermark with far too much enthusiasm. That's from the Nightshade Society. Wednesday stared at her, unimpressed. Fascinating. Marilyn smiled, oblivious. If you're digging into school history, be careful. Some things are better left untouched. Wednesday walked away before the woman could infect her with another sunny monologue. She glanced at the symbol, at least now she knew what it was, when suddenly a vision snapped into her skull like a mousetrap. Flashes. Rowan standing beneath the balcony. the gargoyle shuddering then falling, Xavier shouting at him afterward, anger sharp and messy, Rowan tearing a page from an old Bunith very drawing she held before running out of the library. The vision broke. Wednesday steadied herself against the shelf, breathing out slowly. She returned to Ophelia Hall with a new target in mind. If the book he stole from was still in his room, she would find it. Answers did not hide from her, they only prolonged the inevitable. When she opened her door, Thing scuttled onto the desk and began tapping urgently. You found him. Wednesday folded her arms. Explain. Thing launched into a frantic series of gestures. Ethan in the woods, Ethan losing control, Ethan smashing a tree as if it were made of cardboard, Ethan momentarily looking like something that did not belong on school grounds. For a moment, he didn't look human. Not even close. Wednesday listened in absolute silence. When he finished, she asked, anything else? Thing hesitated, then mimed pointing at Ethan, then himself, then shrugged. Then he acted out Ethan waving dismissively, as if being spied on meant nothing. And finally Thing mimed Ethan pointing toward Wednesday as if he wanted her to hear all of this. Wednesday's expression tightened, the kind of thoughtful frown she usually reserved for murder scenes and poorly tuned cellos. I see. She sat down on her bed. The mystery around Ethan Corvin grows more convoluted by the hour. A self-proclaimed vampire with impossible strength. A monster attack he predicted. And now sudden loss of control witnessed by a severed hand. Her gaze sharpened. Layers on layers. Like a Russian nesting doll filled with red flags. Thing tapped in agreement. But mysteries, Wednesday said calmly, are finite. They all have answers. And I fully intend to dissect every last one of his. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 32, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. By joining, you directly support the faster growth of this story and help me keep releasing chapters more frequently. Thank you for your support. 24, Chapter 24, Made for Each Other. Wednesday slipped soundlessly into Rowan's room. She sifted through drawers, overturned notebooks, and examined every spine on the shelf, yet the book from her vision remained conspicuously absent. Her eyes drifted back to the image seared into her mind, Rowan clutching a leather-bound tome, its strange sigil glowing faintly. A bookshelf. Not his bookshelf. Somewhere else. Somewhere she hadn't yet searched. Wednesday pivoted toward the door, ready to move on. The knob rattled. She dropped to the floor and slid under the bed before the sound even faded. The door creaked open, and in came Xavier and Bianca, mid-argument, too wrapped up in themselves to notice the raven-haired girl tucked under the bed. Bianca's voice cut through the silence, first cool, sharp, almost bored. Seriously, Xavier, what do you even see in her? Xavier sighed, running a hand through his hair. You mean Wednesday? Bianca scoffed. Who else? Tragic goth girl. Funeral parlor fashion sense. Permanent scowl. It's not exactly subtle. Maybe, he muttered, because she hasn't tried to manipulate me. Bianca's jaw tightened. I make one mistake, and you act like I cursed your entire bloodline. She treats you like crap, Bianca continued, stepping closer. And you just can't get enough. It's pathetic. Xavier turned away from her, but Bianca wasn't done, not even close. Why are you so fixated on Wednesday? Because she thinks she's better than everyone. Xavier didn't argue. Bianca rolled her eyes dramatically. Ugh. I can't wait to crush Ophelia Hall tomorrow and watch her werewolf roommate crumble. It's going to be a Pokop finale worth remembering. Xavier's tone sharpened. I hate to think what you've got planned. My game already started, Bianca said, smiling that razor-thin smile of hers. I like winning. Is that a crime? And that, Xavier replied, finally meeting her gaze, is why I broke up with you. Bianca's smile faltered. Only barely. You used to love my killer instinct, she said quietly. We were good together, Xavier. Were we? He asked. Or is that just what you wanted me to feel? Her eyes narrowed, wounded pride flaring. Trust me, Wednesday Addams is not the girl of your dreams. Her voice softened into a cold whisper. She's the stuff of your nightmares. Below the bed, Wednesday allowed herself the faintest smile. Finally, someone who understands. But Bianca's voice quickly soured the moment. Her words weren't idle gossip, there was calculation in them, a venomous edge. And Wednesday could hear enough to piece together the obvious. Bianca had something planned for the Pokop. Something underhanded. Something that would undoubtedly involve Enid. Wednesday's eyes narrowed. Sabotaging the competition was expected behavior from Bianca Barkley, but targeting Enid? Bianca shifted her tone then, lighter, sharper. And Xavier, you should give up. There's already a well-suited guy for Wednesday. Xavier stiffened. Who? Bianca's laugh was low and delightfully cruel. That arrogant piece of shit, Ethan. They're made for each other, both think they're above everyone else. And the moment they talk, they get even worse. She paused in the doorway. Honestly, they deserve each other. Bianca left, the door clicking shut behind her. Xavier stood there a moment, baffled. Ethan? Him? What is she even talking about? Wednesday observed him from the shadows beneath the bed, expression unreadable. Bianca's assessment was irritating and inaccurate. Ethan wasn't well-suited. He was simply another anomaly, loud, inconvenient, and catastrophically overconfident. A puzzle she had not yet chosen to solve. But Bianca's plan to sabotage Enid? That, Wednesday would not tolerate. Not out of affection. Not out of friendship. But because nothing delighted her more than dismantling someone's carefully crafted scheme and watching their face collapse under the weight of failure. Bianca Barkley needed to learn that lesson. Once Xavier finally exited Rowan's room, Wednesday slid out from beneath the bed, silent and composed. She walked down the corridor, intent on leaving the boys' dorm, only to stop as another figure rounded the corner. Ethan Corvin, carrying a takeout box. They stared at each other, equally unimpressed by the other's existence. Wednesday, Ethan said, raising a brow. You do know this is the boys' hall. That didn't stop you from sneaking into Ophelia Hall 3 days ago, Wednesday replied dryly. Why should I be bound by limitations you ignore? Ethan blinked, conceding with a shrug. Fair. He clearly had no moral high ground. He'd violated several in-school rules in one night alone. As Wednesday moved past him, a scent drifted from the pizza box, strong, pungent, impossible to miss. She paused. Is there garlic in that? Ethan glanced at the box. Yeah, garlic bread. With roasted chicken. Why? Do you like garlic or something? His confusion was almost endearing in a pathetic, small-brain sort of way. Want some? He offered, lifting the lid slightly. Wednesday stared at him for a beat. She said nothing. She simply turned on her heel and walked away. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 33, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 25, Chapter 25, Black Cats. Wednesday pushed open her room door, only to immediately be confronted by a trembling rainbow blur. Enid was standing in front of her, eyes red and glassy, claws half out like a stressed Pomeranian that had lost a beauty pageant. Where have you been? Enid demanded, voice cracking. I'm literally having a heart attack right now. Wednesday blinked once. You're still standing. You'll live. I will not. Enid pressed a hand dramatically to her chest. Yoko's in the infirmary. Wednesday paused. What happened? Garlic bread incident at dinner, Enid sniffled. She had a major allergic reaction. She's out of the po-cup. I don't have a co-pilot. I am doomed. It wasn't an accident, she said flatly. Bianca's behind it. Enid's ears perked. How do you know? Doesn't matter. Wednesday stepped past her, already mentally dismantling Bianca's sabotage strategies. You and I are going to take her down tomorrow. Enid blinked rapidly. Wait, you rejoining the Black Cats? You're willing to do that? For me? Wednesday turned her head slowly, her expression colder than the morgue she'd like to retire in someday. I want to humiliate Bianca so thoroughly that the bitter taste of defeat burns in her throat for the rest of the semester. Enid smiled, hopeful. Yeah, but mostly you're doing it because we're friends, right? Wednesday didn't even dignify that with eye contact. Instead, she turned toward her desk and changed the subject entirely. Tell me how she keeps winning. It's a real brain cramp. The past 2 years, no other boat has made it across and back without sinking. Sounds like sabotage. Oh, totally, Enid said, pacing. There are no rules in the po-cup, and she's a siren. Water is literally her home turf. Wednesday's expression flattened further. So she weaponizes her biology to win. Predictable. Enid stopped pacing. What do we do? I mean, how do we even beat that? Simple, Wednesday said. We beat her at her own game. The next day marked the po-cup at Nevermore Academy. Students gathered at the river's edge, where the old wooden jetty creaked under their weight. Boats lined the shore, each team ready to race upriver toward Raven Island. There, at Crackstone's crypt, they would retrieve their team flag and return it to the starting jetty. First to cross the finish line would claim victory. The po-cup wasn't just a race. It had been a Nevermore tradition for decades, designed to test cunning, endurance, and resourcefulness. Principal Weems stood at the edge of the jetty, addressing the students. The po-cup tests more than speed, she said. Strategy, coordination, and ingenuity matter just as much. Each hall competes for supremacy, and the first to return with their flag from Crackstone's crypt wins. At the Black Cat's tent, the Ophelia Hall team was putting the finishing touches on their costumes. Enid twirled excitedly in her Black Cat outfit, tail swishing. OMG, you look perfect. Only thing, where are your whiskers? Wednesday didn't look up, her expression deadpan. Ask again, and you'll be down to 8 lives. Enid blinked, a grin spreading despite herself. Noted. 8 lives. Got it. And then like some game monster suddenly spawning, Ethan appeared out of nowhere, materializing with zero warning and far too much enthusiasm. You two really look good in those costumes, Ethan said, stepping closer with a camera in hand, already angling for the best shot. So, now give a cute pose for the camera, he added. It's not every day Wednesday shows up in a new outfit. We should treasure this moment. Wednesday's eyes narrowed slightly, unamused. I do not pose for trivialities, she said flatly. Enid, on the other hand, practically bounced with excitement. Come on, Wednesday. Just one. For me. Wednesday's lips twitched, almost imperceptibly, but she remained rooted, arms crossed. Enid, undeterred, grabbed Wednesday's arm lightly. Fine Fenione quick pose. That's all I ask. Okay, Wednesday replied, her voice flat but compliant. Enid pressed herself against Wednesday, curling her fingers like tiny claws and giving a playful hiss. Okay, smile, Ethan said, raising his camera. Wednesday's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but a hint of acknowledgement. Enid beamed beside her, practically glowing in excitement. Clicked camera caught the contrast perfectly, Enid's exuberance, Wednesday's cold composure, their Black Cat costumes fitting them like a storybook scene come to life. Perfect, Ethan said, lowering the camera with a satisfied grin. Then he tilted it toward himself. Selfie time, he added. Enid leaned in again, cheeks pressed to Wednesday's shoulder. Another shot, this time with Ethan included beside Wednesday, his sharp vampire features caught in the frame. Done, Ethan announced, finally lowering the camera. That's going straight to the archives of rare memories. 26, Chapter 26, The Monster on the Ceiling. The gun fired, and the boats lurched forward. Water slapped rhythmically against the hull as Enid rode with bright, almost puppy-like enthusiasm, while Wednesday's strokes were clean, steady, and mercilessly efficient. After a few moments, Enid sneaked a breathless sideways glance. "Hey, Wednesday you don't like Ethan, right?" Wednesday didn't bother looking up. "No, I regard him solely as a puzzle. A mildly irritating one. You may continue your emotional flailing uninterrupted." Enid's ears perked. "So you don't mind if I maybe make a move on him?" "You may do whatever you wish," Wednesday replied, voice flat as the lake. "I'm not blind to your feelings. Your face turns into a feverish rainbow every time he walks by." She paused mid-stroke, eyes narrowing. "But consider this a warning. He may be more than you can safely handle. I suggest pursuing someone less volatile." Enid nearly missed a row. "Wednesday, seriously, where else am I supposed to find someone who's handsome, sweet, and actually understanding? He's like the perfect supernatural starter pack." "You forgot arrogant." Enid shrugged, puffing out a breath. "I mean, boys can be a little arrogant sometimes." "His arrogance," Wednesday corrected, "is not little. It is architectural, foundational. The load-bearing beam in a very poorly constructed house." Enid puffed out her cheeks. "You're overthinking it." Wednesday opened her mouth, no doubt preparing to eviscerate Enid's optimism with a single, surgical sentence. But she never got the chance. A violent crack slammed against their boat. Another team's bow rammed into their side, jerking the Black Cat's boat hard to the left. The impact sent all four girls lurching as water splashed up and over the edges. Enid yelped, "Hey, watch it." They scrambled to stabilize the boat, oars scraping and clacking as they fought for balance. The rival team sped past, shouting something rude and triumphant as they tried to pull ahead. Wednesday shot Enid a look, and Enid immediately understood. Conversation paused. The poke-up came first. Ethan stood among the cheering crowd, arms folded, expression bordering on bored. He already knew how this little spectacle would unfold. Wednesday would win. She'd reach Crackstone's crypt, trigger that vision of her ancestor Goody Adams, and the mystery surrounding Jericho would twist itself one layer deeper. Predictable but still mildly entertaining. He was only halfway through a yawn when something sharp jabbed between his shoulder blades. Ethan froze. Instinctively, he reached back and plucked out the object, a mangled syringe, its needle bent and crushed as if it had tried to pierce something far harder than flesh. "What the hell?" he muttered, examining the ruined injector. Then he noticed the content inside. Recognition flickered. Nightshade poison. His jaw clenched. Even with his regeneration, that was not a substance he cared to test. And the fact that someone had slipped close enough to stab him without him sensing a thing, that pissed him off more than the poison itself. His eyes flared red for a heartbeat just long enough for the couple beside him to edge away nervously. Ethan swept the crowd with a cold, measured stare. Nothing. No lingering presence. No suspicious heartbeat. Whoever had done it was careful and quick enough to disappear before he turned. But he didn't need a face. He already knew. There was only one person in Jericho petty enough, reckless enough, and idiotic enough to use Nightshade poison on him. Laurel Gates. "That bitch," Ethan muttered. He slid the broken syringe into his pocket, his expression sharpening into something colder, hungrier. So Laurel wanted to get rid of him early? How adorable. "It seems I should pay her a visit," he murmured, amusement curling through the words, "and remind her what happens when you try to pick a fight with a monster." In the botanical sciences teaching room just the greenhouse, warm and humid even in daylight, Marilyn Thornhill was seething. Her plan had been simple: get close, inject the nightshade, let the freakish vampire collapse somewhere discreet. Especially after learning how easily he overpowered Tyler, she couldn't risk letting him live. But instead, what the fuck is he made of? Marilyn hissed, slamming her hands on the workbench. The metal needle lay snapped clean in half when she tried to inject him, like it had hit stone instead of skin. It didn't even pierce him. She'd bolted the moment the needle snapped, slipping out before he turned around, leaving the nightshade vial there in her rush. Sloppy, but unavoidable. Still, she wasn't worried. That outcast animal can't find her as she retreated too fast for anyone else to notice her presence. Marilyn pressed her palms against her temples, breathing hard. She had to kill him. If that guy stayed alive, he would become more than an inconvenience. He would become a threat, a thorn straight through her entire plan, and she couldn't afford any more surprises. Then footsteps came, soft at first, then echoing unnaturally through the greenhouse, as if the walls themselves were carrying the sound. Marilyn froze. You know, a cold voice drifted through the humid air, calm enough to be terrifying. "I wanted to leave you alone, let you finish whatever pathetic little scheme you're running." The voice sharpened. "But you just had to mess with me." A shiver ripped down her spine. She spun around. No one. Empty aisles, silent plants, nothing but the faint hiss of the sprinklers. "Up here," the voice snapped, flat and venomous. "Look up, you dumb bitch." Her breath hitched as she slowly tilted her head back toward the greenhouse glass, and her blood ran ice cold. Ethan was walking on the ceiling, upside down, hands behind his back, as if gravity simply did not apply to him. His eyes glowed red, not with rage, but with something worse, amusement. Then he jerked his neck in a quick, unnatural twitch, the kind that felt wrong just to witness. A smile crept across his face, sharp and humorless. "You," he whispered, voice echoing like a threat carved into a bone, "are so screwed." A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 36, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 27, Chapter 27, Warning. He dropped from the ceiling without warning. No crouch, no sound. Just a dead fall like a corpse tossed from a great high tide. He landed upright, silent, balanced, and effortless. Marilyn staggered back, panic flaring. She spun to run, but Ethan was already there. No blur, no wind, just there. Going somewhere? He asked, voice soft enough to be lethal. Marilyn froze, heart pounding against her ribs as she backed away. You know, Ethan murmured, stepping closer, the shadows behind him crawling like they obeyed him. There's one thing no one knows about me. Not even the people who work for me. He kept walking forward, slow and deliberate, eyes glowing with cold amusement. They all think I'm just a rich vampire. But they made one mistake. I'm not just a vampire. His voice dropped, low and predatory. I'm the thing nightmares remember. Marilyn's breath hitched, but she kept edging backward. Ethan's smile sharp and slow, cruel, hungry. The kind humans feared in the dark. The kind whose name alone made blood run cold. The real blood-drinking monsters. He moved closer, his presence pressing in like a closing fist. Unholy. Strong enough to tear a grown man in half. He tilted his head, bones cracking in a way no neck should bend. And completely, beautifully cruel. His smile widened, teeth just a bit too sharp, eyes too bright, his whole existence just slightly wrong, like something wearing the shape of a man but failing to hide the monster underneath. And for the first time, Marilyn Thornhill, zealot, hater, killer, felt something cold and ancient coil through her spine. Fear. The real kind. The kind that whispers. So tell me, Ethan breathed, what made you think you could poison such a monster? Her throat seized. Not a single sound escaped. She wanted to spit it at him, nothing but a blood-sucking mosquito. But the words died before they could form. Ethan studied her like a biologist examining a failing specimen. I could let it slide. Let you live. A pause. You're still useful to me. Then his eyes went cold. But not without consequences. Marilyn didn't even have time to register the movement. Her right arm twisted by an invisible force that bent bone like wet clay. Crack. Ah. A third break, loud and sickening. Crack, crack, crack. Her arm folded into a shape no body should make, joints bending the wrong direction, bone pushing beneath skin. Marilyn collapsed, screaming so loud her voice tore. Ah. Stop, Alicia. Ethan watched her writhe, gaze flat with disinterest. Mark this as a reminder, he said, voice low, almost bored, not to touch me unless you have a death wish. He stepped past her as if stepping around a piece of trash, or someone capable of handling a monster. And then he walked outsolent, unhurried, leaving her broken on the floor. As Ethan stepped out of the greenhouse, he slipped the vial of Nightshade from his coat. A faint shimmer pulsed across the glass. Recycle. You have received 100 BP. Only 100. He muttered, unimpressed. Pathetic. He closed his fist, the vial dissolving into ash between his fingers. I'll use the method I planned. His plan was simple. Just ask Uncle Mike to visit a few hospitals and quietly collect outcast blood. Hard to obtain, yes, outcast blood was restricted, dangerous, and heavily monitored. But money could make impossible things happen. It would take time for Uncle Mike to gather enough, but Ethan wasn't worried. Once he had those bags, his BP would spike, and he could finally purchase the things he truly wanted. He wasn't in any hurry, especially now that he had telekinesis. Unlike Da Vinci, who needed their right hand to channel it, Ethan could use the power with nothing but a thought. Status. Name, Ethan Corvin. Age, 18. Race, pureblood vampire, evolution possible. Physical parameters. Punch force, 50 tons. Speed, 300 kilometers per hour. Durability, skin can withstand small caliber bullets. Stamina, unmatched. Telekinesis, 10 tons. Regeneration. Minor injuries heal instantly. Major injuries take time. Partial immortality, cannot die as long as body remains intact. Weaknesses, none. Blood points, 1,700. And on Wednesday's side, victory came exactly the way she preferred, efficient, merciless, and deeply satisfying. Their boat cut through the water, black and sleek, leaving Bianca and her siren-polished pride sinking behind them. Across them, Bianca stared at her with that tight, sour expression, jaw clenched, ego cracked. It was the same face she'd made in fencing class, that same little tremor of disbelief that someone dared outdo her. Wednesday savored it. Not openly, of course. Her features remained cool and expressionless, but inside, there was a flickering ember of satisfaction that warmed her far more than the cold lake water. Bianca's defeat was a symphony. And her expression? The perfect final note. If Wednesday could frame that look and hang it on her dorm wall, she would. Enid was jumping, cheering something obnoxiously bright beside her, but Wednesday barely registered it. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 39, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 28, Chapter 28, Nightshade Society. Night had settled over Nevermore Academy like a velvet shroud, quiet, watchful, and entirely too expectant. Wednesday stood before the Edgar Allan Poe statue. The bronze caught the light in that familiar smug tilt she'd noticed earlier, right before she'd spotted the faint watermark etched on the book he clutched. The same watermark tied to the Nightshade secret society. The same society she had been searching for. If there were any clues left on campus, she was certain they would be here. Nevermore remained an enigma, a nest of secrets wrapped in riddles, each one more irritatingly theatrical than the last. But sometimes the truth didn't bother hiding in the shadows. Sometimes it stared directly at you with a carved smirk. Wednesday raised her eyes to Poe's expression, unimpressed as always. Don't worry, Edgar Allan, she said, her tone flat and unhurried. I see it. And I'll get the last laugh. She stepped closer, lifting her flashlight to sweep across the engraved text on the stone book. The riddle sat there quietly, as if waiting to be solved or judged. Wednesday preferred the latter. With steady, efficient movements, she wrote the answers directly on the note. The opposite of moon. Sun, a world between ours. Nether, 2 months before June. April, a self-seeding flower. Pansy, one more than one. 2, its leaves weep to the ground. Willow, it melts in the sun. Ice, its beginning and end never found. Circle, every rule has one exception. She glanced at the list. The first letters lined up neatly, almost too conveniently. Snap twice. Predictable, she muttered. Raising her hand, she snapped her fingers once, twice. The sound echoed softly in the courtyard. A mechanism clicked inside the statue, followed by the slow, reluctant grind of old gears shifting into place. Poe's figure eased backward, revealing a narrow hidden door at its base. A breath of cold, stale air drifted out, carrying the smell of dust, stone, and secrets that had been left alone far too long. Wednesday descended the staircase, her flashlight cutting through the dim passage. She swept the beam across the walls. That's when she saw it. A framed photograph. She stepped closer, the light settling on familiar faces. Her parents Morticia and Gomez younger. Wednesday's expression didn't change. She studied the picture for a long, silent moment. Secret societies. Hidden rooms. Her parents involved. All the things she already expects. She moved the flashlight again and spotted the same book she'd seen in her vision. She picked it up and slipped them into her bag without hesitation. But before she could turn, someone grabbed her from behind. A hand clamped over her mouth, and a black bag was pulled over her head before she could react. Let's assess, shall we? Bag over her head for optimal disorientation. Wrists tight enough to numb her fingers. And no confirmation yet on whether this was a threat or an inconvenience. Definitely my kind of party. The bag lifted, and Wednesday found herself surrounded by hooded figures in owl masks. Who dares breach our inner sanctum? One of them demanded. You can take the mask off, Bianca, Wednesday said. Her tone carried a level of disappointment normally reserved for failed dissections. And just like that, my hope smashed against the rocks of bitter disappointment. My foe wasn't a psychotic killer, just a group of high school clowns. The hooded figures froze, eyes widening behind their masks. One whispered, she knows. Slowly, hoods came down one by one. Her classmates. Nothing mythical, nothing impressive. Wednesday raised an eyebrow. Wait, I prefer you keep your mask on, she said, her gaze settling on Bianca. Bianca's jaw tightened. How did you even find this place, Wednesday? I have my ways. Then her eyes shifted toward the stairwell. And Ethan, you should come out. I can see you. Bianca snapped her head around. He's here? That arrogant guy. For a moment, silence. Then slow, deliberate claps echoed from the staircase. Ethan stepped forward into the dim light, looking perfectly relaxed for someone who had been hiding. As expected, he said, amused, these morons didn't even notice who was right behind them. But you somehow spotted me. He wasn't mocking, he was impressed. Ethan hadn't planned to be part of this. He'd only been heading out for a drink when he noticed Wednesday sneaking across the courtyard. Curiosity made him follow her, staying in the shadows, confident he was unseen. He was certain he hadn't made a sound. So when she pointed him out so easily, it surprised him. He didn't know whether he'd slipped up or whether Wednesday's observation skills were simply far better than he expected. 29, Chapter 29, an emotion she disliked. Who are you calling morons? Bianca snapped, anger sharp in her voice. Of course she was irritated out of all people to show up in a secret room only a handful of students knew about. It had to be the two she disliked most. One had humiliated her in a fencing match. The other had beaten her in the Poe Cup. And now he was calling her a moron. Anyone would be pissed. I didn't call you moron, Ethan said, his tone the same careless one that earned him enemies on a weekly basis. I meant the people who didn't realize someone was watching them. So are you those people? Every Nightshade member who heard him felt an immediate urge to swing at him. He wasn't subtle. They all knew exactly what he meant. He had called them morons just in a roundabout way. We are not, Xavier said firmly. And you shouldn't be here. This room is for Nightshade members only. Non-members aren't allowed. Yeah, Bianca added, shooting Ethan a glare. You're not one of us. So you on that creep should get out. Ethan looked around the room, taking in the cloaks, the masks, the dramatic lighting. So what, you're some kind of big shots? He asked. This is your little secret room and I'm not allowed in. We're Nightshades, Ajax said, puffing up slightly. An elite social club. Ethan snorted. Yeah, I know the type. A bunch of adolescents sneaking around pretending they're mysterious. Rooftop parties, campouts, the occasional midnight skinny dip. He gestured vaguely at the room. You might as well call yourselves a themed after-school hobby. The Nightshades bristled. Bianca folded her arms. We preserve tradition. Sure, Ethan replied. Nothing screams tradition like teenagers in costumes. Can you get out? Xavier snapped. You're not welcome here. There was an edge to his voice, sharp, irritated. Jealousy didn't suit him, but it was obvious enough. He was jealous of Wednesday's closeness to Ethan. That's where you made a mistake, Ethan said calmly. There isn't a place in Nevermore I can't go. Bianca folded her arms. And why is that? Because, Ethan replied casually, I'm the sponsor of this school. Silence followed. Not the dramatic kind, just pure disbelief. What? Every Nightshade member said at once. You heard me. Ethan shrugged. I'm one of the people who donate money to keep this school running. In exchange, I get access to all facilities including this little club of yours. He gestured loosely toward the owl masks. If you have a problem with it, go complain to Weems. She'll confirm it. The Nightshades looked at one another, completely thrown by Ethan's revelation. While they were still processing it, Wednesday, who had been tied to a chair, quietly slipped her wrists free. She stood up without ceremony. No struggle. No effort. Just done. She picked up the discarded ropes and shoved them into Xavier's hands. I'm leaving, Wednesday said flatly. I refuse to witness this farce any longer. The Nightshades stared at her, stunned. She regarded them with mild disappointment, as though they were an unsatisfactory autopsy result. You all suck at kidnapping. Truly. If you don't know how to restrain someone, don't attempt it. It's embarrassing. She stepped toward the staircase. It's amateurs like you who give kidnapping a bad name, she added, her voice perfectly deadpan as she passed Ethan. Ethan lifted a hand, nodding along. She's right. This was painful to watch. Wednesday didn't slow. He fell into step beside her without hesitation. He followed Wednesday up the stairs without hesitation, leaving the Nightshades frozen in place, humiliated, confused, and unsure which one of them had just been insulted the most. As they walked through the quiet courtyard on their way back to the dorms. So that's why Principal Weems tolerates you, she said. Because you fund the school. Ethan didn't deny it. It helps. Wednesday nodded once, still processing. And that is also why you hid the information about the monster in the woods even though you clearly saw it. Ethan shook his head. No, there's another reason. One I'm sure you can figure out. Wednesday didn't hesitate. I already have a hypothesis. You and that creature share a connection. Thing said that in the woods you lost control and looked different. That only deepens my suspicions that you're tied to the monster and the incidents surrounding it. Ethan stopped walking. A short laugh escaped him, quiet, amused, almost mocking. Haha, Wednesday, you're completely off. Before she could respond, he stepped forward and pinned her against the stone wall, not violently, just firmly enough to make her look at him. His eyes met hers, and for a brief second, they glowed a deep, unnatural red. I have no relationship with that monster, he said, voice low and steady. But make no mistake, I am a monster. Just not one you understand. Wednesday didn't blink. Ethan pulled back slightly, his tone shifting back to casual. And by the way, in that book you took from the shelf, here's something interesting. Read it. You'll understand what it is. With that, he turned and walked away across the courtyard. Wednesday remained where she was, watching him disappear into the shadows. Her expression stayed still, but a small, unmistakable smile formed at the edge of her lips. For a moment, Wednesday noticed something else. Her heartbeat, usually steady and cold, thumped a little faster. Not out of fear. Not out of surprise. Just a strange emotion she couldn't immediately categorize. It was irritating, and it was interesting. Exactly the kind of sensation she disliked feeling yet couldn't ignore. This is annoying. Interesting, but annoying. Thing crawled out of her backpack and signed rapidly. You're smiling, and you seem happy. Wednesday snapped her gaze downward. I am not. Thing raised a skeptical finger. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 43, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 30, Chapter 30, Prophecy. After the encounter, Wednesday returned to her dorm. She pushed the door open to find Enid still wide awake, sitting cross-legged on her bed, her face completely obscured beneath a thick white mask. Enid looked up instantly. Oh, Wednesday, you're back. Wednesday paused, assessing her roommate like a specimen. May I ask why you currently resemble a prematurely embalmed corpse? Enid gasped. Rude. This is a hydrating face mask. I'm taking care of my skin. She sat up straighter. Tomorrow is outreach day. Jericho. Social interaction. She leaned forward, eyes glittering with misplaced optimism. And if I end up in the same group as Ethan, I need to look cute. Wednesday blinked once. Your survival instincts continue to disappoint me. Enid flopped onto her stomach. So did you get the thing you snuck out to get? Yes. Wednesday crossed the room, sat at her desk, and pulled the book from her bag. She opened it to the torn section, carefully fitting the missing page back into place. The full illustration finally came into view. Her eyes narrowed. On one side stood a figure unmistakably meant to be her, but opposite her another figure in pilgrim clothing, staring back like a silent threat carved into prophecy. A new hypothesis stitched itself together in her mind. According to Rowan, she was destined to destroy the school. His mother's visions had shown her standing amidst the burning quad, but the presence of this second figure, this unknown pilgrim, shifted the narrative. If she was truly the destroyer, why was someone else drawn into the prophecy? And who was he supposed to be? What are you looking at? Enid asked, stepping behind her. She leaned in, then immediately winced. Ugh, why are you looking at Crackstone's picture? You know this man? Enid nodded. Yeah, Joseph Crackstone, founding father of Jericho, old-timey pilgrim guy. Wednesday's eyes stayed on the page. The mystery was deepening in a way she found almost satisfying. Why had Rowan's mother seen Crackstone tied to her future? Why would a man who'd been dead for centuries appear in a prophecy involving her? Something wasn't aligning. Where can I go to learn more about him? Wednesday asked, still studying the drawing. Pilgrim World, Enid answered immediately. Yoko said they've got a whole collection of stuff connected to Crackstone's history, like way too much of it. Wednesday closed the book. Enid let out a dreamy sigh, kicking her feet in the air. I really hope I get placed in the same group as Ethan tomorrow. Maybe then I can finally ask him out. And to Raven. Her voice made it sound as if she were floating on a glitter-covered cloud. Wednesday looked at her, unimpressed. The comparison that formed in her mind was immediate and accurate. Enid resembled a cheerful rabbit eagerly delivering herself to a tiger. The next day, the quad. Students gathered in the quad in their uniforms with bags slung over their shoulders, lining up in loose groups as Principal Weems addressed them. Wednesday stood with her usual composure, while Enid shifted excitedly beside her. All students will report for their volunteer jobs at 10 a.m. sharp, Weems announced, followed by a community lunch at 1 o'clock. As you know, this year Outreach Day culminates in a very special event, dedication of a new memorial statue in the town square, which will also include performances by Nevermore students. A few students cheered. Enid elbowed her gently. So what assignment did you get? Pilgrim World, Wednesday replied. Yay, we actually get to be together this time. She immediately turned toward where Ethan was standing, receiving his own assignment. Enid clasped her hands dramatically. Please be Pilgrim World. Please be Pilgrim World. She whispered it like a prayer. Ethan finally finished reading his assignment and walked toward them. Enid practically jumped in front of him. What did you get, Ethan? She asked, eyes wide with hope. Ethan shrugged. Some weird antique store. Enid deflated instantly. Oh great. She forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. But I'm not going. I'm going to Pilgrim World to eat some fudge, Ethan said, as if it were the most logical decision in the world. He had no intention of spending his day dusting antiques when eating sugar was an option. You can do that? Enid asked, genuinely shocked. Principal Weems treated Outreach Day like a military operation. Yes, he can, Wednesday answered before Ethan could. He's a rich, loaded guy who sponsors the school. Enid blinked. He does. That means he's coming with us, Wednesday continued. So stop sulking. Enid's face lit up immediately. 31, Chapter 31, Pilgrim World. A/N. I've seen some readers asking for longer chapters. I do want to write longer chapters, but there's one issue: longer chapters take significantly more time. Writing, revising, proofreading, and polishing them properly can take 23 days, and I don't want the story's quality to drop because of rushed updates. That's why the current word count is usually between 800-1000 words. This lets me update more consistently while keeping the writing sharp and enjoyable. Thank you so much for your patience and understanding and for sticking with the story. The buses rolled into Jericho just after 10. Wednesday, Enid and Ethan stepped down onto the street, the town already dressed in its usual nauseating enthusiasm. Banners bearing the face of Joseph Crackstone hung from lampposts and shopfronts, his pilgrim visage staring down at them like an accusation. Jericho never missed an opportunity to worship its dead. Enid squinted up at one of the banners. Wow, they really love this guy. Fanaticism ages poorly, Wednesday replied, especially when the subject has been decomposing for centuries. Principal Weems gathered the students near the curb. Listen carefully, she said. You will proceed directly to your assigned volunteer locations. No wandering, no disappearing, and no skipping. Her eyes swept over the crowd, lingering just a second longer on familiar troublemakers. If I catch anyone avoiding their duties, Weems continued, they will be banned from Raven Night. No exceptions. A collective, horrified gasp rippled through the students. Nevermore's Raven Night was the equivalent of prom, an ordinary Skulson event wrapped in tradition, social pressure, and exaggerated emotional significance. To most adolescents, missing it was nothing short of a public execution. Wednesday, of course, remained unmoved. For any teenager invested in popularity, romance, or the illusion of belonging, Raven Night was sacred. Skipping it meant social exile, pitying looks, a fate worse than detention. To understand why such events existed at all, one would have to examine the origins of prom culture. We teenagers clung to it so desperately, why a single night was allowed to dictate their self-worth. But that kind of psychological autopsy was better saved for later. Wait, we were getting off the script. Let's return to the present before someone made a regrettable life choice. Ethan, are you sure you want to skip this volunteer work? Enid asked, lowering her voice. Being banned from Raven Night was a definite no-go for her, and if Ethan was banned, the question of who she would even go with became painfully real. Yes. You don't need to worry, Ethan said, his tone calm, almost dismissive. The Nevermore group arrived at Pilgrim World shortly after, the cheerful chaos of the place clashing violently with their collective disposition. Wooden buildings lined the streets, their artificial charm attempting and failing to romanticize a past built on intolerance and bloodshed. Wednesday paused the moment they stepped inside, her expression shifting from indifference to faint disbelief. She surveyed the fake storefronts, the staged gallows, the costumed performers smiling far too enthusiastically. People had not only decided to remember history like this, they had Monetized it. She found herself genuinely baffled by how stupid people had to be to build such a place. A theme park dedicated to glorifying pilgrims felt less like historical education and more like a public confession of poor judgment. One of the female pilgrims approached them, her dress stiff and immaculate, her smile practiced to the point of discomfort. Good morrow, my young Nevermore kin. I am Mistress Arlene, a real OC. The reaction was immediate and confused. Several students frowned, clearly trying to process what she meant by OC. Wait, what do you mean by OC? Someone muttered. Original colonist, Mistress Arlene clarified proudly, lifting her chin. A true daughter of Jericho's founding stock. The clarification did little to improve the situation. Now prithee, she continued, clapping her hands once for attention, put your cell phones on vibrate and make haste, for you are about to travel back in time to the year of our Lord 1625, to Jericho's first pilgrim settlement. They followed her as she began the tour of Pilgrim World. Yonder. Behold, the meeting house. Inside is a collection of artifacts related to Jericho's most beloved and pious founder, Joseph Crackstone. And beyond is our privy, Mistress Arlene added cheerfully, pointing toward a small structure at the edge of the path. America's first gender-neutral restroom. Wednesday immediately raised her arm. I have a query. Pray, be quick, child. In the meeting house, Wednesday asked, which of Joseph Crackstone's artifacts are on display? It is truly a treasure trove, Mistress Arlene replied enthusiastically, including original farm tools, tableware, even the Crackstone family chamber pot. Wednesday considered this. Sounds fascinating. I volunteer to work in there. She lowered her arm with finality. Learning more about Crackstone, especially from the very source Jericho worshipped so fervently, was the better option, and her goal was to know more about him. Mistress Arlene's smile tightened. Pray, no. That exhibit is being renovated. Wednesday's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Today, thou will all be working at the beating heart of Pilgrim World, Mistress Arlene announced, sweeping her arm toward the center of the square. Ye old Fudgery. Mistress Arlene clapped her hands sharply, reclaiming the group's attention. Volunteers, prick up thine ears. Fudge is the lifeblood of our humble community. And samples equal sales, so grab a uniform and a box and make our forefathers proud. Ye old Fudgery? More like ye old diabetes in a box, Wednesday thought. Her gaze drifted, deliberately and lingeringly, toward the meeting house in the distance. Just because someone said no did not mean she had given up. In Wednesday's experience, denial was usually an invitation. 32, Chapter 32, Ye Old Fudgery. Enid and Wednesday stepped out after changing into their Puritan costumes. Both wore the same black and white outfits, severe dresses with stiff collars and starched bonnets meant to drain all traces of personality. On Wednesday, the costume looked almost natural, as if it had been designed with her in mind. On Enid, it looked like a cruel joke. Her colorful hair struggled visibly against the bonnet, refusing to stay hidden. Well, you two look cute, Ethan said, pulling a camera out of his bag with far too much enthusiasm. Let me take a picture, give a sweet pose. Enid immediately brightened, adjusting her bonnet and leaning closer to Wednesday. Oh my gosh, yes, this is totally going on my wall. Wednesday did not move. She stared at the camera as though it were a weapon. I don't do sweet, she said flatly. It sends the wrong message. Ethan laughed anyway and raised the camera. Just one picture. He took the picture just as Mistress Arlene's voice cut sharply through the air, calling Enid and Wednesday back to their stations to sell fudge. Both girls were quickly swept away by the flow of tourists, leaving Ethan standing alone near the edge of the square. He glanced down at the camera screen, scrolling through the photos with quiet satisfaction. Then he felt it, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. He turned around. There was no one there, only wooden storefronts and passing visitors. But a second later, something else reached him. The faint, metallic scent in the air. Blood. Recognition flickered across his face. It seems she still hasn't learned her lesson, Ethan said softly, a smile curling at the corner of his mouth as he turned and began walking toward the source. Behind one of the wooden buildings, Laura Gatesnow, hiding under the false name Marilyn, pressed herself into the shadows. Her right arm was wrapped thickly in plaster of Paris, the cast stiff and unforgiving. You know, Ethan said, suddenly appearing beside her, his voice calm and conversational, you're really starting to annoy me. Why don't you just ignore me and do your work? Marilyn flinched violently, fear flashing across her face. He was the reason her arm was broken. The reason she was standing there like this. I am not following you, Marilyn said, her voice trembling. Ethan tilted his head, studying her for a moment before speaking again. Oh, then Wednesday, I assume? He asked casually. Yes, Marilyn replied, swallowing hard. Ethan smiled. Then it's fine, he said. And he walked away, leaving her frozen in place, uncertain what this man's deal truly was. She couldn't understand him at all. He spoke as if he knew her plans, yet he made no effort to interfere with them. That alone unsettled her more than open opposition ever could. She didn't want to know how he knew. She had followed him only to confirm her suspicions, to be certain that he truly had no intention of sabotaging what she had worked so carefully toward. Now that confirmation seemed complete, it appeared she could proceed. When her ancestor, Joseph Crackstone, rose from the dead as destiny intended, she would humiliate and destroy that blood-sucking mosquito herself. The thought brought her a twisted sense of reassurance. A vampire, no matter how confident, would never stand against Jericho's founding father. Faith had always been stronger than monsters, and history, once resurrected, had a habit of finishing what it started. In the fudge house, Wednesday stood in front of the fudge display, holding a tray of samples. A group of tourists approached. Without changing her expression, Wednesday began speaking in fluent German. Enjoy your authentic Pilgrim fudge, made with cacao beans procured by the oppressed indigenous people of the Amazon. The tourists blinked. What? One of them asked. All proceeds go toward upholding this pathetic whitewashing of American history. She paused, then added, also, fudge wasn't invented for another 258 years. She lifted the box slightly. Any takers? The tourists recoiled almost in unison. No, 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 they muttered, backing away amid a ripple of discontented murmuring. Enid stared after the retreating tourists, her confusion written plainly across her face. I don't know what you just said, she admitted, lowering her voice, but why does it seem like you scared away all the customers? We haven't sold anything since we started. Wednesday calmly set the box of fudge back onto the table. I merely stated the plain and harsh truth of fudge making and its history, Wednesday replied. Sometimes, knowing the truth makes it hard to swallow. But not for me, Ethan said casually as he appeared beside the table. He picked up one of the samples without hesitation and popped it into his mouth. Then another. He chewed thoughtfully, completely unfazed by the historical implications. I don't really care what kind of dark, colonial trauma this fudge is tied to, he added. It tastes good. That's enough for me. Wednesday watched him with mild curiosity, her gaze sharp and measuring. His indifference to context was either genuine or carefully performed. Enid leaned closer to Wednesday, lowering her voice. Wednesday, would you mind taking care of my position as well? She asked. I need to ask Ethan about Raven. Wednesday's eyes flicked toward Enid, then back to Ethan. For a brief moment, something unreadable stirred behind her calm expression. She said at last. I suppose I can. There was a subtle tension in her gaze as she reached for Enid's abandoned box, though her posture remained composed. Enid beamed. Thank you. You're the best. Before Wednesday could respond, Enid had already turned away, practically bouncing and appearing beside Ethan. Hey, I'm Ethan. She asked, rocking slightly on her heels. Would you mind taking a stroll with me? Just for a bit. Yeah, he said. I don't mind at all. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 48, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 33, chapter 33, what a burdensome duty. So, Ethan. Enid asked as she fell into step beside him. Do you have a date for Raven? Ethan wasn't exactly popular at school. His sharp mouth had seen to that. Still, Enid couldn't deny what everyone else quietly noticed said was handsome in an understated way, with a quiet, unsettling charm that made people curious despite themselves. It was hard to believe no one had asked him already. No, Ethan said, already aware of where the question was headed. He wasn't oblivious, not the kind of dense protagonist who needs 100 chapters to recognize someone's feelings. Enid inhaled, steadying herself. So you wouldn't mind going with me? A small smile curved at the corner of his mouth. Yeah, I'd like that. Her face lit up instantly, relief and excitement colliding. Raven Night. A date. The beginning of a very real teenage love story, at least in her mind. But before her thoughts could run too far, Ethan spoke again. But, Enid, he said, his tone gentler now, more deliberate, there's something you should know about me. Okay, she said, already bracing herself. I can tell how you feel, Ethan continued. I'm not blind. That made her stumble half a step. Oh, right, wow. She laughed softly, embarrassed. Note to self, stop wearing your feelings on your face. Since I know how you feel, I don't want to disappoint you, he went on. So you should know a few truths about me. She nodded, suddenly attentive. I come from a very wealthy family, Ethan said. Enid blinked. How wealthy? Enough to be on the list of the top 10 richest families in the country. She actually stopped walking this time. You're joking. I'm not. She hadn't expected that. Ethan never acted like a big deal who comes off from a rich family. If he was that rich, why was he at Nevermore at all? If it were her, she'd probably be at some fancy private academy with uniforms that cost more than her entire closet. That's a lot, Enid said finally, voice careful. It is, Ethan agreed. And it comes with expectations. I'm the last in my family line. Some responsibilities fall on me, especially when it comes to continuing it. That means Ethan hesitated, then said it plainly, I may be expected to have more than one wife. The words landed with weight because he hadn't rushed them. He'd prepared her for them. Enid didn't respond right away. She stood there, recalibrating the conversation she thought they were having. This was supposed to be simple. A walk, a Raven date, something light and new, not marriage, not obligations. They were still young. Why talk about adult things already? Why couldn't it just stay easy for a while? She knew outcast society wasn't unfamiliar with arrangements like that. It wasn't forbidden. It wasn't even rare. What unsettled her wasn't the idea itself. It was how soon it had entered the conversation. She looked at Ethan again, uncertain, but still listening. You probably think this is too fast, he said, reading her expression. And that's fair. I'm not asking you to decide on anything. I just didn't want to start something without being honest. And, he added, a small smile breaking through, I'm still really excited for Raven. Before she could respond, he stepped closer and pulled her into a brief, warm hug. It was gentle and reassuring over almost as soon as it began, yet lingering in the way it settled her nerves. And you should know, Ethan said as he pulled back, his smile soft but certain, once you're in my life, I'll treat you like a princess. Not figuratively, a real one. If you ever want something, I'll make sure you have it. Then, just like that, he turned and walked away. Enid stayed where she was. Her heart was still racing. Some of what he'd said lingered uneasily in her mind, but his sweetness made it easy to set those thoughts aside. Marriage was a problem for the distant future. For now, she could keep him to herself. After all, every girl wanted to be treated like a princess. When a prince appeared and made you feel special, your thinking dulled a little, Yule, more than a little. You stopped noticing the small things you should have questioned. Love, as they said, was blind. As Ethan walked away, his expression remained calm. Inside, it was different. The responsibilities, the family legacy, the expectations, bullshit, all of it. A carefully constructed cover for something far less noble. If he were honest, if he admitted he was selfish, that he simply wanted freedom and a harem of beautiful girls, she'd be judged, condemned, maybe even slapped on the spot. This was modern society. You didn't say things like that out loud. So he reframed it, wrapped desire in duty, disguised indulgence as obligation, made his wants sound like sacrifices he had no choice but to bear. It was easier that way. What a burdensome duty. If anyone actually knew, they'd tear into him immediately. Oh, this is the responsibility. They'd say, being rich and wanting multiple partners? Wow, truly heroic. Someone get him a medal. Enid returned with a noticeably cheerful expression. So, Wednesday said, eyeing her, I assume he accepted your stupid dance offer. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 49, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 34, Chapter 34, Eugene. You know, Ethan said slowly, staring at the scene in front of him, I don't even know what to ask. Except how. His gaze swept over the scene. Eugene stood at the center of it all, fudge smeared across his mouth, chin, and the front of his pilgrim costume. In front of him were Lucas, the mayor's son, and his two lackeys. All three were frozen in shock, their clothes completely ruined, splattered, streaked, and dripping with what looked disturbingly like fudge-coated vomit. The sticky mess clung to their pilgrim costumes and shoes, dark and glossy under the sunlight. Ethan blinked. Once. It wasn't just that they were covered in fudge. It was how thoroughly they were covered that made it unsettling, as if Eugene had detonated at close range. And somehow, disturbingly, he had produced that much fudge. The sheer volume alone felt unnatural. Ethan's stomach lurched. Oh. The smell hit him a second later, sweet, sour, and aggressively wrong. His enhanced senses betrayed him instantly. What might have been unpleasant to others was overwhelming to him, layered and cloying, crawling up the back of his throat. He swallowed hard, jaw tightening as he fought the sudden urge to vomit. What did you say, you freak? Lucas snapped, wiping at his sleeve and only making things worse as the mess smeared further. No, don't come near me, Ethan said immediately, backing away a step. You smell disgusting. Lucas froze. The insult landed harder than the mess itself. Lucas's face twisted with rage. Being covered in vomit was humiliating. Being called disgusting was unforgivable. His hands curled into fists, knuckles whitening as his breathing grew sharp and uneven. Guys, Lucas snarled, turning to his friends, let's beat this guy. The two lackeys exchanged a glance, anger overriding embarrassment. They clenched their fists and stepped forward, clearly remembering the last time they'd crossed paths with Ethan when he'd called them Boy Scouts selling cookies in front of Sheriff. That humiliation still stung. Ethan gagged softly. Ugh, he turned his head away, pressing a hand over his mouth. Seriously, this is a terrible idea. They didn't listen. Lucas snarled, and the three of them lunged at once. Ethan finally looked back at them, his expression twisting in pure disgust. He lifted one hand and flicked his wrist dismissively, as if swatting away something unpleasant. The effect was immediate. The three boys were thrown backward, feet leaving the ground as if an invisible force had hit them all at once. They flew through the air and crashed headfirst into a row of water barrels, disappearing with a loud splash. Slosh, slosh, splash. The barrels rocked violently, water sloshing over the sides as their legs stuck straight up, kicking uselessly. Ethan stared at the scene for a second, then sighed. See? He muttered. Terrible idea. The barrels finally tipped over, dumping the three of them onto the ground in a tangled, soaking mess. They lay there for a moment before scrambling upright, their pilgrim clothes drenched and their pride in ruins. Their stares were wild, now less angry, more shaken. Lucas looked down at himself, water dripping from his sleeves. One of the lackeys wiped his face, smearing what little dignity he had left. The humiliation had crossed a line they couldn't ignore anymore. Slowly, and with great reluctance, they came to the same conclusion. They couldn't beat the Frecon, they definitely couldn't stay like this any longer. Covered in vomit, soaked from the barrels, and feeling more disgusted by the second, the urge to strip off their clothes and scrub themselves clean was becoming impossible to ignore. Without another word, they turned and headed toward the edge of Pilgrim World, shoulders slumped, muttering under their breath. Before disappearing into the crowd, the three of them shot a hateful glare. Not at Ethan, at Eugene. After all, if that idiot hadn't thrown up in the first place, none of this would have happened. Eugene let out a long sigh of relief and finally relaxed. He turned toward Ethan, noticing somewhat belatedly that Ethan was wearing a Nevermore school uniform. That meant a fellow Nevermore student. Thanks for saving me, Eugene said, taking a step forward to thank him properly. No, Ethan said quickly, pinching his nose. Don't come any closer. Go clean yourself first. Eugene stopped mid-step. He glanced down at himself, taking in the fudge smeared across his clothes and the lingering smell clinging to him. He sighed again, this time in resignation. Yeah, he couldn't really blame Ethan. He definitely wasn't pleasant to look at or be near right now. Eugene nodded to himself and quickly headed off, clearly eager to clean himself up and escape any further humiliation. If you might answer, a calm voice said from behind Ethan, how is a vampire able to use telekinesis? Ethan paused. So you were watching, Wednesday? He asked as he turned around. Wednesday stood a few steps away, her expression unreadable, arms folded neatly against her black and white pilgrim dress. I don't recall telekinesis being listed among standard vampire abilities, she added flatly. 35, Chapter 35, Goody Adams. Who said a vampire can't have telekinesis? Ethan replied calmly. Just because modern vampires don't exhibit it doesn't mean they never did. Even in this world, there had to be a vampire progenitor much like the alphas among the werewolves. And even if modern outcasts had watered-down abilities, diminished by time and dilution, the progenitors would have been something else entirely. Monsters in the truest sense of the word. Wednesday studied him in silence, her expression unreadable. She said at last. You raise a valid point. Extinct bloodlines were not unheard of in outcast society. Entire species had vanished without a trace. Yetis, Cyclopes, their legacies reduced to footnotes and records. It was entirely possible that Ethan didn't belong to a common strain of vampire at all, but to something old, ran ancient vampire clan long extinct, erased in time that the modern world retained no record of it. That also clarifies my doubts regarding you, Wednesday said. She turned without waiting for a response. Follow me, she added. I may require your assistance. Ethan tilted his head slightly, curiosity flickering across his face, then fell into step behind her. The two of them stopped in front of the Pilgrim meeting house. The building was closed off, its doors secured by lock and clearly marked as under renovation. Wednesday examined the lock with mild disdain. Now, she said, gesturing toward it, use your monstrous strength and break the lock. Ethan stared at the door, then at her. Did you bring me all this way for manual labor? Yes, Wednesday replied without hesitation. She turned to face him, her expression flat but deliberate. You've been dropping hints about the monster in the woods since the moment we met. Subtle ones, irritating ones. Ethan raised an eyebrow. I've been forced to do most of the investigative work myself, she continued, so I assumed you wouldn't object to contributing something useful for once. A brief pause followed. Consider it restitution, Wednesday added, or community service. I didn't ask you to solve it, Ethan said. I only mentioned. It's the same thing, Wednesday cut in. You don't dangle a deer in front of a starving lion and expect it not to eat. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. Well, he admitted, I can't argue with that logic. He simply gripped the lock and applied pressure. There was a short, sharp crack as the metal snapped under his strength. He let the broken pieces fall to the ground, then stepped aside. Wednesday didn't comment. She simply pushed the door open. They stepped into the Pilgrim meeting house. The interior was plain and museum-like. Wooden display stands were arranged in precise rows, each capped with glass. Along the walls, cases showcased relics meant to glorify Jericho's past tools, books, carefully preserved artifacts. Everything was labeled, polished, and presented with almost obsessive reverence. At the center of the room stood a plastic model of Joseph Crackstone, frozen mid-sermon, his expression eternally righteous. Wednesday moved through the space slowly, her gaze sharp and methodical, as if expecting the exhibits to confess under pressure. While she examined the displays, Ethan's attention drifted to a large painting mounted on the far wall. The Old Meeting House, 1625. Wednesday, he said quietly, you should see this. She joined him, her eyes scanning the canvas then stopping. One figure stood slightly apart from the rest, a young woman, strikingly similar in appearance to Wednesday herself, a book clutched tightly in her hands. The same black book, the one from her vision, the one she'd seen outside Crackstone's crypt. A chill settled in her chest as recognition sharpened into certainty. This wasn't coincidence. The prophecy spoke of the dead Crackstone and of her. Now the girl from her vision stood captured in a painting from the same era as Crackstone himself. The connection was undeniable. If answers about her future existed, they weren't waiting ahead of her. They were buried in the past. That girl, Ethan said, is Goody Adams. Your ancestor. That's why she looks like you. Wednesday's eyes narrowed. And, as usual, she said coolly, you won't explain how you know my ancestor, someone I didn't even know existed. You're spot on, Ethan replied. And yes, I won't say. Wednesday studied him for a long moment, unimpressed. Sometimes, she said at last, I wonder what goes on inside that brain of yours and what your end goal really is. I already told you, Ethan replied, completely unashamed. A healthy teenage love relationship. Wednesday didn't blink. Didn't you accept Enid's Raven date? She asked. Yes. A beat. Scumbag, Wednesday said flatly. Well, I gladly accept that praise, Ethan said lightly. Unlike Enid, Wednesday wasn't someone you could fool with half-baked stories. With her, it was better to be direct. You seem to have no concept of shame, Wednesday observed. Well, Ethan replied, unfazed, I left it at home. It kept getting in the way of my dreams. Wednesday stared at him for a moment. Delusional, she said flatly. I have no interest in men, Wednesday continued. And even if I did develop one in the future, you would be at the very bottom of the list. Ethan's lips curved, amused. So, he said softly, stepping just a little closer, I am on the list. He met her gaze, close enough now that she could feel his presence 5 inches, no more. Wednesday didn't step back. She looked up at him, eyes sharp and unflinching. Don't flatter yourself, she said. I keep lists for efficiency, not hope. At that moment, Thing who had been searching quietly scrambled into view. He tapped insistently, then pointed toward a nearby display case. Inside rested the very same book from the painting. Wednesday walked over, opened the case, and lifted the book with care. Codex Umbrarum, she read. That's Latin for Book of Shadows. She opened it. The pages were blank. She closed the book with finality. Great, Wednesday said flatly. It's fake. Wednesday turned toward Ethan and noticed his expression hadn't changed, as if he'd expected the outcome all along. You knew the book was fake, she said evenly. Which means you also know where the real one is. Ethan met her gaze, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Never more. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 53, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 36, Chapter 36, Old Meeting House. The meeting house door creaked open abruptly. Mistress Arlene stepped inside, her pleasant reenactor's smile gone, replaced by sharp outrage. Just what the fudge are you doing in here, Missy? She demanded, her gaze snapping between Wednesday and Ethan. Nothing, Ethan said easily. The door was open, so we came in. Mistress Arlene's eyes narrowed. Didn't I proclaim that the meeting house is under repair? I know thou heard me. Wednesday didn't bother responding to that. Instead, she held up the book. Why is there a fake book in the display? She asked coolly. Do visitors know they're paying to see replicas? Mistress Arlene stiffened. Wednesday tilted her head slightly. Or is this the only fake thing here, she continued, or is the entire Pilgrim world an elaborate lie? Hold thy tongue, Mistress Arlene snapped, color rising in her cheeks. The original was stolen last month during the 2 o'clock witch trial reenactment. We replaced it to avoid panic. Pilgrim world depends on authenticity. You people wouldn't understand. Wednesday's eyes darkened. Authenticity, she repeated. Yet you hide the truth, display fakes, and lock the doors. Mistress Arlene bristled at the name. That book is none of your concern, Mistress Arlene said sharply. And neither is this room. True, Wednesday replied coolly. We're leaving anyway. I have nothing to gain from staying here any longer. She turned as if to go and stopped. The original meeting house, Wednesday said, glancing back over her shoulder, the one in that painting. Where is it? The question landed harder than the last. Mistress Arlene's expression flickered, irritation flashing through the rehearsed authority. How the hell should I know? She snapped. I only moved here from Scottsdale in April. There it was. Wednesday studied her for a brief, assessing moment. Truly authentic, she thought. She walked past Mistress Arlene without another word, Ethan falling into step beside her. Wednesday discarded the ridiculous Puritan outfit and walked out of Pilgrim world, the sounds of forced cheer fading behind her. Ethan walked beside her, unbothered. The original book was stolen a month ago, Wednesday said, her voice calm but precise. And you said the real book is at Nevermore. That means whoever stole it is someone from Nevermore. You're correct, Ethan said. It's someone from Nevermore. Wednesday didn't look at him as she continued walking, which narrows the suspect pool to outcasts with Achesan Motivito steal a book from Crackstone's era. She stopped. Then do you know where the original meeting house is? She asked. No, Ethan replied. I don't. Wednesday turned slowly and looked at him. Her gaze lingered just long enough to be uncomfortable. Interesting, Wednesday said at last. You've been remarkably informed about everything else until now. Ethan scoffed lightly. Do I look like a walking encyclopedia? Even I don't know everything. You can't expect someone to remember every minute detail from something they once watched on a show, so Ethan didn't remember where the meeting house was. Wednesday's expression didn't change. She clearly didn't buy it, but she allowed him to continue. But, Ethan said, I do know someone who knows where it is. As he spoke, Ethan recalled the one person who knew the location, another Nevermore student, notoriously eager to please Wednesday and far too willing to share what he knew when given the slightest encouragement. Who? Wednesday asked. Ethan's mouth curved into a knowing smile. Xavier. They arrived at the weather-vane CAF shortly after. The bell rang as they entered. The CAF was quiet, with only a few customers seated. The smell of coffee lingered in the air. Xavier was moving between tables, carrying a tray with 2 cups. He noticed Wednesday and stopped. Wednesday, he said, genuine relief bleeding into his voice. Didn't think you'd. Then he noticed Ethan. The smile faltered. Not vanished. Just cracked. Like a painting disturbed by an ugly brushstroke. His eyes flicked from Ethan back to Wednesday, searching her face for context that wasn't there. She gave him nothing. Ethan broke the silence first, pulling out his phone and opening a map. He held it up between them. Xavier, be a friend, he said lightly. And point out the location of the old meeting house on this map. Xavier's jaw tightened. Why should I? He asked, folding his arms. Last time we met, you called me a moron. And now you're asking for help from that same moron. There it was. The resentment he'd been holding onto, finally given permission to surface. Ethan winced slightly. Okay, yes. I might have said that, he admitted. But I'm not the one asking. He tilted his head toward Wednesday. It's Wednesday who needs the location. Xavier hesitated. Then, reluctantly, he reached forward and pointed to a spot on the map. There, he said. That's where the old meeting house is. He left his finger there a second longer than necessary. Wednesday, Ito, you already have someone to go with for Rav. He stopped. Wednesday had already left. Ethan watched the realization settle in. He closed the map and stepped closer, resting a hand briefly almost sympathetically on Xavier's shoulder. Xavier, he said quietly, give up. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 55, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 37, Chapter 37, The Truth, 1. As they walked through the woods toward the old meeting house, the silence stretched uncomfortably, unbroken by either of them. You know, Wednesday, Ethan said at last, clearly bored by it, why don't you ever use modern technology? Wednesday didn't slow her pace. Technology is unreliable, she replied. It crashes, malfunctions, and encourages intellectual laziness. Ethan glanced at her. Says the person currently benefiting from a digital map. I'm benefiting from your digital map, Wednesday corrected. There's a difference. The trees grew denser as they moved deeper into the woods. Besides, Wednesday continued, technology leaves trails. Footprints, timestamps, metadata. I prefer methods that don't. Ethan smirked. You realize most crimes are solved because someone didn't think like that. Yes, Wednesday said flatly. Criminals tend to be stupid. They walked on in silence for a few more steps. You don't find this inconvenient? Ethan asked. No cell phone. No calling, no internet. No, Wednesday said. I find it peaceful. She stepped over a fallen branch without breaking stride. I don't have to witness humanity begging for validation on social media, she continued. Endless oversharing, manufactured outrage, performative grief. Ethan glanced at her. You really hate people that much. I tolerate people, Wednesday corrected. I despise the noise they make. Thing, do you agree with that? Ethan asked, glancing at the disembodied hand perched on Wednesday's shoulder. Thing didn't hesitate. He shook his fingers emphatically. No, Ethan snorted. See, even your own hand needs Wi-Fi. Wednesday didn't look at either of them. Thing's weakness for modern conveniences is his greatest flaw. Then they emerged from the tree line and stopped. Ahead of them, the old meeting house came into view. What remained of it, at least. The structure sat hollow and blackened in the clearing, its roof long collapsed, its wooden frame warped by fire. Charred beams rose unevenly from the ground, silent and abandoned. Wednesday didn't hesitate. She stepped into the ruins, eyes already working, scanning the ground and what remained of the walls. Ethan stayed where he was, watching her pick through the debris without comment. Things slipped down from her shoulder and followed, tapping along the edges of collapsed wood and burned planks, searching places a person wouldn't think to look. After 15 minutes of searching, Wednesday straightened and surveyed the ruins one last time. There's nothing here, Wednesday said flatly. Just overgrown weeds and burned down wood. She turned away from the burned structure. Coming here was a waste of time. Wednesday turned to leave. The moment her hand touched the doorframe, her head snapped back violently. Her breath hitched, her eyes unfocused. The world fractured. Fire roared back to life around her hotter, louder. The burned meeting house was no longer empty. Shadows moved where none should be. A scream cut through the smoke, sharp and desperate. Wednesday's knees buckled as she fell backward. Ethan reacted instantly, catching her before she hit the ground. One arm slid firmly around her shoulders while the other braced her weight, steadying her as he lowered her carefully. He glanced down at her unconscious face. You're cute when you're unconscious, Ethan said. Thing stiffened, then signed sharply. Isn't she cute when she's conscious too? Ethan huffed softly. She is. But when she's conscious, she looks at me like she wants to dissect me. Thing paused, then nodded in agreement. Yes. Wednesday definitely had plans to figure out exactly what he was, preferably layer by layer. Thing, Ethan said thoughtfully, watching the hand's quick movements, how is it that I can understand you perfectly now? He paused, realizing the difference. When they'd first met, Thing's signs had been a mystery. Now, they felt obvious. Thing froze for a second, then signed back. How would I know? Ethan huffed a quiet laugh. Fair point. Within Wednesday's vision, the woods vanished. The meeting house stood whole again, timber, unburned walls, lantern light flickering against fresh wood. The air was thick with smoke that hadn't yet caught fire, heavy with fear and prayer spoken too late. Voices echoed. Outcasts were herded in sedamen, women, children hands bound, faces bruised, labeled monsters by people who needed enemies to feel holy. Joseph Crackstone stood at the entrance. Not frantic, not angry. Certain, he ordered the doors barred. Flames followed. Fire climbed the walls hungrily, feeding on dry wood and screaming voices. Smoke filled the room, choking, blinding. Then movement. A girl slipped through the chaos, blonde hair loose, eyes sharp and unafraid. She ducked beneath the smoke, vanished through a narrow opening before the flames could claim her. Goody Adams. A/N. The Patreon version is already updated to chapter 57, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 38, Chapter 38, The Truth, 2. In Wednesday's vision, the air turned cold unnaturally so. Goody Adams stood directly before Wednesday, her expression carved from dread rather than flesh. He won't stop, Goody warned, her voice urgent, as if carried forward from the past. Not until every one of us is dead. She turned back. He's here. The fog thickened, swallowing the ground, the trees, everything. Then a figure emerged. Joseph Crackstone stepped forward, his form bleeding out of the mist like a specter dragged from history. His eyes burned with fanatic certainty. There will be no escape, he said, his voice hollow and absolute. Not for you. Wednesday gasped. Her eyes flew open, the vision releasing her all at once. Oh, Ethan said quietly. He was closer than she expected, looking down at her. Did you see it? The truth behind Outreach Day. What it actually represents. What happened 400 years ago? Wednesday didn't answer right away. She became aware of her position instead. She was in Ethan's arms and Thing stood on his shoulders. Her body stiffened, barely noticeable before she straightened, extracting herself with swift, efficient movements, as if collapsing into someone else's hold were an inconvenience rather than a vulnerability. Yes, she said evenly. I saw it. Crackstone didn't build Jericho, Wednesday continued. He purged it. Outreach Day isn't a celebration. It's a commemorative lie, constructed on the deaths of countless outcasts. That's the real history of Jericho, Ethan said. Joseph Crackstone wasn't a pious pilgrim or a visionary. He was a psychopath. If anything, he was the greatest psychopath in the entire story, responsible for the deaths of hundreds of outcasts, ordered with scripture in one hand and fire in the other. They turned a massacre into a festival, Wednesday said. Costumes, fudge, smiling reenactments, a spectacle designed to make genocide feel quaint. Her gaze drifted back toward the ruins of the meeting house, remembering the screams her vision had forced her to witness, outcasts burned alive for the crime of existing. Tradition, she concluded, is just violence that's been sanitized by time. History is written by the winners, Ethan added quietly. And in this case, Crackstone won. So the truth was buried. History was imperial. It didn't concern itself with morality-only outcome. Jericho remembered Joseph Crackstone as its founder, not as the fanatic who ordered a massacre. Because he won. And when a man wins, history softens his crimes, polishes his name, and calls him a benefactor instead of what he truly was. That, Wednesday said, turning to face Ethan, her eyes sharp and unflinching, is where I disagree. She stepped forward, voice precise. History may be written by the victors, she continued, but it isn't immutable. Lies survive only as long as no one challenges them. A beat. And I find this one particularly offensive. She looked back toward Jericho, toward the festival still celebrating a butcher. So let's correct the record. Movement caught her eye. Between the broken wooden beams of the meeting house, something shifted. From one of the charred gaps, a large eye opened unblinking, inhuman, watching. Wednesday stiffened. She had seen that eye before. Ethan followed her line of sight, his expression sharpening as he caught a glimpse of it through the broken wood. Oh, he muttered. So he has been tailing us. The eye lingered for a fraction of a second longer, cold, aware, calculating. Then it vanished. Follow it, Wednesday said immediately. She didn't wait for agreement. She took off toward the ruins, boots crunching over ash and debris. Ethan followed as she traced the path the creature had taken into the trees. Footprints. Large. Irregular. Inhuman. Wednesday crouched, examining them closely as they cut through the dirt. Then she stopped. A few steps farther on, the tracks changed. The clawed impressions softened. The stride shortened. The weight distribution shifted. Human. Wednesday straightened slowly. That monster is human, she said. Wednesday turned slowly toward Ethan, her gaze narrowing with precision. And you said it's been following us, she added. He has been following us, which means you already know who it is. Ethan didn't deny it. He only gave a small, knowing shrug. Yeah, he said. If you want, I can tell you who it is. Wednesday's expression hardened not with curiosity, but with irritation. No, she said immediately. I prefer to find out myself. She stepped past him, eyes fixed on the trail where the human footprints disappeared into the woods. Answers given are never as satisfying as answers earned, she continued. And confessions are unreliable. Evidence isn't. Ethan watched her for a moment, then smiled faintly. You really don't like shortcuts. I don't trust them, Wednesday replied. They usually lead somewhere I didn't choose. And when I exposed the monster, she added, I wanted to be because it couldn't hide anymore, not because someone handed me the truth. Ethan let out a quiet breath, watching her disappear a few steps ahead into the trees. That's Wednesday for you, he said, glancing at the small hand perched on his shoulder. Don't you agree, Thing? Thing didn't hesitate. He nodded firmly. 39, Chapter 39, Unaccepted. Back in the town square, everything was being prepared for the unveiling ceremony. A crowd gathered in front of the stage, townspeople buzzing with excitement as cameras and phones were raised. Banners celebrating Founders Day hung from every lamppost, and at the center of it all stood a statue, Joseph Crackstone. The mayor stood near the stage, straightening his notes as he prepared to deliver his speech. Beside him was Principal Weems, her posture rigid and deliberate, a carefully staged image meant to signal unity between Jericho and Nevermore. A performance of cooperation. On one side of the square, the Jericho High Band stood assembled in their uniforms, instruments ready, waiting for the cue to begin. Their presence was loud, polished, and unmistakably local. And then there was the exception. Wednesday Addams sat among them. Her cello rested between her knees, endpin planted firmly against the ground. Dressed in black, she looked entirely out of place, silent, still, and utterly uninterested in the festive atmosphere surrounding her. This wasn't her idea. It had been Principal Weems's. A symbolic gesture, no doubt. Nevermore contributing culture to Jericho's celebration. A reminder that the outcasts were cooperative, civilized, harmless. Wednesday accepted the assignment without protest, which, in hindsight, should have concerned everyone. Because while Weems thought she was orchestrating diplomacy, Wednesday had clearly planned something else entirely. And when she played, it wouldn't be to honor Joseph Crackstone. The mayor stepped up to the podium, tapping the microphone once before offering the crowd a practiced smile. Friends, neighbors, and honored guests, he began, his voice carrying easily across the square. Today, we gather to celebrate the legacy of Jericho's founder, a man of faith, vision, and unwavering conviction. He was a man who believed that with a happy heart and an open ear, there was nothing our town couldn't achieve together, the mayor continued, his voice warm with rehearsed sincerity. A man of faith, of vision, of conviction. So today, the mayor said, gesturing toward the covered statue, as one united community and alongside our friends at Nevermore Academia, we have come together to honor that legacy. Principal Weems inclined her head, the picture of cooperation. This monument stands as a symbol of unity, the mayor went on, of shared values, of a history that binds us all. He paused, letting the moment swell. And now, he said solemnly, may the spirit of Joseph Crackstone be memorialized for eternity. The band began to play, the familiar, cheerful tune filling the town square as planned. The mayor reached down and pressed the button. At once, the fountain surrounding the statue activated. Water surged around the base of the monument, cascading in smooth, rhythmic arcs. The crowd responded immediately, applause, smiles, phones lifted to capture the moment. The mayor beamed, clearly pleased. Cameras flashed as reporters documented the scene, the flowing fountain, the covered statue, the united front of Jericho and Nevermore standing together for the unveiling. At the back of the crowd, Ethan stifled a yawn. The music, the applause, the speeches, it all blurred together into a single, exhausting performance. He glanced down at Thing, who waited beside him on the ground, fingers twitching with impatience. Thing, Ethan murmured, I still on the stage, go do your thing. I can't watch this farce anymore. Thing slipped away without hesitation, vanishing into the crowd. Everything was already in place. The fountain no longer held water. During the chaos of setup, it had been quietly replaced with fuel hidden beneath reflections in stone, disguised as part of the display, and leading away from it, nearly invisible. A fuse. A thin trail of black powder snaked across the ground, laid earlier with careful precision. It began well away from the crowd, then wound back toward the base of the statue. Thing crouched at the trail's beginning. He raised the matchstick launcher and aimed. FSSSH. The match sparked. The flame caught instantly and raced along the powder with a sharp, angry hiss, snaking across the ground faster than anyone could react. A few heads turned. What's? The fire reached the fountain. Boom! The fountain erupted in flame. Fire blasted upward in a violent roar, curling around the statue as heat slammed into the square. The cheerful music died instantly, replaced by screams and the sharp crack of burning fuel. Fire! Oh my god, run! Get back, get back! People stumbled over one another, scrambling backward as flames surged higher, wrapping the statue completely. The mayor yelped and bolted from the podium, abandoning his speech mid-step. Principal Weems spun around, shouting orders as she tried to corral the students. The band scattered, instruments dropped and clanging against the pavement as he chased them back. Smoke billowed upward, thick and choking, as the statue of Joseph Crackstone disappeared behind a wall of fire. The lies burned loudly, and through it all, a cello sang, low, steady, unshaken. Wednesday sat perfectly still, bob gliding across the strings, a faint smile tugging at her lips. The music cut through the screaming crowd and crackling flames, dark and deliberate, as if she were conducting the chaos herself. Amid the chaos, one figure wasn't running. Ethan stood among the retreating crowd, his eyes fixed on the statue as flames licked around its base. The heat shimmered in the air. The metal groaned softly as it warmed, its surface beginning to soften under the fire. A smile crossed his face. Now it's my turn, he said quietly. Telekinesis rippled through the bronze. There was no explosion, no flash, just the slow, unmistakable sound of metal warping. The softened bronze twisted under an invisible force, bending where it shouldn't. Gasps rippled through the onlookers who noticed too late. The upper portion of the statue shifted, folding in on itself. Fingers emerged from the distortion, stretching, reshaping, until the hand took form. One finger rose higher than the rest. A middle finger. Someone in the crowd stared, stunned. Is that? Another voice followed, louder. That's a middle finger. Fitting, Ethan muttered. A/N. The Patreon version is already updated to chapter 59, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 40, Chapter 40, Aftermath. The aftermath of the Outreach Day incident spread through Jericho with remarkable speed. The fire itself was bad enough. The statue deforming into a raised middle finger was unforgivable. Residents gathered in clusters across the town square and along the streets, voices raised in outrage. Phones replayed the footage endlessly. Everyone knew what it meant. Everyone knew who it had to be. Outcasts. But knowledge wasn't proof. No one could name who had done it. No one could point to a specific face, a specific student. And this wasn't the 17th century anymore. Jericho couldn't respond the way it once had. There would be no trials, no burnings, no righteous mobs with torches. So the anger had nowhere to go. It turned into shouting, into accusations, into fingers pointed uphill, at nevermore. Across the grounds, inside the main building, the reaction was quieter and far more dangerous. Principal Weems stood in her office, posture rigid, her expression carefully controlled. Reports lay scattered across her desk. Complaints, demands, thinly veiled threats disguised as concern for community relations. She didn't need to read them closely. She already knew the problem. This hadn't been impulsive vandalism. It hadn't been chaos for chaos's sake. It had been calculated, symbolic, executed with precision. You too, Principal Weems said coolly, her gaze fixed on the pair seated across from her desk. Care to explain why you were smiling when that incident occurred? Wednesday and Ethan sat side by side, the only two students in Jericho who hadn't screamed, run, or panicked. I was smiling, Ethan replied easily, because the statue turned into a middle finger. It was funny. Weems's eyes narrowed. Jericho is threatening formal complaints, sanctions, and a renewed investigation into Nevermore's involvement. Ethan shrugged. They're welcome to investigate. Art is subjective. Weems shifted her attention to Wednesday. And you? Wednesday met her gaze without blinking. I smiled, she said evenly, because it was accurate. Silence settled into the room, thick and uncomfortable. That monument celebrated a mass murderer, Wednesday continued, her voice calm, precise. Seeing it reduced to its most honest form was refreshing. Weems inhaled through her nose, slow and controlled. You understand, she said, that optics matter. Nevermore survives because it appears cooperative. Cooperation, Wednesday replied, doesn't require complicity. Weems studied her carefully. You didn't deny involvement. I didn't confess either, Wednesday said. You asked why I was smiling. I answered. Ethan leaned back slightly, folding his arms. For what it's worth, he added, the crowd reaction was priceless. Weems shot him a warning look. This town is angry, Weems said. And when Jericho gets angry, it looks for someone to blame. Wednesday's expression didn't change. They always do. She leaned forward just enough to make the point unavoidable. Just like they did before, she continued. Outreach Day doesn't commemorate unity. It commemorates the day Joseph Crackstone burned outcasts alive, women, children. Her gaze never left Weems. You knew that. You know who Crackstone really was. And yet you still push us to smile and shake hands with the descendants of people who haven't changed at all. Weems's jaw tightened. I know what happened, she said carefully. But that was the past. We can't live there forever. In the present, we work toward improving our relationship with Jericho. There is no improvement, Wednesday replied. They still see us as monsters. They just use better words now. The silence that followed pressed down hard. Weems measured her conviction weight against consequence. Progress, she said at last, is rarely comfortable. Neither is denial, Wednesday answered. Her voice never rose. You may be comfortable maintaining this illusion of peace, she continued, but I'm not. I will find the answers I seek even if it means confronting this town, its history, and everyone who benefits from pretending none of it happened. Weems straightened. Wednesday, you're a student of Nevermore. Your actions reflect on this institution. They never have, Wednesday replied. They reflect on the truth people are trying to bury. A beat. Weems exhaled slowly. You're playing a dangerous game. I know, Wednesday said. That's why I'm winning. Ethan leaned forward, then stood. Principal Weems, there's no evidence linking either of us to the incident. I'm a vampire. Telekinesis isn't exactly standard issue, and Wednesday doesn't have it either. He adjusted his jacket. So we'll be taking our leave since neither of us is responsible. Wednesday rose as well, already turning toward the door. Weems's voice stopped them. I don't tire easily, she said coolly, and I will be watching both of you very closely. I won't tolerate any further incidents. Ethan paused, then glanced back. I think it's a mistake to assume it's always outcasts who cause problems, he said evenly. You might want to keep an eye on the normies too. A faint smile curved his mouth. Sometimes they're far more monstrous than we are. Weems didn't respond. She didn't need to. The door closed softly behind them, leaving Principal Weems alone with reports she didn't need to read, and a truth she couldn't ignore. Some problems weren't being caused. They were being exposed. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 60, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 41, Chapter 41, Plans. As Wednesday returned to her room, the door closing behind her with a soft click, she immediately noticed Enid sprawled across her bed, flipping through her phone. The moment Enid saw her, she squeaked and practically launched herself off the mattress. Wednesday. Enid blurted out. Why did the principal call you? Wednesday set her bag down with deliberate calm. Because Jericho prefers its atrocities commemorated, not corrected, she said. Enid blinked. So then. She wanted an explanation, Wednesday replied, removing her coat. I provided one she didn't enjoy. Enid hovered closer, eyes wide. You're not expelled, are you? Disappointingly, no. Enid let out a relieved gasp. Oh thank goodness, because for a second there I thought wait, was this about the statue? Because everyone's freaking out. Like, full panic mode. Wednesday glanced at her. As they should. Enid hesitated. You didn't do anything, right? She winced, lowering her voice. I mean, what kind of psychopath ruins an event like that and turns a statue into that? Wednesday regarded her calmly. The kind you asked to Raven, Wednesday thought. And the one currently standing in front of you. Outwardly, she said nothing. Instead, she removed her coat and placed it neatly on the back of her chair. Jericho has a long history of honoring psychopaths, Wednesday replied. One more shouldn't surprise you. Enid stared at her. That is not an answer. It wasn't meant to be, Wednesday said, sitting down at her desk. Enid sighed and perched on the edge of the bed. I was thinking of going shopping in Jericho for my Raven dress, but now she trailed off. I don't even know how people are going to react when they see us. Wednesday didn't look up. Their reactions are irrelevant. That's easy for you to say, Enid muttered. You like being stared at. I tolerate it, Wednesday corrected. There's a difference. She finally glanced at Enid. You're not doing anything wrong by existing. If they choose to glare, that's their failure, not yours. Enid hugged a pillow to her chest. And if I don't like being glared at, then ignore them, Wednesday said flatly. Or stare back. Most people crumble when confronted with their own hostility. Enid blinked. You make it sound so easy. It is, Wednesday replied. Enid's phone buzzed. She glanced down, eyes lighting up as messages from Yoko and the others flooded in. Oh, group chat's already exploding, Enid said. Everyone's freaking out. Wednesday barely acknowledged it. Her attention had already shifted. She turned toward Thing, Wednesday said, lowering her voice, search Nevermore. Watch the students. See if anyone is behaving unusually. Thing paused, attentive. According to Ethan, someone from Nevermore stole the Book of Shadows, Wednesday continued. And the monster is human. That makes a student the most likely suspect. Thing signed quickly. You think the thief and the monster are the same? Yes, Wednesday replied without hesitation. The book was stolen a month ago. The murders in town started shortly after. It's possible they're the same entity or working together. Either way, the pattern overlaps too neatly to ignore. Thing flexed his fingers, eager. So keep an eye on everyone, Wednesday said. No exceptions. Thing gave a sharp, decisive nod. On it. Wednesday had already begun forming another plan. If the monster was choosing its victims deliberately, then the pattern wouldn't be random. She intended to visit the Jericho mortuary and examine every victim herself, its injuries, locations, circumstances. Something had drawn the creature to them. Something consistent. Across the academy, in a room far less composed, Marilyn Thornhill was unraveling. She paced back and forth, fury radiating off her as she grabbed the nearest object and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the wall, pieces scattering across the floor. Those wretched outcasts, she shouted, breath sharp with rage. How dare they do that to my ancestor? Her good hand clenched into a fist. The other still injured hung stiffly at her side, a constant reminder of past failures. And that blood mosquito, she spat. He's going to be a problem. She stopped pacing. Direct confrontation wasn't an option. Marilyn's expression shifted as a thought took shape. Her anger cooled into something sharper, more dangerous. A smile crept onto her face. Yes, she murmured. That will work. If she couldn't confront him outright, she would corner him another way, put him somewhere he couldn't interfere, somewhere he couldn't act, somewhere he'd be forced to watch. Her gaze hardened. Plans didn't have to be loud to be effective, they just had to hurt. Back in his room, Ethan noticed a box resting on his bed. The return label caught his eye. Uncle Mike. A slow smile spread across his face. Looks like Uncle Mike sent what I asked for. He opened the parcel. Inside were neatly packed glass tubes, cushioned in foam. Each one was sealed, labeled, and filled with dark liquid. Blood. The blood of many outcasts. It's time for my blood points rise, Ethan thought, staring at the vast amount of blood ready to be recycled. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 63, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 42, Chapter 42, Ethan's Arrest. The next afternoon, Nevermore's quad was filled with its usual noise, students talking, moving between tables, going about their routines. Wednesday sat with her tray untouched, occasionally glancing down at her notebook. Enid was eating and chatting as usual, seemingly unaware of anything beyond her own conversation. Ethan ate quietly, his attention drifting across the grounds. Then things shifted. A few conversations stopped. Several students looked up. 2 police officers stepped onto the quad, their uniforms standing out against Nevermore's darkstone. Walking between them was Sheriff Galpin. Enid paused mid-bite. Why are there police at school? She asked quietly. Police? Ethan said, turning to look. He spotted Sheriff Galpin, and Galpin noticed him almost immediately. The sheriff changed direction, boots crunching softly against the gravel as he headed straight for their table. The 2 officers followed a step behind. His expression was set, professional, unsmiling, and clearly not here for a casual visit. Nearby conversations thinned, then stopped altogether. Wednesday closed her notebook with deliberate calm. Well, she said evenly, this is inconvenient. Sheriff Galpin stopped in front of the table. The quad had gone quiet now, attention drawn to the uniforms without anyone needing to look twice. Ethan Corvin, Galpin said, voice level and official, you're under arrest. The words landed heavily. Enid's fork slipped from her fingers and struck her tray. Arrest? She echoed, barely above a whisper. For what? Galpin didn't look at her. For murder. Silence spread across the quad. Students stared openly now, disbelief giving way to low, confused murmurs. Murder. Someone said. Enid pushed herself halfway up from her seat. That doesn't make sense. He's been here. Galpin reached for his cuffs. You have the right to remain silent. Ethan stood before he could finish. May I see the warrant? Ethan asked calmly. And I'd like to know what evidence places me at the scene. His tone wasn't defiant, only controlled. He genuinely didn't understand how he had become a murder suspect when he hadn't done anything at all. Galpin regarded him for a moment, then reached into his jacket. Here. He handed over the document. Ethan read it, careful, like seal, the signatures, the language. It was legitimate. Galpin didn't wait for a reaction. You are under arrest, he said, voice steady and procedural, for the murder of Kinsey Hayes, a resident of Jericho. The victim was killed intentionally. We have evidence placing you at the scene. Ethan looked up slowly. Evidence, he repeated. That's thorough. Incorrect but thorough. Galpin stepped forward and snapped the cuffs around his wrists. You can argue that downtown, he said. Right now, you're coming with us. Ethan didn't resist. The cuffs clicked shut, and the deputies guided him across the quad. For a moment, the space felt suspended, as if the school itself had stopped breathing. Students stared. Whispers spread, confused, uneasy. This wasn't detention. This wasn't discipline. This was an arrest. Enid stood frozen, eyes locked on Ethan as he was led away. Wednesday. She whispered. If this is some kind of nightmare, I'd really like to wake up. Wednesday didn't look at her. Her gaze followed Ethan until he disappeared from view. This isn't a nightmare, she said calmly. Nightmares tend to exaggerate. This is very precise. They were almost at the entrance when a voice cut through the murmurs. Sheriff. Principal Weems stood at the top of the steps, posture straight, expression carefully neutral. You are arresting one of my students on school grounds, she said coolly, without notifying my office. Release him. Galpin stopped and turned. I have a warrant, he replied evenly. He gestured to the deputies, then continued. We also have video footage placing him near the site around the estimated time of death. His school uniform was recovered at the scene. That makes him our prime suspect. Weems's eyes moved briefly to Ethan's composure, the cuffs, the lack of struggle. Circumstantial, she said. At best. Enough to bring him in, Galpin replied. He'll have every chance to explain himself. Weems held his gaze for a long moment. You will follow protocol, she said at last. And Nevermore will be informed of every step. Galpin nodded once. Of course. The deputies guided Ethan into the back of the patrol car. The door closed with a heavy thunk. Galpin paused before getting in, his eyes catching Ethan's in the rearview mirror. What unsettled him wasn't defiance. It was the calm. You think someone's coming to save you? Galpin asked. Because they're not. Not the mayor. Not Nevermore. You'll answer for what you've done. Ethan met his gaze, unbothered. Sheriff, he said evenly, don't confuse restraint with helplessness. If I wanted to leave, I could. Then why stay? Ethan leaned back, the chains clinking softly. Because whoever set this up wants me right where I am, he said. They worked hard for this. A faint, humorless smile touched his mouth. I'd hate to ruin it, he added. Too soon. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 64, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 43, Chapter 43, Investigation. That night, Wednesday and Enid slipped out of Nevermore and made their way to the edge of Jericho, stopping in front of the victim's house. Yellow police tape stretched across the front door, fluttering faintly in the wind, a warning meant to be obeyed, not questioned. Enid shifted beside her, pulling her jacket tighter. Wednesday, are you sure we should be doing this? She whispered, eyes darting toward the dark windows. I mean, there's police tape. That usually means don't. Wednesday didn't answer. She was already kneeling at the door, lock-picking tools in hand, working calmly at the mechanism as if unlocking it were routine. The faint click of metal was the only response Enid received. The door opened. Wednesday rose and stepped inside without hesitation. Yes, she said flatly. I have doubts. Enid blinked and hurried after her. Doubts about what? About the evidence, Wednesday replied, scanning the interior. About the timing, and about why Ethan was framed so neatly. They stepped into the hall. The scene before them was brutal. A white outline marked where the victim had fallen, stark against the floor. Blood spattered the walls and pooled across the tiles. Furniture lay overturned, and the air carried a heavy metallic scent that lingered long after the violence had ended. Enid froze. Her face went pale as she took it in, one hand flying to her mouth. Oh my God, she whispered, swallowing hard. To think I'm going to throw up. Wednesday barely reacted. Her eyes moved methodically over the room, tracing patterns in the blood, noting what had been disturbed and what hadn't. She murmured. This is one of the messiest crime scenes I've ever seen. Enid forced herself to look away from a dark smear near the wall. So do you think Ethan did this? She asked quietly. She didn't think Ethan could do such a thing. Wednesday didn't hesitate. No, she said flatly. She stepped closer to the center of the room, crouching slightly. If Ethan had committed a murder, there wouldn't be this much chaos. There wouldn't be anything left to examine. Enid blinked. That's not reassuring. It's logical, Wednesday replied. With his strength, it would have ended instantly. A snapped neck. Minimal struggle. Minimal blood. She gestured to the walls. This was excessive. Deliberate. Performed for effect. Enid processed that, her shoulders relaxing just a little. So she said softly, a hopeful smile breaking through, he's innocent. Yes, Wednesday said, but someone wanted him to look guilty. The questions followed immediately. Why? What would anyone gain by putting Ethan in prison? And why now, of all times? Her mind replayed recent events with cold precision. Ethan fighting off the monster, interfering repeatedly, helping her investigate the old meeting house. The pattern clicked into place. The timing fits, she thought. The monster couldn't face him directly, so they removed him another way. If you can't overpower a threat, neutralize it. Which meant this crime had been committed either by the monster itself or by someone working with it. And if that were true, then something here had been overlooked. Something the police had missed. Wednesday turned sharply. Enid, search for anything that feels out of place. Enid flinched. Anything out of place? She repeated, glancing at the bloodstains, the overturned furniture, the shadows pooling in the corners. Because everything here feels out of place. Wednesday was already moving. Start anyway, she said. Criminals always leave something behind. Especially when they're trying too hard. Enid swallowed, hugging herself as she took a hesitant step forward, reminding herself that all of this was for Ethan, that proving his innocence. Wednesday searched the house methodically, moving from room to room, eyes sharp, hands careful. She found nothing, no stray fibers, no overlooked footprints, no sign of a struggle that hadn't already been catalogued. Whoever had done this had been careful. Too careful. It was clear the perpetrator had gone to great lengths not to leave a trail. Then, Wednesday. Enid's shout cut through the silence. Wednesday turned and crossed the house quickly. Enid stood by the window, frozen, eyes fixed on the broken window. Claw marks gouged into the frame, deep, uneven, unmistakable. Wednesday leaned closer, examining them. My suspicion was correct, she said calmly. This was done by the monster I saw in the woods. It broke in through this window. Enid frowned. Then why didn't the police investigate this? Because they weren't looking for the truth, Wednesday replied. They were looking for a conclusion. When authorities find evidence that fits their assumptions, they stop questioning it. They don't examine a case from every angle, they just want it closed. Enid's shoulders slumped. So Ethan was convenient. Yes, Wednesday said, and convenience is the enemy of justice. She glanced back at the claw marks. But this, she added, is something they couldn't explain away. Her gaze lingered on the window framing, then sharpened. Caught on one of the splintered shards was a small, dark smear. Dried, almost missed entirely if you weren't looking for it. Blood. Not enough to matter to the police. Enough to matter to her. She murmured to herself. This must belong to the monster. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 66, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 44, Chapter 44, New Abilities. On Ethan's side, he sat on the narrow bench inside the holding cell, his orange prison uniform stark against the gray concrete. He whistled softly, an aimless tune, as if he were waiting for a bus instead of locked behind bars. Sheriff Galpin stopped in front of the cell. You can smirk all you want, he said. In 2 days, you'll be standing in court, and when that happens, you'll get the punishment you deserve. Ethan stopped whistling and looked up, tilting his head slightly. Am I? He asked. Galpin didn't appreciate the tone. We have evidence. Video footage. Your uniform was at the scene. Juries don't like coincidences. Ethan leaned back against the wall, unfazed. Juries also don't like being lied to. Galpin stepped closer to the bars. You think you're smarter than this system? No, Ethan replied evenly. But I am stronger than it. Galpin frowned. My uniform can be stolen, Ethan continued. And that CCTV footage? It was taken at night. My face isn't visible. Those 2 points alone are enough for a judge to dismiss the case on grounds of insufficient evidence. While I'm sitting here, the real murderer is still roaming free. That gave Galpin pause. You think you're helping my investigation now? Galpin asked. I think you're wasting time on the wrong suspect, Ethan replied calmly. And the longer you do, the more bodies you'll have to explain. Galpin held his stare for a long moment, searching for cracks. Finding none, he straightened. Save it for the judge, he said finally. He turned and started to walk away. And Sheriff, Ethan added evenly, one final warning. Galpin stopped. You'd better keep an eye on your son. The words landed hard. Galpin turned slowly, eye sharp. You watch your mouth. Ethan smiled as he watched the sheriff leave. So much for containment, he thought, glancing toward the small barred window set high on the wall. Moonlight slipped through, pale and inviting. A night stroll wouldn't hurt. His vision flickered. A familiar interface unfolded before his eyes. Status window. Name, Ethan Corvin. Age, 18. Race, pureblood vampire, evolution possible. Physical parameters. Punch force, 50 tons. Speed, 300 km/h. Durability, skin resistant to small caliber bullets. Stamina, unmatched. Telekinesis, 10 tons. Abilities. Bat transformation. Blood lightning. Regeneration. Minor injuries, instant recovery. Major injuries, accelerated healing. Partial immortality, cannot die as long as the body remains intact. Weaknesses, none. Blood points, 7,200. The interface dimmed. Last night when he recycled the outcast's blood, the system had rewarded him generously. The bat transformation came from a shapeshifter's essence efficient, versatile. The blood lightning had manifested after absorbing the blood of a spark outcast. Raw energy refined into something far deadly. Let's go see what everyone else is doing, Ethan murmured. Black mist curled around his body, thick and silent, swallowing him whole. For a brief moment, there was nothing just shadow and motion. Then the mist shifted. From its center, a bat burst free, wings snapping open as it darted toward the barred window. It slipped effortlessly through the gaps and vanished into the night. Cold air rushed past as Ethan took to the sky. It really does feel good to fly, he thought, adjusting instinctively as his wings caught the wind. The world below shrank quickly, roads, rooftops, streetlights blurring into distant shapes. As Ethan flew low over the edge of town, two familiar figures caught his attention. That can't be. He slowed midair, banking slightly. Wednesday and Enid were moving toward the Jericho mortuary. Ethan frowned. Of course they are. He adjusted his course and descended. On the ground, Wednesday had already removed the outer screws of an air vent, working with the same calm focus she applied to everything illegal. The metal cover loosened with a soft scrape. Wednesday, Enid whispered urgently, glancing around the empty lot. Can't we come back tomorrow? It's night, and this is a mortuary. What if we see something you know? Strange. Wednesday tugged the vent free. We already broke into a house where someone died, she said flatly. Another one won't cause lasting psychological damage. That's not comforting. Wednesday ignored her and peered into the opening. We're here to inspect the monster's previous victims. I want to know if the previous ones had anything in common. Enid hesitated. Like hobbies? Blood types? Favorite colors? Patterns? Wednesday replied. Murderers are repetitive. Before Enid could respond, a voice spoke from the darkness. You two shouldn't be here. Enid jumped. Wednesday we re-caught. She spun around, heart racing. There was no one there. No, the voice said again, closer now. But what are you doing here? Wednesday looked up at the direction of the sound. Perched on a tree branch above them sat a bat, wings folded neatly, black eyes fixed on the pair. Enid stared. Wednesday, she whispered, is it just me, or did that bat talk? Yes, Wednesday said calmly. And you should find the voice familiar. Enid squinted up at it, realization dawning slowly. Ethan. The bat tilted its head. Yep, it's me. Enid let out a strangled sound. Why is the vampire a bat now? A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 68, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 45, chapter 45, Shock and Jealousy. Enid stood there, completely dumbfounded, her mouth hanging slightly open as her brain refused to process what her eyes were seeing. A vampire turning into a bat? That wasn't how vampires worked. This wasn't a movie. Bat transformations were folklore, not biology. Her thoughts scrambled for anything that made sense. Okay, I'm just stressed, she told herself. Ethan got arrested. I've been worrying about him non-stop. My brain is clearly filling in the blanks. That had to be it. Stress hallucinations. Perfectly reasonable. Probably even common. She nodded faintly, convincing herself. The bat didn't talk. I imagined that part. I'm projecting. Slowly, she turned toward Wednesday, hoping desperately that she would confirm reality was still intact. It's not your imagination, Wednesday said calmly. Enid froze. Wednesday hadn't even looked surprised. She hadn't needed to. She simply glanced at Enid's face, which apparently had broadcast every panicked thought in high definition. You went from disbelief to denial to self-gaslighting in under 5 seconds, Wednesday added. It was transparent. Enid swallowed. So I'm not losing my mind. No, Wednesday replied. This is happening. Enid looked back up at the bat, then slowly at Wednesday, as if hoping one of them would tell her this was a prank. "So you're Ethan?" she asked cautiously. "Yep," the bat replied. "In the flesh." Before Enid could react, the bat leapt down from the branch. Midair, black smoke coiled around it, thick and fast, swallowing its shape. The wings folded into shadow, the form stretching and reshaping. And then Ethan stood there, the smoke dissipating around him. He was still wearing the orange prison uniform. Enid stared. She stared a moment longer. Then, cautiously, Enid stepped forward and poked Ethan in the arm just once, like she was testing an unstable reality. "Solid. Very solid." "Oh," she said faintly. "No need to doubt it," Ethan replied, stifling a yawn. "I'm real. I just took a temporary break from my cell." Enid's eyes widened further, somehow finding room to do so. You can turn into a bat." She glanced upward, as if expecting wings to sprout again. I thought that only happened in movies." "He can do many things you don't know," Wednesday said calmly. Enid snapped her head toward her. "You knew he could do that?" "No," Wednesday replied. "But I wouldn't be surprised if he could." Enid stared at Ethan again, something between awe and concern flickering across her face. "That's actually kind of amazing." Ethan shrugged. "Perks of the condition." He looked between them, finally taking in the vent, the tools, the building looming behind them. "So," he asked, "what exactly are you two doing here? And why are you breaking into a mortuary?" "We came to find proof that you're innocent," Enid said quickly, a cheerful smile breaking through despite everything. "Like, actual proof. The kind that clears your name." Ethan blinked. "Why?" Enid faltered. "Why?" The smile faltering. She hadn't expected the question. "In 2 days, I'll be out anyway," he said evenly. "Ha!" Enid looked genuinely confused now. "The CCTV footage they have shows someone roughly my height and build," Ethan explained. "It was dark. My face isn't visible. And the only physical evidence they found was my shirt." He met her gaze. "That's not enough. A judge will call it inconclusive and dismiss the case." Enid frowned. "But, so technically," Ethan continued, "this is inconvenient, not dangerous." Enid crossed her arms, clearly unconvinced. "Okay, maybe legally you'll be fine. But emotionally? Socially? You were arrested in front of the entire school." Ethan sighed, then reached out and gently patted her head. "Why should I care what they think?" he said calmly. "I know I didn't murder anyone. That's enough." Enid blinked, momentarily caught off guard by the gesture. "Oh." A few steps back, Wednesday watched the exchange. An unfamiliar sensation twisted in her stomach, sharp, unpleasant, and completely unwelcome. She dismissed it immediately. Irritation, perhaps, or nausea. Either explanation was preferable. She cleared her throat. "If you can stop displaying public affection," Wednesday said coolly, "we're standing in front of a mortuary, not a therapy session." Enid flushed. "It's not public affection." "It is," Wednesday replied. "And it's nauseating." Ethan's lips curved slightly. "Really?" he said. He let the moment linger, his gaze settling on Wednesday. The look on her face was unmistakable jealous. He chose not to comment. Wednesday would never admit it, so he diverted the conversation. "You're sneaking into a mortuary in the middle of the night to prove I'm innocent. I didn't realize I held such importance in your heart." He opened his arms, mock dramatic. "Come on. I'm touched." Wednesday sidestepped him effortlessly before he could get any closer. "Don't take advantage of the situation," she said coolly. "I'm only doing this for my investigation." She shot him a warning look. "You happen to be collateral." "Okay. In that case, I suppose I should say thanks," Ethan said. "You can keep it," Wednesday replied. "I can tell you're not taking this seriously. Even when the police arrested you, you had that same smile. If my assessment is correct, you're just playing along." "I have to say," Ethan said, "you're almost right." "Almost?" Wednesday asked. "When you see a child trying to pull a prank," Ethan replied calmly, "do you stop them immediately, knowing they'll fail? Or do you wait?" Wednesday didn't answer. "This is the same," Ethan continued. "I'm waiting. When the time comes, I'll deal with whoever is behind all of this." He wasn't worried. Ethan was only waiting for one thing: the resurrection of Joseph Crackstone. That was the moment that mattered. Recycling Crackstone would earn him more blood points than anything else in this town. Until then, Marilyn's actions were tolerable. As long as she didn't cross his line. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 68, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 46, Chapter 46, Dance Invitation? The trio slipped into the mortuary one by one. Wednesday went first through the vent, landing lightly inside. Enid followed with considerably less grace. Ethan paused, assessed the opening, then shook his head. "That's not happening," he muttered. In a blink, black mist curled around him. A bat emerged and darted through the vent, wings folding neatly as it dropped into the room. A moment later, the mist gathered again, reshaping into Ethan's human form. The mortuary was quiet. Fluorescent lights hummed faintly overhead. Stainless steel surfaces reflected cold, distorted versions of them. Along one wall, a security camera stared blankly, pointed uselessly toward concrete. Wyatt was facing the concrete instead of the room. Ethan had already turned it that way earlier with his telekinesis. Enid's attention slowly drifted to the far wall, where rows of metal doors lined the surface. She pointed, hesitantly. "Are there bodies in those?" Enid asked, pointing uncertainly at the row of metal doors lining the wall. "This is a mortuary," Wednesday replied flatly. "What were you expecting? Seasonal decorations." Enid grimaced. "I was hoping for less confirmation." Unfazed, Wednesday had already moved on. She crossed the room and opened the office door at the back, stepping inside. Her eyes immediately swept over the shelves and filing cabinets, cataloging everything in seconds. She began pulling files, flipping through them with practiced efficiency. Ethan leaned against the doorway, watching her work. "By the way," he asked, "where's Thing?" "He's conducting his own investigation," Wednesday said without looking up. She gathered several folders reports from previous monster victims, along with the most recent file belonging to the victim whose murder had been pinned on Ethan. She skimmed through each one carefully, her expression sharpening as patterns began to form. She took copies of the files for her investigation. Then she moved on. Wednesday crossed back into the main mortuary, stopping in front of one of the metal drawers. She gripped the handle and pulled. The freezer slid open with a low scrape of metal. Inside lay the body, pale beneath the harsh fluorescent lights, wrapped and motionless. Cold air spilled outward as the drawer extended fully. Wednesday's gaze sharpened immediately. It was a female victim. She leaned closer, eyes tracing the injuries with detached focus. On the right side of the waist, partially obscured, was a clean incision. She paused. "That's not from the claws," Wednesday said quietly. "The edges are too precise." She studied it a moment longer. "This looks like it was made with a surgical blade." She slipped on her gloves without comment and pressed gently around the wound, examining the damage with careful precision, checking for signs of tampering or anything that had been taken. Behind her, Enid had gone very still. "Ew," she managed. That was as far as she got. Her knees buckled, and she tipped sideways. Ethan reacted instantly, catching her before she hit the floor. He steadied her, lowering her carefully against his chest. "She's out," he said calmly, checking her breathing. "Just fainted." He looked up at Wednesday. "What did you two do before coming here?" "Nothing unusual," Wednesday replied. "We broke into a crime scene and searched a murder house." Ethan blinked. "Right," he said. "That explains it." For someone who had never seen blood or anything remotely like these, it was far too much to process in a single day. Like that, Wednesday examined the remaining bodies. Each drawer told the same story. Missing organs, clean incisions, no tearing, no hesitation marks. Every removal was precise. Surgical. She stepped back, folding her arms. "This monster isn't acting on impulse," Wednesday said. "It's like a serial killer. One that collects trophies. And whoever it is has medical knowledge." She turned as she finished speaking and stopped. Ethan was standing a few feet away, Enid cradled in his arms in an unmistakable princess carry. Enid was still unconscious, her head resting against his shoulder, breathing steady. Wednesday stared at them for a moment longer than necessary. "Why?" she asked flatly. "Are you carrying her instead of waking her up?" Ethan glanced down at Enid, then back at Wednesday. "For my happiness." "Your happiness," she repeated. "Do you have nothing in your head except teenage hormones?" Ethan smiled, unapologetic. "Multitasking exists." Wednesday scoffed. "You're incapable of taking anything seriously for more than 5 minutes. "That's not true," Ethan replied. "I take murder very seriously." She should have dismissed it. Instead, she felt something twist in her chest, sharp, irritating, and entirely unwelcome. Annoyance, she told herself. Purely annoyance. Yet her gaze lingered again on the way Enid rested against him so easily. How natural it looked. She didn't like that feeling. She liked even less that she couldn't immediately name it. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Jealousy doesn't suit you." "I'm not jealous," Wednesday snapped. The speed of the response irritated her further. She turned away abruptly. "Wake her up. We're leaving." Ethan adjusted his grip slightly but didn't move. "You know," he said casually, "you should admit your feelings instead of boiling them inside. If you keep doing that, they tend to burst." Wednesday turned her head just enough to look at him. "If I had feelings worth admitting," she said coolly, "you wouldn't be standing there diagnosing me." Ethan smiled, not denying it. "Noted. And irrelevant," Wednesday added. He shrugged, unfazed. "By the way, do you have anyone for the Raven dance?" Wednesday's expression didn't change. "Why would that concern you?" "I was thinking of asking you out," Ethan said. She paused, just long enough to acknowledge it. "Aren't you going with Enid?" "Who says I can't go to Raven with 2 girls?" Ethan replied. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 70, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 47, Chapter 47, Xavier. They slipped out of the mortuary as quietly as they had entered. The night air outside felt warmer by comparison. Once they were clear of the building, Wednesday turned to Enid, who was still unconscious. Without hesitation, Wednesday reached out and pinched Enid's nose shut. Enid jolted awake with a sharp gasp. "Ah, Wednesday. You were unconscious," Wednesday said calmly. "I fixed it." Enid sputtered, clutching her chest. "You suffocated me." Briefly, Wednesday replied. "And effectively." "Normal people use water," Enid said, rubbing her nose. "Or, I don't know, gentleness." "Use your brain," Wednesday replied. "It's the end result that matters, not the process." Enid opened her mouth to argue, then thought better of it. Ethan stepped back, already loosening his shoulders. "Well," he said, "I should return to prison. I'll be out in 2 days just in time for Raven." "Wow," Enid said, forcing a smile. "That's very you." She waved anyway. "Bye." Ethan gave a short nod, then his form dissolved into black mist. A bat emerged, wings snapping open as it lifted into the night and disappeared over the tree-line. Wednesday watched it go. Her gaze lingered longer than necessary, sharp and intent, following the shape until it vanished completely. "Wednesday," Enid asked slowly, "why are you looking at him like that?" What would happen, Wednesday said thoughtfully, if a bat's wings were severed? What part would he lose? Enid froze. No, absolutely not. You are not cutting off his wings. How can you even think about that? It's curiosity, Wednesday replied calmly. Not intent. She paused, though the distinction is occasionally flexible. Enid stared at her. You're terrifying. Yes, Wednesday said, but thorough. They walked back to Nevermore in silence. Wednesday briefly thought of Ethan's invitation to the dance, but the thought withered and died almost as fast as it came. She had no intention of subjecting herself to such frivolous torture. The next day began like any other at the academy, quietly, deceptively normal. In the botanical sciences greenhouse classroom, humid air clung to the glass walls, and rows of carnivorous plants twitched lazily in their pots. Sunlight filtered through the ceiling panels, casting warped shadows across the work tables. At the front of the room, Marilyn Thornhill lectured about poisonous hybrids and their adaptive traits, gesturing fluidly with her uninjured arm as though nothing had ever been taken from her at all. Wednesday barely listened. Her attention drifted, sharp eyes scanning the room out of habit rather than boredom. Students leaned over their workstations, whispering, scribbling notes. Then she saw it. Xavier sat a few rows ahead of her, shoulders tense. When he shifted, the collar of his uniform slipped just enough. 3 marks. Thin, parallel, angry red, claw marks. They disappeared again as the fabric settled back into place, but Wednesday had already seen enough. Her gaze lingered on the back of his neck, mind moving faster than her pen ever could. Fresh, poorly hidden, and definitely not an accident. Those are definitely strange. No one gets wounds like that by accident. They're claw marks. I should trail him. If he's linked to the monster, he'll lead me straight to it. When the class ended and students began filing out, Thing appeared at her side, hopping lightly onto the table. He signed quickly, efficiently. He had found nothing unusual. No erratic behavior. No suspicious movements. Except one thing. Xavier. Thing gestured. He sometimes goes to an abandoned shed. No one else uses it. Wednesday's eyes sharpened. She murmured. Where is it? Thing hopped down and scuttled ahead, leading her away from the main paths of Nevermore. They stopped in front of a small, weather-beaten shed. Its paint had peeled down to bare wood, the hinges rusted, the windows clouded with grime, which made it a perfect hiding place. Wednesday scanned the area once, confirming they were alone, then stepped forward and grasped the handle. The door protested softly as she pulled it open. Stale air rolled out to meet her. The shed was dim, its single bulb casting a sickly glow over shelves crammed with abandoned supplies, dried brushes bristling like dead insects, paint-soaked rags stiff with old color, canvases leaning together. Then Wednesday saw it. A painting board stood near the back. Wednesday recognized the image instantly. Thing. This is ith monster from the woods, she said, studying the painting. The details were unsettlingly precise, too accurate to be the product of imagination. It looked as though the artist had seen the creature firsthand. She turned around to see similar paintings of the monster staring back at her. Thing signed a question. What are you thinking? If Xavier is the monster or connected to it, Wednesday said, thinking aloud. Why would he paint something this obvious? It practically begs for suspicion. Thing signed again. Maybe it's just a hobby? Perhaps, Wednesday conceded. But hobbies rarely incriminate their owners. She turned away from the paintings, her eyes sweeping the shed. Help me find a hair sample. Or blood. Brushes, rags, anything we can compare to what we found at the murder house. Thing nodded and immediately got to work. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 70, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 48, chapter 48, Doubts and Innocent. Wednesday stood in Sheriff Galpin's office, hands folded neatly in front of her. Galpin barely looked up. Adams, if you're here to see your classmate, he's in a holding cell, not my office. No, Wednesday said evenly. I'm here to show you evidence that the monster I saw is real. She placed the painting on his desk. Galpin picked it up, studying the image in silence. His jaw tightened slightly as his eyes traced the details. Who drew this? He asked. I can't say, Wednesday replied, but I have blood samples. One belongs to the monster. The other belongs to a suspect. I need you to run a comparison. Galpin set the painting down and leaned back. Do I look like I work for you, Adams? You don't get to give orders here. No, Wednesday said calmly, but you do want to find the thing that's killing people. And this is your opportunity unless you're uncomfortable that a 16-year-old uncovered more about the monster than you have. Galpin's expression hardened. For a long moment, he said nothing. Finally, he exhaled. Fine, I'll run the test. He pointed a finger at her. But if they match, you give me the suspect's name. No games. Agreed, Wednesday said. She placed 2 items on his desk, a cloth stained with blood taken from Xavier, and the glass shard holding the monster's blood. Galpin looked down at them, then back at her. You're awfully confident. I don't rely on confidence, Wednesday replied. I rely on results. She turned and walked out without waiting for dismissal. Behind her, Galpin stared at the evidence a moment longer than he intended. Then he reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a photograph crime scene documentation that hadn't been released to the public. It was a close-up, grainy but unmistakable. The monster's face, caught mid-motion by a camera. He held the photo beside the painting. Same contours, same eyes, same unmistakable shape. Wednesday left the sheriff's office and went directly to the holding cells. Ethan was still there, sitting behind the bars with the same relaxed posture, as if nothing of importance had changed. He looked up when she stopped in front of the cell. She told him what she had found. The shed, the paintings, The blood samples. Xavier, her first suspect linked to the monster. She watched his face carefully as she spoke. When she finished, Ethan nodded once. "Oh," he said. "Is that so? Nothing else?" Wednesday frowned. "That's all you have to say?" "It fits," Ethan replied calmly. "From your perspective, the evidence points toward Xavier." He stood, stepping closer to the bars. "But sometimes the truth we believe is just a convenient lie." Wednesday's eyes narrowed. "You're missing something," Ethan continued. "Motive. If Xavier is connected to the monster or is the monster, what does he gain? Have you actually followed that line of thinking?" Silence hung between them. Wednesday's expression shifted, not frustration, but recalibration. "You're right," she said at last. "The motive doesn't align." She studied him closely, searching his face for deception and finding none. "Then I'll take my leave," Wednesday said. "It seems I overlooked certain variables. I should revisit the evidence." She turned without waiting for a response, already recalibrating her theory as she walked away. Behind the bars, Ethan watched her go, his expression unreadable. "She's getting close," he murmured to himself. "It won't be long before she figures out what a hide really is and what it takes to awaken one." It wouldn't be long before Crackstone was resurrected. The next day, Ethan was escorted to the Vermont court for his trial. He was taken there early in the morning, handcuffs secured, deputies walking him through the routine procedures without incident. The process was orderly and uneventful, paperwork checked, names confirmed, doors opened and closed as expected. Inside the courtroom, Ethan was seated quietly while the legal formalities began. The charge was read, the case summarized, and the evidence listed: CCTV footage taken at night, a uniform recovered at the scene, circumstantial details presented as fact. Ethan listened without interruption. When the prosecutor finished presenting the footage and the brief summary of evidence, a man seated beside Ethan rose calmly from his chair. Henry. He was composed, well-dressed, an unhurried kind of lawyer who didn't waste words or movements. He adjusted his cuffs once before speaking, voice steady and precise. "Your Honor," Henry said, "I request that the court review the footage once more." The judge looked up from the bench. "On what grounds, Mr. Henry?" "Clarity," Henry replied. "The city's case relies heavily on this video. I believe it deserves closer examination." The judge nodded after a brief pause. "Proceed." The screen flickered to life again. The footage played grainy, dark, a figure moving through shadows. The outline was vague, the face obscured, details lost to poor lighting and distance. Henry stepped slightly forward, hands folded behind his back. "As the court can see," he said evenly, "the individual's face is never visible. Height and build alone are not identification, especially not beyond reasonable doubt." He turned just enough to address the jury. "This could be anyone," Henry continued. "The prosecution wants you to believe similarity equals guilt. That assumption is not evidence." He paused, then gestured toward the screen. "And there's something else the police seem to have overlooked," he said. "This footage only shows someone leaving the house. It does not show anyone entering," Henry went on, "which raises an obvious question. If this individual entered secretly, without appearing on any camera, why would he suddenly leave in full view?" He let the silence work for him. "If someone knew how to avoid the cameras while entering," Henry said evenly, "there is no logical reason they wouldn't leave the same way. Unless, of course, this person wasn't the killer at all, just someone placed there to be seen." Henry turned slightly toward the jury. "That gap matters," he said, "because gaps create doubt, and doubt is not something the law allows you to ignore." Henry straightened slightly. "So, Your Honor," he continued, "I ask that this footage be dismissed as credible evidence. It does not establish entry, it does not establish identity, and it certainly does not establish guilt beyond a reasonable doubt." He gave a brief, respectful nod toward the bench. "At best, it shows a person leaving a location." Henry didn't pause for long. "Now, moving on to the next piece of evidence," he continued, voice steady. "My client's clothing allegedly found at the scene." He turned slightly toward the prosecution's table. "I have a question," Henry said. "Did the police recover anything besides my client's clothing? Fingerprints, DNA, hair fibers, blood traces that conclusively match my client?" The prosecutor cleared his throat and stood. "No," he said, after a brief pause. "We did not recover fingerprints, DNA, or any additional forensic evidence linking the defendant directly to the crime scene." Henry nodded once, as if he'd expected nothing else. "Thank you," he said calmly. "That answers my question." He turned back toward the judge. "So to be clear," Henry continued, "there is no biological evidence tying my client to the victim. No fingerprints, no DNA, no blood, only clothing which, as established, could have been planted." "In light of that," he said, "the prosecution's case rests entirely on assumptions, and assumptions are not evidence. So, Your Honor, under American law and the principle of innocent until proven guilty, I ask this court to recognize what is plainly before it," he said. "My client is innocent." A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 74, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 49, Chapter 49, How to Annoy a Sheriff. The judge leaned back in his chair, eyes moving slowly between the two tables. "I have reviewed the footage, the physical evidence, and the arguments presented," the judge said evenly. "The prosecution has failed to establish probable cause sufficient to sustain these charges." He glanced down at the file once more. "The video does not identify the defendant," he continued. "The clothing recovered is circumstantial and unsupported by forensic evidence. No fingerprints, no DNA, no biological material connects Mr. Corvin to the crime." A pause. "Under the law, suspicion is not proof. The judge looked directly at Ethan. This court finds that the evidence is insufficient to proceed. The charges against the defendant are dismissed, effective immediately. The gavel came down once. Mr. Corvin is free to go. The judge paused, then continued, his tone firm. This court further orders the sheriff's department to continue its investigation and identify the individual truly responsible for this crime, he said. Justice is not served by convenient arrests. He glanced briefly toward the prosecution's table. I also expect that future actions taken by law enforcement will be conducted responsibly, the judge added, without unnecessarily aggravating tensions between the outcast community and the public. The gavel struck once more. Court is adjourned. Ethan smiled at the judgment, the expression small but unmistakable. The handcuffs were removed, metal clicking softly as they fell away. He flexed his wrists once, casual, while Sheriff Galpin stood nearby, his posture rigid, discomfort written plainly across his face. You may have escaped today, Galpin said, voice low and tight, but I will find the evidence. And when I do, I'll put you back behind bars. No, Henry said calmly, stepping in before Ethan could respond. Galpin turned toward him, irritation flashing. Henry didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Anyone with a functioning brain can see this was a framing, he said evenly. And if you continue pursuing my client without evidence, you won't just lose another case, you'll invite scrutiny into your department. Ethan glanced between them, mildly amused. I'll be around, Sheriff, he said casually. Try not to disappoint the court again. Galpin's stare followed him as Ethan turned and walked away. As they walked out of the courthouse, the tension finally easing, Henry shook his head. Ethan, I don't understand you, he said. You spent 2 days in a cell. Why didn't you call me the moment you were arrested? I could have challenged that warrant immediately. Nah, Ethan replied casually. I was enjoying myself. Didn't feel the need. Henry stopped walking and stared at him. Enjoying yourself? Yes. Henry sighed, rubbing his temples. I will never understand what you find entertaining about incarceration. He straightened his jacket and exhaled. All right, my job here is done. He extended a hand briefly. If you need me again, call, preferably before you decide jail time is a vacation. Ethan shook his hand once. I'll keep that in mind. Henry walked off toward his car, still muttering under his breath. As Henry walked off toward the parking lot, Ethan watched him and paused. He checked his prison uniform pockets. Empty. No wallet. No cash. Nothing he could use to get back to Jericho. Huh, he muttered. Across the lot, Sheriff Galpin was climbing into his car. Ethan sighed and headed over, timing it just right. He rapped his knuckles lightly against the driver's window. Galpin stopped, clearly irritated, and lowered the window just enough to glare at him. What? The sheriff asked. Nothing dramatic, Ethan said easily. My clothes should still be in your office, and I don't exactly have a ride back to Jericho. He tilted his head slightly. You wouldn't mind giving me a lift, would you? Galpin stared at him, disbelief flashing across his face. You've got nerve, he said. I've been told, Ethan replied. But I'm also unarmed, recently acquitted, and currently stranded. A long, uncomfortable silence followed. Galpin exhaled sharply through his nose. Get in. Ethan smiled faintly. Knew you were reasonable. As he opened the passenger door and slid inside, Galpin muttered, This doesn't mean I trust you. Ethan leaned back in the seat. Good, he said. I'd be offended if you did. The car pulled out of the lot, heading back toward Jericho. People inside it, neither convinced the story was over. The car rolled forward in tense silence for a few minutes. Ethan broke it casually. So, Sheriff, he said, looking out the window, any updates on the serial killings? The ones done by the monster. Isn't that one of your fellow students? He replied, eyes fixed on the road. No, Ethan said calmly, but I do know what it is. A monster called Hyde. The sheriff's grip on the steering wheel stiffened. Do you know anything about hides, Sheriff Galpin? Ethan asked. The car screeched to a sudden stop. Tires shrieked against asphalt as Galpin slammed the brakes, the force jerking Ethan forward slightly in his seat. The engine idled loudly in the silence that followed. Galpin turned slowly, his face hard, eyes sharp with something that wasn't just anger. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 75, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 50, chapter 50, Denial Has a Pulse. Sheriff, Ethan continued calmly, I'm an outcast. Of course I know what a Hyde Iceven if modern outcast society prefers to believe they're extinct. Galpin's eyes stayed on the road, but his breathing had changed. Slower. Controlled. But they're not extinct, Ethan said. Not here. Not now. There's a Hyde in Jericho, and it's the one doing the killings. The silence stretched. Galpin's jaw tightened. His hands gripped the wheel a little harder. Ethan watched him from the corner of his eye. He could tell Galpin wasn't hearing this for the first time. He already knew what a Hyde looked like. He had seen it with his own eyes. He had watched his wife lose control. Postpartum depression. Isolation. The transformation. A Hyde didn't awaken without a catalyst. And once awakened, it didn't choose violence, it answered it. You know, Ethan said quietly, Hydes don't just appear. Someone unlocks them. Which means, Ethan added, this isn't just about a monster. It's about who's controlling it. He turned his head slightly toward the driver. So, Sheriff, you don't happen to know a Hyde, do you? Galpin didn't answer. He stared straight ahead as he restarted the car, the engine rumbling back to life. How would I know anything about you outcasts? The sheriff said shortly. Your kind keeps its secrets. Ethan watched him for a beat, then spoke again calm, almost casual. Yeah, he said. How could you know? A pause. It's not like you had a wife who was a hide. The car lurched. Galpin slammed his foot down, pulling over hard to the side of the road. He turned slowly, fury and something far more raw flashing across his face. Don't, he said, voice low. You don't get to talk about her. Ethan met his glare without flinching. I'm just saying it was a joke, he said calmly. There's no reason to get this angry. And, Sheriff, Ethan continued, the hide condition is hereditary. If the mother had it, there's a possibility the child inherited it. The words hung in the car. Ethan already knew the truth Galpin refused to say out loud. The sheriff had seen his wife lose control, had watched her become something she didn't understand and couldn't stop. Ever since, the thought had lingered in the back of his mind like a disease he was afraid to name. Was it passed on? That fear was one of the reasons he kept his distance from his son. Grief had hardened him, but suspicion had done the rest. Love mixed with dread was a volatile thing, and Galpin chose distance over certainty. Humans were good at that, refusing to see the truth when it wore the face of someone they loved. Even after Wednesday placed the image of the hide in front of him, Galpin had refused to connect it to his son. As a father, he couldn't. As a man, he wouldn't. To him, monsters were always other people, never his own blood. If you want a ride, shut up until we reach Jericho, Sheriff Galpin said as he started the car. Okay, Ethan replied easily. He leaned back against the seat, satisfied. He'd said what he wanted to say. Not to enlighten, just to provoke. To poke at the cracks Galpin worked so hard to seal shut. The engine hummed as the car pulled back onto the road. Ethan stared out the window, watching trees blur past, his expression unreadable. People never refuse the truth because it's unclear. They refuse it because it hurts. Ethan wondered idly, almost amused at how the sheriff would react when denial finally failed him. When the truth stopped being a theory and started breathing in front of him. Like that, they reached Jericho. The car pulled in front of the station, and Ethan stepped out without another word. Inside, his belongings were return clothes, phone, everything accounted for. Routine, cold, impersonal. At the doorway, he paused and glanced back. Goodbye, Sheriff, Ethan said. And one final thing, soon the truth about that monster will come out. And when the time comes. He didn't finish the sentence. He turned and walked out, leaving the implication hanging in the air like smoke. Outside, Ethan stretched his arms, rolling his shoulders as if shaking off an inconvenience rather than 2 days of confinement. He smiled to himself. It's always fun, he muttered, watching people's faces darken when you disturb the lies they're clinging to. With that, he headed down the street free, unbothered. What he didn't know was that 3 figures were watching from a distance, half hidden behind a row of parked cars. Their eyes followed him with open hatred. Those weirdos ruined Outreach Day, one of Lucas's lackeys muttered. They turned the Joseph Crackstone statue into that. Yeah, another agreed, jaw clenched. They humiliated the whole town. Lucas stood between them, arms crossed, his expression tight and calculating rather than loud with anger. Relax, he said. We're not done yet. Both lackeys looked at him. We stick to the plan, Lucas continued. We let them think they won. A slow, mean smile crept across his face. And then, he said, we ruined their raven. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 76, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon.
Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I have decided to create a collection of fanfiction novels in audiobook format. If you would like to access the collection, you can purchase it through one of the following platforms. Patreon or Ko-Fi. You will find both links in the description. After completing your payment, you will automatically receive a link to a private Telegram channel that has a great collection of fanfiction audiobooks in audio format. This is a one-time payment that grants lifetime access to the existing collection. Please note that the collection is continuously expanding. I regularly add new audiobooks over time, so the library keeps growing. If you would like to update a novel or add a new one, you must subscribe to my Patreon. Depending on the tier you select, you will be able to request a specific number of chapters weekly, which I will then produce in audiobook format.